The sun, high at its zenith, is incredibly hot, making the stay in this place even more unpleasant. These gritted teeth warriors are not really happy to be here, but they have no other choice. The monster towering over them is allied, and as if to confirm this, roars. The monster continues to roar, showing with his whole appearance that he is ready to rush into battle right now. And somewhere in the crowd, the whistle of a weapon cutting through the air can be heard, aimed precisely at the enemy's vulnerable spot. When its master achieves his goal, the defeated one lets out a gurgling, pain-filled wheeze and freezes. These sounds continue to escape from his throat for some time while the man digests what is happening. His opponent is silent at this moment, not making a single sound, but he looks as if he is waiting for something. When the right moment arrives, he pulls out the sword with one sharp movement, causing the body to fall. And although this man looks impenetrable on the outside, if you listen closely, you can hear his ragged breathing. His potential opponents, seeing such an unflattering picture, call their opponent a monster. The same one, not reacting to these words, swaying, takes a few steps forward, trying to overcome exhaustion. This does not escape the warriors' notice, and they, noting that their enemy is exhausted, incite each other to kill him. At this moment, the young man, trying to stay conscious, thinks that his heart is about to break. He is really very tired, and every new breath is incredibly difficult for him. The boy makes a mental comparison, comparing the process of breathing to drawing a blade across his throat. He thinks that he can no longer tell what is now rolling down his body like hail, whether it is sweat or blood. And at this moment, his opponents continue to rapidly approach with warlike cries. The guy admits to the thought that all his feelings are screaming about one thing, that what is happening is not just graphics. While he activates his hidden traits, his opponents taunt each other, suggesting that they attack at once. Their screams do not subside, continuing to sound incessantly throughout the area, and they indicate that the guy is exhausted. And the last thought that the young warrior allows himself to have is that what is happening to him is reality. And somewhere in a completely different place and time, in a modern apartment, the sounds of clicking a mouse are heard. However, at some point they die down, and perfect silence reigns around the person sitting in the computer chair. He himself freezes, staring at the monitor with the words appearing on it for several long moments. And then, the young man sighs in disappointment and rhetorically asks what kind of shitty game this is. He begins to think that his parents named him Weiss in the hope that their son would live his life wisely. At the same time, the guy still mentally notes the fact that there has never been a trace of intelligence in his life. Continuing to stare at the other side of the glass, Weiss thinks that today is a weekday and everyone is working hard. Recalling how he himself quit his job a couple of months ago, the guy adds that now he plays games. But Weiss immediately corrects himself, admitting that he lived like this for 5 whole years before his dismissal. The guy finds it incredible that throughout all this time he has been playing the same game for years. Weiss recalls how a game called Pangea briefly shot to the top 5 years ago. At the start of the game, the developers said that they would fulfill any wish of anyone who completed the game, but this did not happen. 5 years passed, but no one could do it, and everyone ran away. Only one person remained online, that's Weiss. At launch, Pangea was famous for its insane difficulty and received a lot of hate for its inadequacy. The bosses in this game were such that you couldn't help but wonder if it was even possible to beat them. At the same time, those you thought were allies turn on you and stab you in the back. And if this happens and a bounty is put on your head, even non-player characters will come after you. But the thing that pisses you off the most is that all your progress is reset upon death. All of this taken together looked like madness, which is why, after such wild complexity, the hype died down so quickly. Weiss thinks that he has a feeling that someone is deliberately preventing players from completing this game. He talks about the unique items in Pangea, of which there are 15 in total, and 8 of them were on his character. Thinking that 5 years of his game had been wasted, the guy was suddenly surprised when he read the system notification. It says that his character will now be deleted, but he receives just over 1.5 million soul points. Weiss is amazed by this, because he had only ever gained about 80,000, even though he had previously deleted hundreds of characters. In simple terms, a dead character's value in Pangea is converted into soul points. When creating a new hero, you can invest them in any talent, and the more you invest, the faster you level up. Weiss recalls how he poured 10,000 soul points into one of his past characters. Adding that he died as a swordmaster, the guy almost physically feels the disappointment he experienced then. Weiss thinks that the maximum one talent can take is 10,000 soul points, but now he is not afraid of this. Thinking that he can now level up almost everything, the guy suggests that he could invest in magic. However, he gives up on this idea because he believes that it is pointless since he will not be able to complete this game. Weiss decides to have one last blast, vowing that this is the first and last time he's doing this. The guy's head is filled with memories of how his girlfriend apologized to him that day. Weiss didn't understand what exactly she meant at the time, so he asked the girl directly about it. She explained, replying that although he was a good guy, she couldn't date someone with no prospects. As an argument in her favor, the girl cited the fact that it was time for her to think about marriage. These words, and the belated realization of them, to put it mildly, knocked the ground out from under Weiss's feet. He wanted to answer her, but a lump formed in the guy's throat, which was difficult to swallow. The girl continued, citing as an example her friends who dated successful guys. She compared Weiss to men working in large companies and spoke about girls who were already getting married. Having started talking about himself, the girl stopped short, and her interlocutor understood perfectly well what she was talking about. Meanwhile, the girl sighed heavily and suggested that they end it there, citing the fact that it was time for her to go. When she said goodbye to Weiss, as if nothing had happened, he couldn't find the words to respond. The guy remained sitting in the same place, ashamedly thinking about the situation he found himself in. His now ex-girlfriend left, clicking her heels and not even deigning to give the downcast guy a last glance. Weiss thinks he got over the breakup 3 months ago, but he and this girl had been dating for 5 years. And it was because of this breakup that the guy angrily quit his job, which the girl called a dead end. And at the same time, this became the reason why he locked himself in his room and turned into a complete nerd. Addressing himself, Weiss, using his full name, tells himself to stop being pathetic. And the very next moment, urging himself to press the button, the guy actually does it. The system immediately sends him notifications that he has just used 100 soul points. However, what happens to him next makes Weiss make a surprised sound. When the boy reads the words from the monitor, it becomes clear that he has activated a hidden element, and the next notification tells Weiss that he is unique and invites him to Pangea. The next moments become like some kind of surreal film for the guy. But all this happens to him, and the voice in his head promises some creator to destroy his world. This becomes real torture for our guy, and for some time he can't even pull himself together. And while he tries to control himself and take control of his emotions and feelings, he simultaneously analyzes reality. But no matter how hard he tries, Weiss can't figure out where that voice in his head is coming from. The only thing he knows for sure now is that weakness is spreading throughout his body. At some point, it reaches its peak, becoming unbearable and causing Weiss to lose consciousness. And, of course, the guy can already see a system message with a frightening and incomprehensible text. It says that someone standing in the whirlwind of creation and destruction is brighter than light and darker than darkness. Sometime later, through the veil of sweet bliss, some muffled voices reach Weiss. And then someone hits him hard, calling him a useless slave and telling him to get up immediately. The unknown man continues, threatening to feed Weiss to the Hydrocon if he falls again. Hearing the name of the creature, the guy mentally repeats it to himself, wondering. And somewhere ahead, the heavy tread of massive paws can be heard, apparently belonging to a Hydrogon. All around, here and there, a variety of footsteps can be heard, most likely belonging to human feet. At the moment when the sound of a whip cuts through the area, Weiss turns her gaze in the direction from which it comes. And seeing the sight that appears before him, the guy wonders what is going on. The next thing that catches his eye soon becomes the creatures that are, in fact, Hydrogons. The realization of this sends shivers through the guy's body, and no matter how hard he tries, he can't stop it. His supervisor helps him with this, asking what Weiss is muttering and ordering him to return to the ranks. Addressing the boy, the man says that if he wants to live, he must definitely get up. And although Weiss doesn't understand much yet, the sensations after the overseer's blow are incredibly realistic. This forces the guy to fulfill his tormentor's whim and actually fall in line with everyone else. Weiss doesn't want any problems. He's trying to get a grasp of what's going on, casually looking around carefully. When his gaze meets the silhouette of the creature, he realizes that it is indeed a Hydrogon from Pangea. Casting a glance into the distance, Weiss also notes a familiar landscape because it was exactly the same in this game. Then a crazy idea comes into his head, which the guy almost certainly considers a failure. But imagine his surprise when his characteristics window actually appears. Unable to believe that this is true, Weiss begins to carefully study the information in front of him. In the process, encountering familiar local words, the guy becomes increasingly inclined to believe that he has ended up in Pangea. And yet, it is still very difficult for him to realize that this characteristics window actually appeared. The guy is even more surprised by his characteristics, each of which is equal to 12. This number exceeds the maximum, which is unrealistic, but Weiss is not allowed to think about it seriously. The sound that distracted him and everyone else from their thoughts makes the guy ask what it is. As it approaches, the guards peer into the distance, trying to determine its source. At some point this happens, and now the first man understands what is happening. Although it happens more slowly, it also reaches the others when the sound gets closer. Someone, the first to despair, screams and alerts everyone else that this is the army of the Queen of the Desert. Then they say that they violated the non-aggression pact and the order for everyone to prepare for battle. Weiss barely hears the cries that they shouldn't yawn, because if they slack off, they'll die, he thinks. Mentally calling this girl the Snake Princess, the guy thinks that he has definitely seen her somewhere before. The system notification that popped up talks about the main task, which requires you to survive. Weiss is stunned to learn that failure to complete the mission will result in death of the body in the game and in reality. But the guy doesn't have time to really think about this information, because the very next moment, this happens. And in general, few people are able to withstand a hail of arrows, sometimes without even having time to scream. The screams of others, filled with fear and requests for help, reach Weiss's ears as if from under a thick layer of water. Having never seen anything like this in real life before, the guy is simply stunned. Meanwhile, the system informs him of the activation of a hidden trait called the Heart of the Iron Monarch. Weiss recalls that this trait appears when all of the user's physical talents are at their maximum. With it, you hardly get tired and remain cool-headed, because this ability allows you to instantly accept the situation. And yet, she doesn't completely turn off her mind, so Weiss understands that if he stays here, he will die. He needs to move. And while the guy is doing what is most logical to do first, someone is rapidly approaching him. And he is not a friend at all, because the intentions of the person who raises a weapon over himself are clear as day. The activated ability and the instinct for self-preservation force Weiss to immediately take action. And the moment the guy touches the hilt of the sword, something incredible happens, raising questions. Weiss decides to leave them for later, because now something completely different is more pressing. His life is at stake. To protect himself, the guy suddenly steps forward, deciding this time to attack his enemy first. The two true blows he landed knock a short, wheezing sound out of Weiss's opponent. Still in his final stance, the guy receives a new system notification. It concerns his system trait, Weapon Master, and informs him that it is activated. But Weiss doesn't have to hesitate for long. From somewhere to the side, he hears the clatter of several pairs of feet. The guy quickly finds their sources with his eyes and begins to figure out how to sort everything out. Meanwhile, one of his potential opponents turns up close and calls Weiss a damn slave. An attempt to impale a guy on his spear ends in a shameful failure for the man, with the loss of his weapon. And not only that, but the very next moment the failed fighter makes a doomed sound filled with pain. Weiss at this time thinks about his abilities and the weapon that he holds for the first time. Even despite this, he now acts in such a way that it looks like he is an expert in this matter. The moment a guy manages to repel an enemy attack, another one rushes at him. In his mind he fears that he will be hit, but despite all his fears, this does not happen. And this leads Weiss to thoughts of a slightly different nature, but following from the previous one. This happens because, while watching the enemy attack, the guy feels something strange. The man standing opposite him moves very slowly for him, which allows him to parry his blow without any problems. And even more, Weiss begins to notice other things that become known to him thanks to the way of the sword. The guy also states with delight to himself the fact that he sees everything clearly, and then, focusing on his sensations even more, he makes a swift lunge. The sharp blade finds its target at the most unexpected moment, causing it to wheeze hoarsely. An axe falls from Weiss's opponent's hands, and the guy takes advantage of this opportunity to catch it. At this moment, Weiss is driven by instinct, inspired by skill. His body moves as if on its own. Realizing where this is all heading, before his unenviable fate befalls him, the guy's opponent asks him to wait. After his dying cry resounds through the area, there is silence for several long moments. It is broken only by the sound of Weiss's noisy and rapid breathing and his rapid heartbeat. They call him a monster and ask whether the expedition was not supposed to fall apart. The system informs Weiss that thanks to the Weapon Master, his weapon proficiency level increases faster. Having reached the 6th level of Spear Mastery, the guy is surprised, because there are only 10 maximum. Weiss thinks that it would be impossible to survive at his current level without hidden traits. Looking at all these people, the guy wonders if he really has to deal with them alone. And while he is discussing the conscience of the person who came up with this, somewhere else events are gaining momentum. The woman sitting on the throne clarifies whether the expedition to the demon world really failed. She is simply terribly interested in this, so she rushes the Snake Princess with an answer. Kneeling before her, her interlocutor responds with restrained consent. The woman says they can't let the idiots from the central continent blame them. And then she, again turning to the Snake Princess, orders her to immediately go to the Kaltman Desert. She orders her to kill everyone and destroy any evidence that links them to the failure. To sweeten the pill, the woman promises that if her interlocutor succeeds, she will lift the curse from her. Hearing these words, the girl hesitates for a moment, and at that moment, an internal struggle occurs within her. But still, some part of her wins out, and the Snake Princess tells her interlocutor that she obeys. Her voice bounces off the walls and rises as she adds that she has no room for error. Hearing footsteps approaching her, the Snake Princess turns her gaze to the approaching man. Without waiting for his answer, she herself impatiently asks him if everything is clear. The man begins to speak, stuttering, informing the Snake Princess that one of the slaves is still alive. Hearing these words, the girl is so surprised that she asks about it out loud. Meanwhile, Weiss towers over the bodies of fallen enemies that lie here and there. His breathing was even more ragged, but it was worth it. The guy's level rose to 2nd. After this notification, Weiss's breathing begins to return to normal, and his health and mana are restored. But that's not all, because along with this, the guy stops feeling tired. It also goes away. While the brave warriors are trying to figure out which side is best to approach, a commanding voice is heard nearby. It was the Snake Princess who approached her subordinates and ordered them all to step back. Some of them, unable to believe that she had appeared in person, cried out in amazement. Well, Weiss himself mentally notes that this girl finally deigned to come to him, and the guy still adds to himself the full name of the princess, whose name is Isabella von der Riesen. From the girl's status window, it becomes clear that she cannot leave the region due to the curse of the Desert Queen. But the guy also learns other information, according to which Isabella is at level 8, and this is not to his advantage. In Pangaea, the maximum level is 10, and 7 is already considered the limit of the strongest. At the 7th level, the strength jumps so sharply that the gap is almost impossible to overcome. The 8th level is considered elite. They are considered so-called top fighters. Thinking that only the leaders of large factions possess such power, Voss believes that he will definitely not survive. But then his gaze again stumbles upon the line about Isabella being unable to leave the region because of a curse. Meanwhile, the Snake Princess herself has already dismounted, and at that moment she makes a sound. Turning to Weiss, the girl begins to say that his talent is impressive, but not without reservations. Because the next phrase the Snake Princess says is that the guy will soon die. As Weiss watched her approach him, he thought that he only played Pangaea for one reason. No matter how difficult the game was, he always found a way to get through it, and got a thrill out of clawing out the victory. Thinking about this, the guy compares himself to the most insane pervert among those who only exist. As the Snake Princess takes off, Weiss wonders what will happen if his guess is correct. The girl moves incredibly skillfully, and one can only envy her speed and dexterity. And before she can get closer, the guy asks Isabella if she doesn't want to get rid of the curse. At this moment, the Snake Princess's faithful blade confidently rushes towards a vital point of his body. However, the girl fails to reach it and complete her task. She freezes a few centimeters from her goal. The Snake Princess's hand, clutching the blade tensely, trembles briefly. Looking her opponent straight in the eye, the girl approaches him and begins to speak. Isabella pauses, as if trying to find the right words, and then asks Weiss who he is. Without a twinge of conscience, the guy confidently says that he is the one who reads the stars and shows the way by them. Calling himself a stargazer, Weiss promises the girl to remove the queen's curse from her and help her leave the desert. Isabella had been waiting for these words for so long that she couldn't even control her emotions. Judging by the way the girl continues to behave, Weiss concludes that his plan worked as intended. And then the guy mentally explains that the astrologer is the one the player needs to surpass level 10. Weiss notes that this class is only found in non-player characters, so it cannot be one a priori. But to remove the queen's curse, you need the blessing of the stars, which only an astrologer can give. In her mind, Weiss is confident that Isabella will not be able to resist such a tempting offer. After this, the guy begins to talk about how he knew that this girl wanted to remove the curse from herself. Weiss thinks it's easy because Isabella von der Riesen is a character he created himself. The guy considers this to be his unsuccessful build, since he chose the wrong starting location. According to the game's lore, the Queen's Curse is a mechanic that prevents players from leaving the starting area prematurely. The game characters want to reach the finale. They must travel the world and complete the game. However, Weiss abandoned his Isabella, and due to the Queen's Curse, this character was stuck in the desert. Meanwhile, he is brought out of his thoughts by the voice of a girl asking the guy's name. Weiss is called Randolph, thus establishing the name of his character. When he doesn't receive anything in response from the girl, he still waits and stubbornly looks into her eyes. Isabella remains silent, but she also stares into the eyes opposite. But at some point, she gives in and, turning away, tells Weiss that she will postpone his execution for now. However, she stops and, starting to talk about what would happen if he lied, she pauses heavily. The Snake Princess turns to Weiss, only to say that if that happens, she will tear him to pieces. And then the girl turns to her subordinates, ordering them to escort their noble guest. To the astonished looks, Isabella adds that he must be treated with the utmost respect. Thus, Weiss manages to complete the main survival task, and the calculation of its results begins. According to him, the result turns out to be phenomenal, and the constellations smile at the guy and are impressed. When Weiss receives notifications about improved rewards, he thinks about how he somehow managed to survive. Thus, the guy's game score becomes 220, and the main task in the Hall of Fame is updated. Several hours pass, and Weiss, as promised, finds himself visiting Isabella. But even while taking a bath, the guy cannot relax, continuing his exploration of this world. The moment his eyes find the words about the Hydreigon's soul, Weiss realizes something. This was the first item he had dropped in 5 years, and with it came the Sword of Miquella, a must-have item for the early game. Just as the guy begins to reason about the fragment of the fallen golden rule, the door suddenly swings open. One of the girls who entered the bathhouse asks in a friendly tone if she could help him wash himself. Saying that it's only his legs, the guy mentally wonders if he's already being checked. Without uttering another sound, the girls, without any prior agreement, immediately move from conversation to action. Thinking that they are Isabella's maids, Weiss believes that his reaction will make the girls suspect something is wrong. Continuing to think about the fact that stargazers are alien to sexual desires, the guy calls himself to calm down. And yet, at some point, something prompts the guy to open his eyes at the wrong time. What he sees in front of him the next moment almost makes Weiss jump. And in order to distract himself with at least something else, the guy hastily calls up the characteristics window. There is information here that surprises him. It is about the thinning of the border between reality and Pangea. While pondering what it all is, the guy goes into the Hall of Fame and finds himself on the ranking table. The names he finds there leave Weiss amazed, and the maid notices a strange reaction. While she asks the guy if everything is okay with him, he becomes deeper and deeper into his thoughts. Remembering that these two played Pangea with him, Weiss suggests that they could have been summoned just like him. On top of that, the guy sees words that after he completed the task, the exit function was unlocked. Even though his character will be defenseless, Weiss is happy to have the opportunity to leave the game. And then he asks the girls to take a break and leave the room, saying that it's time for him to communicate with the stars. When the maids say that the princess told them to take care of him, Weiss responds with cunning manipulation. He says that if the astrologer does not perform the ritual on time, he will lose his power, and asks to convey this to Isabella. Weiss also asks to tell her that he will visit her after the ceremony, and the girls politely wish him success. When the door closes behind them, the guy sighs with relief, not believing that the stupid excuse worked. He admits that he was literally shaking at the mere thought of being stuck here forever. And with words of farewell addressed to the game, the guy presses the exit button. As soon as he presses it, the system asks Weiss to first place his character in a safe place. And while the guy is making his exit, he receives advice that if his character dies, he himself will die in reality. Slowly starting to move away from the game, Weiss suddenly notices a strange glow, and it comes from the window. At first he doesn't attach much importance to this, but no less mysterious sounds are added to the mysterious light. They become louder and louder until the words become completely distinguishable. The fleeing people scream in fear and bewilderment, asking at least someone to come to their aid. Meanwhile, Weiss receives an emergency alert on his phone, asking him to immediately take cover. The owner of the phone at this time is already looking out the window, wondering what it is. He can't understand whether he is still in the game, because how else can one explain the appearance of this monster? Meanwhile, the monster opens its mouth and makes such a terrible and loud sound that it becomes scary. Not expecting such a turn of events, Weiss himself screams, sharply stepping back, which provokes a fall. The guy rhetorically asks out loud why the monsters of Pangea suddenly appeared in reality, and, immersed in these thoughts, Weiss doesn't even notice how something very important falls out of his pocket. Disparate fragments begin to flash before the guy's eyes, like frames from a movie. Weiss sees what is happening to him, as if he is watching a movie sped up several times, but suddenly, he shudders. And the guy starts looking around chaotically, trying to figure out where he is now. Realizing fully that this is his room, Weiss wonders if he passed out while playing. The guy thinks what's happening is nonsense, because he's not a hero from some comic book who just got into the game like that. Thinking that all of this is illogical, Weiss decides to write it all off as a damn realistic dream. But noticing this strange object, the guy realizes that there was nothing like this in his room before. And then Weiss comes to the conclusion that all this is real, although he still finds it hard to believe. Deciding to check everything thoroughly, the guy tries to access the game's official website, but he can't. After reading the words that such a page does not exist, Weiss realizes that the site has simply disappeared. He tries to understand how long ago it happened, how words about a monster and a request for help are heard from outside. And the monster is not even alone, and people who still have a chance of salvation run away from these creatures in different directions. Others were less fortunate in this regard, and those who still retained their sanity advise others to save themselves. Police issue an alarming message, reporting the discovery of several unidentified monsters. Weiss begins to guess that the whole thing is about that very border with the worlds that was mentioned in the notification. As he replayed his text in his head, the guy suddenly realized, and his whole body shuddered. At that very moment, Weiss's fingers involuntarily come across something unusual to the touch. Casting a feverish glance at the object, the boy is amazed, and a guess comes to his mind. He begins to think about what it means that game monsters are roaming their world. Weiss suggests that in-game items might work this way too. Rushing towards the bag he had noticed earlier, the guy quickly opens it. Items actually burst out of it, which turn out to be the Sword of Miquella and the Soul of Hydragon. Picking up one of them, Weiss wonders how to use it, since in the game it was enough to click. Soon the boy learns that the fragment of the fallen golden rule allows for synchronization between worlds. Weiss notes that in the real world he has nothing to fight such creatures with, but the process has already begun. The system reports synchronization to the user and states the duration of the fallen golden rule. Meanwhile, on the other side of the building where Weiss is located, the remaining survivors are fleeing. The mother runs as fast as she can, wanting to save her only child, but trying not to show panic. The girl starts a conversation with her, asking the woman about her dad, and she replies that he will come soon. The next moment, a roar is heard from somewhere above, and although the girl cannot see its source, she hears it clearly. Literally, a moment passes, during which she cannot understand what is happening. And then she calls for her mother with all her might, but she asks the girl to run away, saying that she is fine. A faint sound of footsteps is heard nearby, and the girl, noticing the two, asks if they are okay. The woman, confirming this, respectfully turns to her and asks her to save her child. The girl sighs softly, trying to hide her regret when she hears the words that the stranger is okay. And, politely apologizing to the mortally wounded woman, she promises to take care of her daughter. The next moment, a sound is heard behind them, attracting the girl's attention. Turning around to look at him, she gasps in fear and surprise, and terrible thoughts creep into her head. Clutching the fragile little body tighter, the girl thinks that this is exactly how she will die. But then, out of nowhere, a gust of wind comes, causing the monster to suddenly recoil and wheeze. Weiss spins around to face the monster to make her next move. And the very next moment, his opponent's body flies apart in different directions, in pieces. Looking ahead with wide eyes, the girl cannot believe that she is alive. And then she notices a strange guy in front of her and wonders who this person is. Meanwhile, a familiar sound echoes through the area, indicating the appearance of a monster. He rapidly approaches his target while it remains eerily motionless. Not wanting to witness another death, the girl warns Weiss of the danger. However, he still continues to stand there, as if he had no intention of moving. This makes the girl really scared and scream reflexively. Her attention is distracted by something else, and the girl asks in confusion, "What is this?" Clearly seeing the creature behind the guy, she assumes that it is a 9-headed dragon. Deftly landing on one of the giant heads, Weiss addresses the girl, asking her not to move. She is so impressed by what she sees that at first she cannot even utter a single sound. And then they burst out of her in a confused babble, and the girl asks if she is really asleep. At this time, taking advantage of the moment, the girl slips out of the girl's hands, rushing to her mother. The baby constantly calls her and tries to do something with her little hands, but the girl is distracted from it as quickly as she looked, her attention again drawn to the sounds. Still balancing on one of the dragon's heads, Weiss continues to dispense justice. Meanwhile, monsters from the game world suddenly appear in other countries. Indulging in atrocities, the monsters began to kill people and destroy cities. There is not a single piece of the Earth's surface left where they are not. However, that was not all, as the matter did not end with just monsters. Along with the monsters came warriors who cut them up, invulnerable to bullets, like radishes. In order to somehow calm the unrest, they addressed the peaceful people directly, calming them down. Under the bravado of such heroes and the destruction left behind by monsters, the world was rapidly changing. Seeing this, some were amazed at the stupidity of people, considering it a waste of the fallen golden rule. This player's nickname sounds like Holocaust, and he thinks about reality and Pangea merging. The man suggests that in the future they may become one, and in the coming chaos they are all rivals. He speculates that Randolph is the Phantom, the first to lead the Great Demon Expedition. This man gathered a squad of NPCs and made it almost to the end of the game, but it all ended in failure. Thinking that when a character dies the player is summoned, Holocaust suggests that this is what happened. The man recalls that although a person's appearance changes, the character's talents remain. He is so confident in this, because otherwise he would not have received so many points. Weiss mentally contemplates the appearance in reality of not only monsters, but also summoned players. Remembering that they appeared in the guise of their characters, the guy begins to understand what is happening. Holocaust's suspicions are confirmed, as Weiss now thinks about the expedition he almost completed. The guy remembers how, towards the end of the battle, the characters he hired were constantly getting underfoot, and the companions who had previously seemed reliable suddenly betrayed them. Recalling that they interfered in ways that the game mechanics did not allow, Weiss makes a guess. He thinks that these people might actually be players, just like him, called up. Weiss is sure that if the border between the worlds has collapsed, he won't be able to just sit it out by logging out of the system. To be safe in both worlds, the boy decides to become stronger as quickly as possible. Seeing who came to her, the Snake Princess asks Weiss if he has finished the ritual. Hearing this agreement and the words that he came to fulfill his promise, the girl expresses joy. However, the guy says that he has a condition, and Isabella clarifies what exactly he wants. The girl is struck as if by lightning when she hears a request to take Weiss to the sanctuary. But she quickly comes to her senses, asking her interlocutor if he is in his right mind. And Weiss is thinking about his second task, which requires him to get a class. From the outside it seems like this place is filled with peaceful serenity, but in reality it is not so. Inside the princesses, the snake, oblivious to its surroundings, walks towards its goal straight through pools of blood. The girl, swinging her blade sharply, shakes off some of the drops. And Weiss mentally notes that Isabella dealt with all the guards in just a few minutes. He is glad that they are on the same side and remembers what happened a few hours earlier. Then he said that he needed to go to the place where the star rested and that he needed to do it right now. The girl was surprised by this then, asking again in bewilderment, and Weiss again answered her in the affirmative. He then said that he must obtain this star to lift the curse with the blessing of the stars. Isabella said that no one was allowed into the sanctuary and that severe punishment awaited them. But Weiss told her that she could handle it, and now he thinks with relief that he succeeded. Leaving his thoughts, the guy, turning to the girl, says that this is the sanctuary. They stand like that for a while longer, Weiss condescendingly helping Isabella digest everything. And once they're inside, the system gives the guy a side quest to explore what's inside. Weiss is glad that he has resistance to demonic power, otherwise he wouldn't even be able to enter inside. The guy thinks about how a second-level newbie shouldn't get here, and about the benefit he didn't take advantage of. After all, if he had allowed Isabella to lead, he would have received a generous reward for completing the side quest. However, Weiss pulls herself together, reminding herself that this is not important now. The guy is excited about getting that very class, and the reward depends on it. At the same time, the system informs that the task will be considered completed upon receiving a grade. Weiss glances at Isabella and notices a curious expression on her face. The girl looks down silently for a while longer, listening to the howling of the wind, and then a smile appears on her face, and the Snake Princess speaks. Assuming they've taken a wrong turn, the girl wonders if Weiss has ever made a mistake. And the guy, quickly stopping her, asks the girl where she is going. Chuckling, she says that this bridge is a trap. Anyone who tries to cross it will be blown away by the air currents. Isabella is amazed that Weiss didn't see through such a simple trap, but he has something else on his mind. The girl's expression changes dramatically when the guy asks her if she is afraid. Isabella, reminding everyone that she is the Snake Princess, says that she has no idea what fear is. The girl starts making excuses, and Weiss is understanding about this, offering help. Isabella flares up, asking how he even dared to suggest such a thing to her. The guy remains calm. He reminds them that they need to hurry, as a pursuit squad will soon be sent after them. Weiss says he'd rather carry Isabella than watch her hesitate in fear. Citing a leg cramp, the girl says that if it weren't for that, she wouldn't have climbed onto the guy's back. Pretending to agree with this, Weiss asks Isabella to hold on tighter. But when he takes off, the girl sees that the course the guy has chosen is wrong. So she immediately and hastily asks him where he is going. The girl adds that they are going in the wrong direction, and that there is no road there anyway. Well, Weiss activates one of her hidden traits, which is called mutant. Thanks to her, the guy is able to see everything that is inaccessible to the human eye. Realizing they are jumping through the air, Isabella asks them not to tell her that there is an invisible path. Hearing the confirmation, the girl wonders how this guy knows so much. Meanwhile, he says that he didn't know that the deputy commander was afraid of heights. As she asks Weiss to shut up, the girl wonders in her mind why this guy is so self-confident. The thought appears in the girl's head that he is talking to her like a friend whom he hasn't seen for a long time. And under the influence of the emotions this caused, Isabella asks Weiss if they had met before. The guy says they have never crossed paths in the same space before. When the girl asks what he means, Weiss replies that he has already seen her. However, at the same time he adds that she herself has never seen him. Finding himself in a different place, Weiss begins to mentally think about the barrier. He thinks that it surrounds the territory and allows only those who have followed the right path to pass. Gradually shifting his thoughts, Weiss begins to think about what awaits them next. The light that flared up the very next moment in this darkness began to glimmer ominously. Well, then the ground under the pile of stones begins to shake, and it slowly rises. So soon, several monsters appear in front of Weiss and his companion. And when something flashes on their chests, the guy mentally notes that these are guardian golems. Judging by the size of the rune blazing on his chest, the guy assumes that this is a high-ranking creature. Weiss asks Isabella if her cramp has passed, and she again tells him to shut up. When she adds that he should just watch what happens next, the monsters take off. Finding himself closest to his target, one of them already raises his fist to strike. When only a tiny distance separates them, the monster carries out his plan. But Isabella shows no fear, bravely facing the enemy. Instead, just moments before the collision, a smile appears on her lips. Suddenly, the guard golem's hand is covered in cuts in the blink of an eye. And the very next moment, stones are scattered all over the space around. Turning to her companion, Isabella asks him to wait a little longer. And after that, she suddenly takes off and rushes forward with all her might. The golem, clearly not expecting such a turn of events, is at a loss for a few seconds. Well, the Snake Princess, having dealt with the previous target, is already moving on to another. Weiss thinks that this character is an assassin, and even though he leveled her up himself, it's just absurd. Meanwhile, the Snake Princess continues her work, reaching the head of the guard golem. And as it disintegrates into particles, Weiss notes that the 8th level is a different matter entirely. Amid the roar of falling stones around him, the guy notices a new notification from the system. She offers him to get the Golem Maker class, believing that he was the one who killed the monsters. The guy assumes that it's all because they're on the road and notes that this class is pretty good. And although it's a high-ranking class, Golem Maker isn't what he needs. Watching the haze appear out of nowhere, Weiss thinks he needs something else. Isabella, also noticing her, becomes wary, gripping her weapon more tightly. And when, after a few moments, a menacing shadow looms over them, the system sends a notification. It says that the owner of the mountain, where the nameless star is buried, the old king, is angry at the invasion. But Weiss is not surprised by his appearance. On the contrary, he expresses joy about it. And when the giant creature bends over them, the guy calls him a titan who protects the stars. The system reports that Weiss's level is below the recommended level, and he notes the monstrous pressure. The guy can't think of anything else but the owner of the sanctuary mountain. The snake princess asks if Weiss thought she would deal with the mountain's master as well. He asks the girl not to be afraid and begins to give arguments, but immediately stops. The words that he is quite kind and does not attack first collapse like a house of cards. Isabella only manages to narrowly avoid the collision, and only thanks to her assassin reflexes. The moment Weiss turns his gaze to the girl, he embarrassedly utters an ouch. Isabella sucks in a breath through her clenched teeth, loud and sharp, like a sob. Weiss begins to justify himself, saying that he finds what is happening strange. He says that he remembers the owner of the mountain as a kind man who showed him the way. The girl does not hold back from making a jab. Meanwhile, the creature offers Isabella to defeat him in order to prove that she is worthy. Stuttering with fear, the girl asks him to stop and says that it is not she who is challenging the sanctuary. And the owner of the mountain, in response, reminds her that she destroyed his golem guardians. Not intending to listen to pathetic excuses, the creature moves from words to deeds. It says that anyone who does not prove themselves worthy will not leave this place alive. Once again successfully avoiding the blow, Isabella repeats her words about her not being responsible. Running away from the giant, the girl asks Weiss not to stand there like a pillar and to tell her what to do. The guy himself thinks about this, because in his case, everything was different, and a guess comes to his mind. He recalls that according to lore, the owner of the mountain is a spirit that materialized thanks to the energy of the star. As Wilhelm, a 5-star level 10 character, Weiss was clearing this place. When he came to the sanctuary, the owner of the mountain obediently led him to the star. This leads to the assumption that the creature attacks if you are weaker than it. The guy is thinking about what to do, and then an idea comes to his mind. At that very moment, the princess is thrown back by the snake. Fortunately, she manages to somehow regroup. And yet the blow is strong enough to send her flying a decent distance. The girl mentally notes that her body does not obey her at all because of the miasma of the sanctuary. She thinks, albeit uncertainly, that she shouldn't have trusted Weiss and come here. The fatal blow the girl had prepared for does not happen. The monster is stopped by a voice. The giant tail falls next to the weak female body when the king of the mountain hears his name. The next moment, his red eye instantly darts towards the voice. And, calling Weiss a brat, Dram asks how he knows his real name. And the guy continues calmly, telling his interlocutor that his master Wilhelm has returned. As the creature slowly turns around, Isabella finds the strength to rise. The owner of the mountain approaches his interlocutor and asks him if he really is Wilhelm. A guttural, short laugh comes from his throat, which quickly turns into uncontrollable laughter. Dram asks if someone weaker than the guardian golem really wants to get the star. Abruptly stopping laughing, the creature says that Wilhelm was a powerful man. Drum admits that he served this ideal Superman faithfully and truly, but he did not survive the expedition. And even though he disappeared, the creature forbids a microorganism like Weiss to pronounce Wilhelm's name. But despite the monster's anger, loud roar, and rapid approach, the guy holds on. And on the contrary, calling Drama by name, he asks him to honor the contract they entered into. The snake calls Weiss a bastard and asks him how he knows about the existence of this contract. He adds that not a single living soul should know about the existence of the contract. Weiss recalls that according to him, the owner of the star learns the name Drama and becomes the new master of the mountain. And the former owner of the mountain obeys his orders, but the contents of the contract are top secret. Weiss mentally admits that he just blurted it out when he remembered it, but it seems that these conventions work. And while the guy is lost in his thoughts, Dram asks him who he is. Weiss offers to take him to the star, and she herself will tell him everything. Dram says that the star does not spare the unworthy. He is sure that the guy will burn out without even getting close to her. Weiss fearlessly declares that they will be able to find out exactly this when they reach the star. Drum finds this ridiculous, saying he could crush the guy in one bite. He questions Weiss about the reasons for his confidence, but ultimately agrees to take him to the star. He explains this by saying that he has no reason to refuse, because the star will deal with the guy herself. After this, all three head towards her and walk for a long time, until night falls. The moment they stop, a startled Isabella speaks up. She starts talking about the star, asking inquiringly whether it is really in this place. Weiss confirms these words, adding that the star is located right on the altar. When they get a little closer and the object becomes visible, the guy says that this is the star. Isabella asks in disbelief if the star is a skull, and Weiss says that, more precisely, it is Rhea's skull. Rhea, the twin goddess of Pangaea, died and her body was divided into 32 pieces and scattered. They are called stars and are necessary for the player to achieve superiority. Weiss can't even finish his thought because he feels something is wrong. The next moment it becomes clear what it is, and Isabella screams in surprise. As a pillar of fire shoots into the air around the guy, she asks if he's okay. The snake smirks contentedly, recalling his own words and reveling in his own superiority. And while he wishes for this microorganism that is Weiss to burn to ashes, the guy is still alive. He can't believe that Drum is serious now, because the star has only killed a player once. And this happened when they tried to get it using bugs bypassing the owner of the mountain. But the guy is distracted from these thoughts, wondering if he will be able to get that very class. He came across this information by accident and has not yet had time to personally verify it. Words and individual phrases that begin with the word non-existence begin to sound in the air. There are 14 of them in total, and the one who survived the destruction completes this chain. The notification that appeared in front of the guy said that mana was being converted into star power, starlight. At this time, Weiss gains abilities and effects and learns that the number of stars increases his strength. And when moving between worlds, the star power will not disappear. And so, ultimately, Weiss acquires the Star-Kissed class. As the pillar of fire begins to dissipate, Isabella wonders in her mind if it has swallowed the star. She doesn't say anything out loud, and Weiss himself is also silent for a while. But after that, he turns to Isabella, asking what she wants to do once she is freed from the curse. The girl answers without hesitation, saying that she wants to leave the desert and find her family. Weiss agrees to give her his blessing, but adds that he has one condition in return. The guy asks Isabella to serve him for a year, and after that, he will help her with the search himself. As she begins to speak, the girl stops short, and the image of the queen flashes before her eyes. Isabella begins to speak again, making a second attempt, but just like the first time, she stumbles. Then Weiss comes up to her, and looking into her eyes, says that he is not a queen, so he will not lie. The girl's eyes widen in surprise. She wonders how this guy was able to read her fears. She is silent for a while, going through hundreds of thought processes in her head. And yet, in the end, the girl makes a decision, agreeing to follow the guy. He immediately answers her, starting to praise her for the correct decision. And then the guy turns to Dram, asking about the fact that the owner of the star is his owner. Despite all its reluctance, the gigantic creature still agrees. And then Weiss's face changes as he calls Drama a creature and orders him to bow his head before him. And while the system sends notifications about the completed task, this attracts attention. The queen clarifies about Isabella's intrusion into the sanctuary and the slave she captured. And then, in a cruel and forceful tone, she orders her subordinates to seize them immediately. Meanwhile, the real world continues to live as peacefully as possible. Establishments such as coffee shops continue to operate as usual. These guys are discussing the possibility of Randolph being the Phantom, but they are not sure about it. The man considers the appearance of a ghost player who had been in hiding for 5 years a grand event. His twin offers to contact him first, but the girl reminds him that they have been looking for him for years. In response, they give her the reason that until that day, Phantom was not a real player. The girl suggests that he will need a lot of good items if he wants to stay at the top. When one of the men suggests fishing, the girl thinks about it. She thinks that at a secret auction, someone is putting up a good item at a low price. Newbies who don't know the rules buy it, and then they are hunted down, killed or robbed. The man asks if a pro like Phantom would fall for such a trick. Barely controlling her emotions, the girl says that Phantom might just fall for it. She openly admires him, noting that this man, having suffered defeat, began his expedition. And while it's getting heated up, these two are already calling the emergency services. Well, the girl is trying to recruit Phantom into their guild because she considers her the most adequate. When the Hall of Fame rankings are updated and Holocaust is removed, he becomes interested in the details. The man notes that he won't be able to use the secret auction for now, but that doesn't matter right now. After all, he adheres to the principle that the rating will still rise. And this will happen exactly when someone from the top is killed. Dram moves with incredible speed for a creature of his size. At this moment, these two are standing on his back, and Weiss is studying the latest system notifications. The kite works no worse than navigation, warning its owner of every turn or climb. So Weiss explores the shrine while simultaneously escaping from it, and his level increases. The guy thinks that the characteristics grow faster as a result, so there is nothing to complain about. However, he is much more impressed by the items he received as a reward for the main quest. Weiss is particularly excited about 2 items that are difficult to obtain at the current level. One of them is the Shadow Cloak, which makes its wearer invisible when the effect is activated. This can be interpreted as getting a free stealth skill, so that's not bad. Suddenly, Dram's eyes widen as he begins to sense something. The creature clearly hears the sound of the invader's feet moving towards them. Listening to its sensations, it notices another group moving from the other side. And then Dram, turning to his master, informs him that strangers have invaded the sanctuary. Isabella assumes that these are the Queen's men, and the boy notices that they have lingered here. The girl asks Weiss about the plan, saying that even though the Queen herself will not come, there will be many of her people. She expresses uncertainty about whether they can handle everything, even with the mountain's guardian. After listening carefully to the girl, Weiss asks her why they don't try. The girl agrees with him, mentally wondering why she didn't think of this herself. Dismounting from the giant, Weiss addresses him, saying that he is counting on him. He himself, together with Isabella, hurries to leave this place as quickly as possible. Finally, the boy shouts at the snake, instructing him to do his duty. Behind them, frightened voices are heard, afraid of an unknown sea monster. Isabella is worried that they are running away so openly, but Weiss is not worried since the queen is not there. He notes that if they hesitate and the main forces arrive, it will be impossible to escape. Isabella clarifies whether she understands correctly that Weiss abandoned drama only because he was useless. He, having answered that he cannot leave the sanctuary, thinks that they need to teleport. Since he lifted the curse from the girl, there won't be any problems with this, but not without some caveats. It will take them a decent amount of time to activate the teleport. Isabella freezes in her tracks and starts to speak, but stops short. Weiss confirms her guess that by passing through this gate, they will get out of the desert. But he says it will take them time, and when asked how long exactly, he says about half a day. The guy starts to talk about how good it would be if the entire squad concentrated in the sanctuary. When he says he needs to connect with the stars, he's thinking about how he can't stay out of the game. Speaking out loud again, the boy asks Isabella if she can be trusted. Before answering this question with words, the girl shows everything with actions. And, moving away from Weiss to take a favorable, defensive position, Isabella says that she will cover him. Before he opens his eyes in his room, the system sends him several notifications. As Weiss sits up, he thinks about how he can't get used to moving. He notes that there is no news or warnings, which means the monsters have not yet appeared. The guy thinks that, although the real world and Pangea are slowly merging, there is a lot he doesn't know. He is confident that more monsters will appear in the future, but he is also worried about real-life players. The guy's thoughts are distracted by the sound of a message, causing him to be seriously surprised. The thing is that his ex-girlfriend asks Weiss if everything is okay with him. Meanwhile, her voice can be heard from the cafe, talking to her interlocutor on the phone. Saying he acted like he was rich when he was hitting on her, she asks what the problem is now. When he suggests meeting and talking, the girl replies that she has nothing to tell him. She ends the call by asking not to write to her because she is meeting her friend today. The man on the other end is still saying something, but the girl can no longer hear him, calling him a stupid idiot. Remembering Weiss, she thinks that, even though he was a complete loser, at least he listened to her. The girl regrets that they broke up, thinking that she should have been more patient. She continues to reflect on this topic when suddenly a familiar voice is heard from behind. Weiss asks why she called him, and the girl asks him to sit down for at least a little while. The girl notes that they haven't seen each other for a long time, and the guy has changed, as if he has become healthier. Weiss asks her to get straight to the point, and his interlocutor mentally admires this pride. She says she always liked it when he always came running at her first call, just like now. The girl continues, adding that it was only after the breakup that she realized how good he was. While she continues to speak in the same shower and asks if Weiss missed her, he remains silent. In his mind, he wonders if he should order something and if she is going to buy something. Having not heard anything significant, the guy says that if that's all, he's leaving. The girl asks him if he didn't hear that she missed him. While she tries to justify herself, Weiss asks her if her current boyfriend knows about this meeting. He says that it was necessary to delete not only the profile photo, but also from social networks. Weiss says goodbye, and his ex, starting to stutter, asks him to just listen to her. He begins to wonder why he is so calm now, because before he would have been very confused. Once outside, Weiss hears angry swearing, causing him to leave his thoughts. A man holding a woman by the hair asks what everyone is staring at, and she resists. Then the man says that this damn bitch is ignoring him and promises to kill her. Realizing the situation she found herself in, the girl can do nothing but scream. She is already preparing to part with life, or at least feel pain, but this does not happen. In a rude manner, the man asks the person who stopped him who he is. Weiss doesn't lose her composure, continuing to hold her opponent and telling him to stop acting like that. The man, feeling the force with which they were squeezing his hand, asks why he was even bothering. And then, when Weiss twists his arm, he starts screaming, asking him to stop. The guy thinks about how he feels, how easy it would really be to break this freak's arm. But instead, he pushes the man aside and asks the girl how she is. She, saying that Weiss saved her life, says that she doesn't even know how to thank him. Noticing the thoughtful look of her interlocutor, the girl asks why he is looking at her like that. Weiss, meanwhile, remembers who exactly this woman reminds him of. And yet he tells her that she simply reminded him of a friend of his. Approaching from behind, the man calls Weiss an arrogant bastard and tells him to die. Noticing him, the girl gasps in fear, but is unable to do more. But this is not required, because Weiss himself had already noticed the attacker. While he continues to swing the knife chaotically, the guy makes only one movement. He slams his opponent into the ground with force, forcing a strangled wheeze out of him. Seeing such an impressive technique and strength, the rescued girl cannot hold back her admiring exclamation. Weiss doesn't pay attention to anyone, continuing to hold the inadequate man. This continues until the police arrive to take care of the man themselves. However, they say that Weiss will also have to go with them to the station, and this puzzles the guy. A girl intervenes in the conversation, saying that it was she who called the police station, and this guy is not guilty. An argument ensues between them, during which Weiss says he really doesn't have time for this. One of the police officers says that they cannot break the rules, and the girl starts to get angry. Calling herself Burson Gold, the girl says that she is a reporter for a well-known channel. She asks the police if they want this case to be known, and they become embarrassed. And passers-by begin to remember Weiss's personality. In the end, the police give in, saying that only the complainant will go with them. The girl once again thanks Weiss from the bottom of her heart, but he says that it's not worth it. Burson says she is a special correspondent dealing with the Dimension Warriors. She explains that this is the name given to people who appeared on the day of the monster invasion. She concludes her explanation by adding that they defeated the monsters. Weiss is surprised that almost no one mentions Pangea itself, but he has an idea why. Burson politely asks the guy for his business card, while in the background his ex asks if he's okay. She asks if he is injured, and the reporter clarifies with Weiss that this is his girlfriend. However, the guy says that this is not true, and adds that he does not have a business card. Then Burson asks for his phone number, and Weiss does not refuse her. When his interlocutor finds out the guy's name, he says that it is very beautiful. And then she asks him to write to her tomorrow, offering to have coffee or dinner. She treats him. And while they say goodbye, Weiss's ex thinks about how he could do this to her. The girl thinks with fury that Weiss is simply a worthless person. Meanwhile, Burson has already managed to move a sufficient distance away from them. Her phone starts ringing, and the girl checks who it is before answering. When Burson answers, the person on the other end asks how she spends her time. The interlocutor says that the deputy director went on a business trip and left an assignment. The reporter inquires about its essence and learns that it is an interview with Grazia. The girl asks if this is the same woman who saved America. They tell her that they don't know this, but she said that she wants to see Burson Gold. Meanwhile, in a completely different place, it is already deep night. Her measured silence is now interrupted only by the girl's deep and frequent breathing. Isabella, defending her master, is already quite tired, but tries not to show it. She remains stoic in all other respects, and then those standing in front speak up. The man conveys to the Snake Princess the Queen's order, which orders her to return. He offers her a deal. If she gives up the slave, they will pretend that nothing happened. But Isabella only calls them fools in response, which provokes a new wave of attacks. As if enraged, the warriors rush at the girl, daring each other to kill her. But the Snake Princess continues to stand stoically, showing neither fatigue nor fear. Her efforts are rewarded because the next moment the teleporter flashes with light. The system informs Weiss that he is activated and that moving from the starting point is free. Weiss quickly leans forward and praises the girl for holding up well. Isabella asks if the guy is done communicating with the stars, and he answers positively. One of the men tells the others not to stand there like a pillar and to execute the traitor immediately. And Weiss tells Isabella that since she kept her promise, he will keep his. The next moment, he uses his class's special skill. It's called the Star Claw, but it uses up star power. The system informs its user that the skill's duration is 41 seconds. Meanwhile, his opponents, screaming wildly, continue to writhe in terrible agony. Saying that this is a moment of liberation, Weiss advises them all to rejoice. And Isabella suddenly realizes that this is exactly the power of the Star-Kissed One. Meanwhile, Weiss says that it is not too late, and he will not stop her. However, the girl confidently says that she does not want to return. A smile appears on her lips when Isabella says that she will stay with him. When they enter the portal, the system reports that the girl's curse has been lifted. After this, the movement begins, as a result of which they find themselves in the city of Arcana. The system gives the user a hint, informing that at this point, materialism has reached its peak. And unless you have a fortune equal to that of the highest nobility, you should avoid visiting the central areas. Isabella calls this city pretentious, and Weiss explains that everything here is decided with gold. The girl asks him not to worry about it, saying that she took 300 coins with her. Weiss groans absent-mindedly as she estimates the size of the bag and pauses. After that, he says that this money will only be enough for one night. Isabella is amazed by this, and the young people begin to compare prices for buying slaves. The guy condescendingly says that the prices here are different from those in the desert. Isabella starts to worry, but he says it's not worth it, since there's money on every corner here. When the girl doesn't understand what Weiss is talking about, he points her to the casino sign. Isabella has her own attitude towards this, so she remains silent for a long time. Weiss is also silent at first, showing off, but then he speaks first. He asks the girl not to worry about it because he is quite lucky. In the city called Arcana, there is only one law, and it is called the Law of Money. And all the wealth of this city flows into a place called the Hudson Casino. When it's their turn, Weiss is politely apologized to, because entry to the casino is prohibited without a deposit of 10,000 gold. Isabella regrets spending the money, but the problem is that even that wouldn't have been enough. Young people are asked to leave if there is no bail, and disgruntled and rude voices can already be heard from the crowd. Weiss says that although he has no gold, he will leave something as collateral. By showing off the Fairy Queen's tear, the boy expresses confidence that this will be more than enough. His interlocutor begins to speak, but stops, causing Isabella to tense up. And then she feels even more uneasy when she hears that they will be given top-notch service. The girl cautiously asks Weiss what he gave them, and he honestly admits. He says he received the tear as a reward when they were at the sanctuary. Isabella can't believe that the guy just left them something so valuable. But Weiss doesn't see a problem with that, saying it's just a deposit and he'll return it when he wins. So they begin their little adventure, after examining it and choosing what they liked the most. Both Isabella and Weiss are closely monitoring the entire process, not wanting to miss a single detail. Finally, the ball lands right in the right pocket again, and someone lets out a shocked cry. People around him can't believe that Weiss has won again. They call him the god of gambling. Another voice is amazed that this guy has already raised more than 1,400,000, but he started with only 1,250 coins. Weiss himself doesn't see anything supernatural in this, since it's all about the golden blessing. Isabella lets out an uncontrollable cry, saying that they are rich, and the guy reminds her whose money it is. Weiss is told that they will pay out all his winnings, but from now on, he will be barred from entering the Hudson Casino. The problem here is that the guy's bets are repeated and they are cleaned out. And this, as we know, becomes a very serious problem for the organization. Therefore, security approaches the couple and very kindly asks them to leave the gambling establishment. Weiss hesitates, but notices Isabella's gaze change dramatically. It doesn't bode well, so the guy agrees to leave. However, first he wants to talk to the owner, but he is told that this is impossible. Weiss is not upset when he is again asked to leave without a scandal. He says that he is not looking for a meeting. The guy explains to his interlocutor that his boss himself will want to see him, so he asks for assistance. Meanwhile, this same boss, sitting above the tear of the Fairy Queen, activates the Hand of Observation. When he finds out it's real, he wonders where Weiss got it from. After all, only the Knights of the Fairy Queen own this item, and fairies rarely leave their lands. The man can't believe that such a thing came to his casino on its own. Meanwhile, he is called out to, informed that the man who gave him the talisman asks to meet with him. To this he adds Weiss's words that the casino owner himself will want to see him. And then Mr. Hudson orders this guy to be brought to him, intending to have tea with him. The order is carried out flawlessly, and literally a few minutes later, they are sitting opposite each other. Since Weiss entered here, he still hadn't uttered a single word, waiting for a reaction from his interlocutor. He also silently evaluates the one who left the tear of the Fairy Queen as collateral, not being particularly impressed. But finally Mr. Hudson speaks up, recalling that he himself should want to see Weiss. When he asks about the hidden meaning, the guy says that there is none, he just knew about the desire that would arise. Weiss also adds, to finally dispel any doubts, that he also knows about Hudson's desire to possess the tear. The man tries to pull himself together, assuming that Weiss knows that he collects rare talismans. When he confirms that he wanted to discuss the deal, the guy says that if the price suits him, he won't refuse. Mr. Hudson asks, how about 2 million gold, considering it a generous offer? Isabella cries out uncontrollably, amazed at the amount named, while Weiss remains sullenly silent. When his voice cuts through the resulting pause, the girl is even more surprised. After all, the price Weiss named was 10 times higher, and this surprised even the casino owner himself. The guy says that for him this price is really high, but not for his interlocutor. When he says he won't pay that much for a trinket, Weiss corrects the man. The guy openly says that the tear of the Fairy Queen is more than just a talisman for Mr. Hudson. When he continues that this is a man's pass to the city council, he swallows nervously. And Weiss begins to explain in detail why exactly this is needed, starting with the minimum requirement. It turns out that this item can remove them, allowing Mr. Hudson to make up for what he needs. When Weiss names the reason why the man is eager to join the council, he is completely taken aback. It is that Mr. Hudson wants to be recognized by the family as his bride Serengeti. The guy remembers that this girl is the only daughter of the Marquise of the Kingdom of Balran. Serengeti is known as the White Knight and the leader of the 500 warriors. Weiss recalls that this girl participated with him in the great expedition to the demon world. The boy remembers very well that Serengeti sacrificed her legs to save his life. At that time, he considered her actions to be just a dramatic plot device, since for him, Pangaea was just a game. Weiss reflects on what happened to him after Wilhelm's death, when he woke up in this place. The guy thinks that, realizing that NPCs could be players, he remembered something. These were the words of Serengeti, who asked that if she did not return from the expedition, the medallion be returned to her fiancé. Weiss was skeptical at the time, wondering what it was. Taking a closer look at the object, he noticed that inside the pendant were portraits of a girl and a man. The guy recalls how he relied on the game's knowledge of the Serengeti, and initially, she didn't have a fiancé. He expresses confidence that someone has influenced the character's given parameters. And the reason why that happened is because Hudson is just as much of a player as Weiss. The guy believes that the man arrived in Pangaea long before him, and he wants to extract information from him. When the man asks how he knew about his desire, Weiss says that he didn't know, but he heard. The guy adds that the stars told him this, and his interlocutor is even more amazed. Dumbfounded, he clarifies what exactly Weiss means and whether he is really an astrologer. The guy says that he is not asking to believe him, but he can give him what he needs. Weiss says he doesn't need the money, but he asks for one condition in return. The guy asks his interlocutor to tell him the story of his life, but that everything in it be true. When he adds that the stars favor the honest, the man absent-mindedly repeats his words. Weiss thinks that this is not an easy decision, since an astrologer is a rare NPC, and disclosing personal information could lead him to hunters who specialize in murder. Weiss thinks that this is the reason why most players hide their identities. The guy believes that this man will accept his proposal because Serengeti is not a random character for him. Weiss is almost 100% sure that this girl is something more for him. And indeed, the man soon agrees to tell him the story of his life. However, he adds that to do this, he will need to start with the Serengeti, since almost all of his goals are related to it. Hudson tells us that this girl was a brave knight and took part in the Great Expedition. But he says that the campaign was led by 8 heroes, which, naturally, angers Weiss. To his question, he receives the answer that it was not he who led the Great March, but all these heroes. Hudson continues, saying that at some point there was some discord between them, which led to the failure. Weiss asks his interlocutor if he knows who the 8 heroes are, and he answers in the affirmative. And then he adds that one of them, the strongest after William, was Gracia himself. Meanwhile, the said person watches breaking news about a man riding a monster. The man is informed that he has managed to reach an agreement with the presenter of this report. He thanks the assistant, and she asks if he has to fly to her in person, since it's not safe. The man refuses the offer to bring a reporter here, saying that he must see everything for himself. Gracia explains this by a premonition that this is the very partner he was looking for. Sometime later, Weiss is sitting in a restaurant, but he can't even swallow a bite. Burson asks if he doesn't like the meat, but the guy says it's for something else. Weiss recalls asking Hudson to talk about his life, and him sobbing and pouring out his soul. But the guy managed to find out something about those who are called the 8 heroes. Now he asks Burson if it's too expensive here, because he feels embarrassed to eat at her expense. The girl says that this is the least she can do to repay for saving her from her pursuer. They continue talking, but the journalist interrupts, and Weiss asks her what is wrong. Burson says that the girl sitting behind the guy doesn't take her eyes off them, she remembers her. Weiss mentally notes an interesting coincidence, and this guy reminds him of the one who was on his ex's social media. That conversation involuntarily comes to mind, and the guy tries to remember the name of this person. Burson, noticing Weiss's interest, offers the guy to move if he is uncomfortable. But he assures her that everything is fine, and asks the girl not to pay attention to his ex. Having said that there really is nothing between them, Weiss is about to eat, but is called out. The man who appeared behind him asks the guy not to say that he came here for his girlfriend. He calls Weiss a shameless bastard because he thinks the guy is following her. Weiss calmly asks these words again, and his interlocutor confirms them again. He goes on to say that he heard the guy crying and begging the girl to come back to him. Hearing the words that it was he who dragged her into the cafe, Weiss even lost the power of speech. However, after thinking a little, everything becomes clear to the guy. Weiss takes note of this as she glances at the girl standing behind the man. Meanwhile, his interlocutor says that if he sees him next to her again, he will kill him. Hearing the harsh words again, Burson enters the conversation, asking why the man does not watch his language. He thinks that Weiss is paying her, and says that he will pay more just to make the girl leave. And while the journalist tries to defend herself and her savior, the man takes action. And then he turns to the staff with the same arrogance, asking them to take out the trash. However, before anyone can appear or say anything else, there is a loud bang. And then the girl says just one word. She calls her opponent a psycho. He is immediately there, before his subsequent actions, noting that she started first. And then, without a second's hesitation, the man takes a swing, advising the girl to take care of her teeth. When his hand is very close, Burson catches her breath. However, the man fails to carry out his plan, as Weiss reacts in time. The guy asks him to stop, saying it doesn't look cool. But the man is not going to give up so easily, and he is rude to Weiss again. At the same time, the man is about to hit him, but he fails to do so. Repeating his words, the guy moves from words to deeds, causing his opponent to cry out dully. The man wonders in his mind where this guy gets such strength, because it doesn't look like human strength. Weiss's ex turns to her current boyfriend, telling him to stop embarrassing himself and get up. At this time, our hero invites the man to leave the restaurant to finish their conversation outside. Weiss continues, asking why this role-playing is necessary if he himself got into a fight. The man doesn't like the fact that the guy is embarrassing him in front of his girlfriend, and he decides to take action. Taking out the now familiar thing from his pocket, he thinks that Weiss has picked the wrong guy. And the very next moment, when he activates it, the space around is illuminated with light. Weiss thinks about this with bewilderment, trying to figure out where the source of the glow is. People nearby express their bewilderment out loud, asking what it is. As the man transforms, someone from the crowd calls him a dimensional warrior. And while they are discussing his transformation, he turns to Weiss with a warning. And the very next moment, the guy finds himself on the floor of the restaurant, just like he was just a moment ago. Having witnessed this spectacle, the journalist anxiously shouts out Weiss's name. And the guy is mentally surprised that this man is also a player. But at the same time, Weiss has no idea how to pretend that nothing happened. The man says he relaxed for only a second, and they already tried to make him look like a fool. Weiss, checking the man's status window, notes that he is a level 4 spearman. In Pangea, you can level up to 10th level. To move on to the next level, you need specific experience. The more talents a player has, the stronger the character, but because of this, he levels up more slowly. This man, Trueward, had been running from danger ever since the day he synchronized with Pangea. He survived the main quest only thanks to luck, and that's how he got his class. This helped him get to the top of the rankings, and as a reward, he was able to leave the game. Reflecting on this, Weiss thinks that all of this is obvious to him at first glance. Meanwhile, his ex asks the man to finish, because people are already looking at them. He agrees, and turning to Weiss, advises him to thank the girl for staying alive. At this time, the guy is thinking that this person is demonstrating to everyone his position as a player. Burson asks Weiss if he is okay, and he says that he is fine. The girl says that they need to be reported to the police, but the guy asks her to forget about it. He starts to say that there is nothing wrong with this, but suddenly stops. When everything around starts shaking, someone shouts out that it is an earthquake. Every single visitor to this place begins to panic and starts to get lost. Weiss, remaining silent, guesses what it might be. While he is thinking about this, something hits the wall nearby with a deafeningly loud sound. Weiss continues to think that the border has been breached, and his assumption is confirmed. Burson says that they need to run, but the guy asks her to wait and be quiet. The girl obediently obeys and looks around, noticing how the others are panicking even more. They try to escape, screaming and squealing loudly, unable to cope with their fear. However, for some reason the strange creatures do not attack people, which the girl states. Weiss wonders if she should tell him about these worms that only eat corpses. The guy is just thinking that if he doesn't attack first, she won't appear when he notices something. His ex-girlfriend is screaming loudly, asking her current boyfriend to do something, and despite his confusion, he begins to activate his ability with a desperate cry. Weiss, who notices this, calls the man an idiot and shouts at him not to attack the worms. But he doesn't care. He can't be stopped anymore because it's already too late. Punching a large hole in his opponent, Trueward is amazed that he was able to do it with one blow. Intoxicated by his success, he thinks that he seems to be stronger than he thought. And then the man shouts, turning to the monsters and promising to kill them all. He starts bragging as he continues to cut innocent creatures into pieces. And at this time, his head is occupied by the thought of what he was afraid of all this time. They are completely weak. Weiss turns to Burson, asking the girl to run as far away from this place as possible. In order not to scare her at all, he says that she needs to run as far away from this idiot as possible. Weiss continues to rush the journalist even when thick fog begins to appear around. Trueward mentally curses that, because of him, the entire view is blocked and he can't see a thing. And, of course, in exactly the same way, the man does not see how someone's hand is reaching out to him from this very fog. At that moment, when his view is blocked even more, Trueward freezes, stopping breathing. And, naturally, the man does not see how the creature that did this approaches him even more closely. And then he hears his otherworldly voice, which addresses no one in particular. The question its owner asks concerns who killed her children. At this time, the system reports the appearance of the elite monster Mamba and shares a recommendation. Meanwhile, the creature, in its ominous tone, gives the order to kill everyone immediately. One of the restaurant patrons starts coughing and asks what's going on. He says that because of this fog, it is difficult to see anything, but stops short. This happens because the hero standing in front of him suddenly changes the trajectory of his movement. Instead of continuing to defeat the monsters, for some reason he raises his spear above him. The man doesn't understand what's happening, but he's absolutely sure that something has changed in him. Well, Trueward has hallucinations, which are a result of the worm's blood effect. The man barely has time to finish his question, asking what is going on. The next moment, blood flies into the air, sprinkling everything around. But it does not belong to this restaurant visitor, but to Trueward. For Weiss managed to arrive in time and protect the frightened man. Trueward himself doesn't even immediately understand what's happening, gasping absent-mindedly. And while he's yelling, Weiss tells him that he didn't mean to interfere, but he crossed the line. And after this, the guy turns to the creature that created the red haze, asking it to show itself. He sees something begin to move lazily in the fog, making drawn-out sounds. And then, appearing right in front of Weiss, it lets out a single laugh in the same ominous voice. The next moment, it turns into loud, uncontrollable laughter, and the creature says that this is not bad. When the monster appears before Weiss in all its glory, the system reports its appearance. Weiss isn't scared because this creature is familiar to him. Instead, he's already formulating a strategy in his head. Since Burson lost Weiss in this fog, she calls him, but quietly, afraid of attracting the monster's attention. Hearing scary sounds ahead of her, the girl calls the guy by name again. However, having run to where the sound was heard, he no longer finds anyone. Meanwhile, in the place where the guy is, everything is flying into pieces. Weiss, who successfully jumped back at the right moment, is thinking desperately. His thoughts are that, thanks to Mamba's fog, he managed to hide from prying eyes and transform. However, the guy still doesn't expect an easy victory because he knows the monster's attack patterns. He thinks that if this were not so, he would have been minced long ago. Meanwhile, the monster admits that he finds Weiss's physical characteristics strange. He continues to admire the guy, noting that he moves as if he sees his attacks. But Weiss doesn't answer him, not intending to waste time on useless conversations. Well, the monster, despite his previous words, says that in the end it's all useless. Weiss tries not to listen to him, instead swinging his sword continuously and masterfully. His head is full of thoughts about Mamba patterns, and now he is just waiting for the next one. Weiss knows perfectly well which side the monster will attack from, so she turns in that direction. And indeed, the creature produces an attack called Blood Splash. The guy grabs an object that comes to hand and quickly pulls it towards himself. It turns out to be a table, which must act as a shield during this pattern. The guy runs through the possible consequences of the splashes in his head. And immediately after the attack stops, Mamba jumps out of hiding, not intending to waste time. Weiss mentally admits that this, however, as he expected, is not easy for him. And while he's short of breath, Mamba admires the fact that the guy managed to dodge this attack too. He compliments Weiss, calling his dodging skills amazingly incredible. However, he considers it useless if the guy can't get it in the end. Finally, Weiss also speaks up, asking her opponent not to worry about it. The guy explains his words by saying that he will soon thrust his sword right into Mamba's forehead, and he uses the Fairy Queen's tear to equip the Hermes sandals. But this is not enough for him, and the guy also puts on the Michaela armor along with the helmet. Because of this, the system informs him that 2 new skills are now available to him. Weiss mentally expresses his joy at having purchased this armor in advance at a secret auction. He quickly glances at the status window of the Sandals of Hermes so as not to miss an opportunity to gain an advantage. And then Weiss thinks that he will still keep his promise, no matter what it costs him. As he approaches his opponent, the system informs him of the skill he is currently using. And yet, despite the swiftness of Hermes' sandals, Mamba still outpaces him. But the guy's reflexes are also pretty good, and at the very last moment, he still manages to dodge. In order to carry out his next action, Weiss makes an effort. This resistance allows him to give himself acceleration by pushing off the ground with force. Now the guy moves even faster, equaling, and perhaps even exceeding the speed of his opponent. He is amazed at the moment when his opponent rushes past him at impressive speed. He calls Weiss a bastard and is already executing his next attack. Spikes emerging from the monster's back instantly shoot out, rushing straight at the guy. However, he sees each of them well, successfully repelling each of the attacks. And even more, during the defensive maneuver, Weiss gets closer to his opponent. His gaze is focused on his main goal. He is calculating several options in his head at once. Once close enough to Mamba, Weiss jumps while he's reloading. Yet the monster doesn't feel like he's giving in to his opponent. Instead, he smirks, because he knows what is about to happen, since he himself is the initiator of this attack. When it hits him, Weiss involuntarily makes a disappointed sound through clenched teeth. Mamba's kick is quite powerful, sending the guy flying back. However, at that very moment, the system informs him about the activation of Michaela's kit. The Skyborn Dragon's wings burst out from Weiss's back at the perfect moment, holding him back. His opponent, noticing this, points out that the guy still has some tricks left. And this doesn't make him happy at all. The monster calls Weiss a rat and rushes after him. And the guy, having caught the monster's movements, understands that this is Mamba's final attack pattern. And then Weiss soars upwards, thinking about what would happen if he could endure all of this. Just when he thinks he's got the hang of it, Mamba's technique catches up with him. The monster directs a large amount of red mist at its opponent and addresses them. At the same time, wanting to entangle Weiss in his web, he tells the guy to die. However, he breaks out of it, activating the synergy of the Skyborn Dragon and swiftness. The monster begins to understand what this is all about and asks, clarifying his theory. Weiss remembers that Mamba has 4 skills, which are evasion, blood spray, needles, and poison mist. After using them all, he falls into confusion for a very short moment, then the monster is unable to act. And this means only one thing: Weiss has only one chance to win. When the guy is about to use it, Mamba fearfully asks him to stop. However, Weiss is not going to hesitate, already plunging his sword into the monster's head. And although he can hardly comprehend anything anymore, the guy reminds him of his words. He remembers how he promised to plunge his sword straight into the monster's forehead. While the system sends the necessary notifications, restaurant patrons notice that the fog is clearing. Starting to look around, Burson mentally wonders if it's all over. At the same time, trying to understand what exactly happened, the girl catches Weiss's eye. However, since he is wearing armor, and now also this cloak, the journalist does not recognize him. But she remembers him well as the guy who saved her and that girl the first time, which she mentally notes. Calling out to Weiss politely, Burson asks if he was the one who saved her last time. The guy thinks that this girl is safe and activates the shadow cloak effect. Anticipating what was about to happen, Burson offered to talk to his savior, but in vain. It evaporates so suddenly that the girl doesn't even have time to understand what happened. She only has time to gasp absent-mindedly as a single puff of smoke begins to flutter before her. And while the journalist is trying to come to her senses, quiet footsteps are heard behind her. The next moment, a familiar voice calls out to Burson, causing him to turn around. Weiss says he's finally found her, adding that they missed each other in the chaos. The guy asks Burson how she is, if she is injured, and the girl replies that she is fine. As the guy breathes a sigh of relief, the journalist's attentive gaze catches something. Weiss says he's glad, because he thought they wouldn't get out of this mess. The journalist asks the guy if he is injured, causing him to become confused for a few short moments. Weiss asks Burson not to worry about it, suggesting that the monster's blood might have splashed on him. The girl finds this strange, noting that only her finger is dirty, everything else is clean. Burson recalls Weiss's surprising calm and asks him if he really knew about those creatures. Not knowing how best to answer, the guy falls out of reality for a few seconds, and then he is surprised by the words about his calmness, and says that then terrible confusion began. The journalist does not back down, saying that Weiss is lying because he acted absolutely confident. The guy starts to deny it, saying that he was actually scared to death. The girl thinks that Weiss is acting suspiciously and pretending that nothing happened. The journalist also notes that this guy appeared just at the moment when her savior disappeared. And then thoughts begin to pop into the girl's head that it could be him. Soon after the first dimensional war, the second one broke out. The dimensional warriors warned that the attacks would continue and insisted on cooperation with the government. The townspeople hid in their homes in fear, and because of this, the city streets became completely empty. They were outraged that the government was downplaying the scale of the tragedy, considering it an isolated incident. And perhaps it was this very negligence that led to the huge number of casualties during the Second Dimensional War. The man remembers how during the first battle they didn't care, but now they made such a noise. They tell him that people who were not personally affected by the disaster did not initially appreciate its scale. The woman says that no one knew how to react to something that doesn't fit in the head. This is the reason. However, someone else notes, this incident has opened everyone's eyes, and the invasions will continue. This man's name is Cosmos, and he thinks this is the perfect moment to announce the formation of their alliance. Some people point out that they should hurry before other alliances recruit promising newcomers. Meanwhile, studying the video footage, although the cameras don't show it clearly, the woman assumes that Randolph is in it. One of the people present asks if he hasn't just completed the second task, referring to the level. It is speculated that Weiss used some kind of talisman to equip this armor. There are also those who consider him a phantom, since he appeared immediately after his disappearance. Cosmos says they can't trust other alliances and they have to lure Weiss over to their side. And this must be done in order to prevent the impending rupture. Weiss listens to his interlocutor without interrupting when he asks him a question. The man asks his interlocutor about his use of the Tear of the Fairy Queen. In response to the calm answer, the casino owner starts shouting, asking why he did it. Weiss agrees that he promised to help, but never said he would give him the Fairy Queen's tear. He says that a man does not need any talisman to achieve his goal, it was a hindrance. The man asks Weiss about another way, and Weiss notices that distrust is written all over his face. The guy invites the casino owner to join him to understand why he is worth trusting. Sometime later, they are already walking through the sewers of the Golden City. Mr. Hudson doesn't understand why Weiss needed to go to this place, and he asks him about it. He says that this is to dispel his doubts, but the guy also wants to create a checkpoint. Weiss thinks about the teleportation book he got from Drum. It's convenient, but still somewhat annoying. Mr. Hudson can't believe they're going to clean out the sewers with just the three of them, because this place is home to a mutant rat boss, which is a raid boss. When the man begins to list the minimum conditions for victory, Weiss stops. The moment the guy says he knows it, the system sends him a notification. It states that a dungeon raid monster has appeared, names it, and shares recommendations. Meanwhile, the rat hesitates a little before taking further action. Having finished examining the people standing in front of her, she pushes herself against the ground with all her might. And this allows her to give herself a boost of speed because the very next moment, the mutant takes off. When he starts to rush around the trio, the man cannot help but let out a surprised cry. He thinks that this creature's main weapon is speed and begins to reason about it. Usually, 6 players would slowly corner a rat and kill it, but they showed up with no preparation at all. As the man mentally wonders what Weiss was thinking, he turns to Isabella. He tells the girl where the rat will be now, saying that it will appear at 10 o'clock. And the snake princess at that very moment takes off and rushes in the given direction. Mr. Hudson doesn't even have time to be surprised before she's already at an impressive distance from them. Meanwhile, the girl is not just on her way, she is already very close to her goal. Weiss, however, is mentally reasoning that if you know the attack patterns, the speed of the attacks doesn't matter. Of course, they were lucky that Isabella was pumped up to a level that was unattainable for ordinary characters. Mr. Hudson still can't come to his senses, looking in shock in the direction in which the girl disappeared. The man is brought out of his stupor by Weiss's voice, which addresses him. The guy promises to keep his promise, no matter what it costs him, and asks Hudson not to doubt him. Weiss adds that if he says it can be done, then they will do it. These words also plunge Hudson into a state of stupor. He again loses the power of speech. Victor is told that they checked the nearest cameras, but it's dead quiet there. There are no traces at all. The man thinks it's some kind of devilry that supposedly no one knows anything about it. His interlocutor suggests visiting Truvord again, but Victor says that he looked crazy. He assumes that the guy went crazy from the shock of having his hands cut off. The man thinks that talking to this person is a waste of time. Then they start discussing Berzin, thinking about talking to her. When the brunette asks if there is someone behind this girl, Victor says that Grazia is protecting her. The men discuss rumors that this guy is going to give a personal interview to the journalist. Meanwhile, the two just meet, and after a short silence, the man speaks up. But he only introduces himself briefly, calling himself by his well-known nickname. The girl says that it is an honor for her to meet him, and gives her full name and position. The brunette asks if this guy has a crush on the journalist, but his interlocutor, alas, doesn't know this. Victor thinks that now that Phantom is gone, the strongest player is Gracia. He's sure that if they anger him even a little, their alliance will be in tatters. As the man tries to catch his breath, he is asked if this is really the end. The blonde asks his opponent what he's doing, reminding him that in reality, killing players is prohibited. His interlocutor asks who decided this, and receives the answer that Grazia said so. He is shut up right at the point where he repeats again that killing players in the real world is not allowed. His opponent, saying he doesn't care, suggests that the blonde ask Gracia to save him right now. He calls him an idiot, and he only manages to croak briefly before giving up the ghost. The system notifies the user about the rating update and inclusion in the top ranks for the task Getting a Class. Thinking of Randolph, Holocaust expresses confidence that he is definitely the Phantom. The man is confident that if it is really him, he will take on the main tasks without hesitation. Holocaust also believes that if he waits there, he will soon meet the Phantom and kill him. Clouds of dust suddenly begin to rise around a perfectly quiet and calm area, and the very next moment, giant paws descend into the epicenter of this improvised tornado. They belong to the monster we already know, some of whose heads emit a guttural roar. Weiss's Hydreigon serves as a mount, and the boy uses its services without a twinge of conscience. He thinks that he was lucky, and that initially he just wanted to open a travel point in the sewers. And the guy involuntarily plunges into recent memories of this. The moment Weiss picks up the crystal, she discovers that it is the core of a mutant rat. It was this that caused the monster to mutate, so if you feed it to animals, they will also mutate. The guy still can't believe that he got the material for the evolution of his Hydreigon. Taking a break from his thoughts, Weiss asks Hudson if he has settled his affairs at the casino. The man agrees, adding that he is sorry to leave the casino, but he could not have done otherwise. Hudson is confident that the locals will not leave the casino alone in his absence, and he decided to trust Weiss. The man thinks that although Isabella is impressive, this guy acts like he sees right through everyone. He doesn't want to miss this chance, because he doesn't know when he'll get such an opportunity again. Weiss grins, and comes to the conclusion that this way he won't have to worry about money anymore. The guy thinks that Hudson made the right decision, and now he can focus on himself. Meanwhile, the man asks where they are going, and Weiss answers with an evasive question. However, he immediately says that they are going to a masterpiece that will fulfill Hudson's wish. In his mind, the guy calls this very masterpiece, thinking that the third main task begins there. And this place, which will help them kill two birds with one stone, is called the Tower of Spirits. Sometime later, the trio find themselves at the right place and remain silent for a while, only looking around. And then Hudson asks, stuttering, if this is really the same place, because it seems to him like an ordinary forest. Weiss responds to the man by saying that this is not the case, and he feels obligated to clarify. And then the guy says that here is the entrance to the Tower of Spirits, which is called the Tree of Spirits. The guy thinks that the spirit tree is the place where spirits are born. It can temporarily open the way to the spirit realm, and the tower can only be reached through it. This must be done strictly at sunset, but that's not all the nuances. The main problem is that this tree has been dead for a long time. Moreover, the entire forest is dying, and new spirits have not been born in it for a very long time. As he prepares to put his idea into action, Weiss is mentally dissatisfied with it, but he has no choice. The guy is distracted from his thoughts by a man who asks him in a stuttering voice what he is planning. However, the guy not only doesn't intend to respond, but also hesitates, already swinging his arm to strike. His companions can only watch in amazement and bewilderment at what happens next. By that time, Weiss had already put his plans into action, trying to keep up appearances until the very end. The moment the spirit tree falls, there is a long moment of silence all around. And then Mr. Hudson turns to Weiss, asking if it is possible to cut down a tree like that. When the boy doesn't answer, the man reminds him that the tree opened the way to the Tower of Spirits. While he is indignant, none of the three notice this simple movement. It appears somewhere in the treetops above them, after which something begins to rapidly approach. But not everyone catches even this, but the Snake Princess has amazing reflexes. She manages not only to save Hudson by forcing him to duck, but also to repel the enemy attack. And although from the outside it seems that this is very easy for her, the warrior hisses with effort. The culprit makes his presence known by admitting that he didn't think Isabella would be able to block his blow. This man turns out to be the master of the forest Bazrock, a 9th-level high dryad. While Isabella remains silent, Hudson is amazed, considering it simply impossible to personally see the supreme dryad. The forest master, meanwhile, admits that he was going to show mercy and let them pass. However, he changed his mind exactly at the moment when one of them dared to cut down the spirit tree. The High Dryad's tone turns angry when he asks about how people have completely lost their fear. While their opponent speaks, the Snake Princess estimates the number of individuals surrounding them. She agrees that there are about 50 of them, realizing that they won't stand a chance if the Dryads attack together. Meanwhile, somewhere behind us, Weiss's voice is heard, asking the Master of the Forest not to take it out on others. He admits that he was the one who cut down the tree and suggests that otherwise they would not have shown up. After the Master of the Forest calls Weiss crazy, he asks him to come down and talk. The High Dryad categorically refuses, quickly knocking one of her trusty arrows. And then Weiss asks if he's really going to just continue to watch this forest die. Unable to believe his ears, the Master of the Forest, dumbfounded, involuntarily asks again. And Weiss declares that he intends to bring their dying forest back to life. The guy continues, saying that he doesn't see a single spirit in this forest that could breathe life into it. The Master of the Forest considers his intention nonsense, believing that only the chosen ones will be able to enter the Tower of Spirits. And, without waiting for an answer from her interlocutor, the Supreme Dryad asks whether such a non-entity has really been chosen. Weiss thinks that this is impossible, because in order to enter, you need talent and a lot of completed tasks. He wonders how the stars must align in order to get to the Tower of Spirits. After all, the players who got there can be counted on the fingers of one hand. He thinks about himself. Then he activates the hidden trait, the Druid's natural affinity, and commands the Master of the Forest to open the gates. He asks Weiss the question again, asking if he really means to say that he will save their forest. The other High Druids can't take it anymore, starting to call the guy a liar and getting ready to attack. The creatures begin to hurl threats, promising to finish off the invaders with their arrows. However, despite the slander of his fellows, the Master of the Forest himself remains silent, pondering something. At one point, he raises his hand in the air to ask the higher Dryads to stop. And although they are deeply surprised, they really do fall silent, all of them, as one. Only after waiting for absolute silence does the Master of the Forest leave his position. Finding himself dangerously close to Weiss, the man says he better keep his word. The guy asks him not to worry about it, saying that he always keeps his promises. The Forest Master expresses doubt about this, but says that he will kill Weiss with a light heart afterwards. After he finishes his fiery speech, the High Dryad asks the trio to follow him. After quite a long time, they arrive where they need to be. The Forest Master explains that the only way to hide the gate is with the corpse of a stone spirit. He reminds Weiss that if he screws up, he'll immediately end up as fertilizer for the forest. The guy is interested in the other side, and he learns that then he will be rewarded with dignity. Thus, Weiss gets a side quest to return the spirits to the forest, the result of which, when it fails, amuses the guy. He is still finishing this thought when the Master of the Forest asks the Trinity to get ready. The High Dryad warns them that he will now open a portal. The light from what he does is so bright that you have to do more than just squint. Unable to bear this, Mr. Hudson even hisses in disgust. And yet he becomes curious to know what is happening, what makes the man open his eyes. The system reports the creation of a portal leading to the spirit realm, which only a select few can enter. As Hudson begins to talk about this place, he interrupts himself and turns to Weiss. He asks the guy if they are already in the spirit realm, and he, answering in the negative, explains everything. Saying they are inside a portal, Weiss says they need to get permission from this location. Hudson starts asking who he needs permission from, but finds the answer to his question. And then the man asks in a clarifying tone whether they really need to catch this spirit, but this is not the case. Weiss replies negatively and approaches the entity, with Hudson noting that the spirit is quite cute. The silence between them lasts for quite a long time, but at some point the creature speaks. It says that it senses the druid's aura and gives Weiss permission to pass. The creature asks the boy if these people are his friends, and he says yes. The spirit asks if Weiss trusts them with her life, and the answer is yes. The entity agrees to let these people through as well, but says that they need to undergo a solitary test. The Snake Princess tells Weiss in an extremely calm tone that she will be back soon. But Hudson, unlike her, begins to panic, screaming that he is disappearing. The spirit says that time flows differently in reality and in the tower, so one must ascend without fear. He says this to Weiss, and then, wishing him luck, calls the guy a druid. The system sends Weiss a notification about the main third task and gives him a hint on how to complete it. The guy thinks about the fact that he hasn't been in the tower for a long time, but something raises questions in his mind. He is trying to understand what this test is that he too must pass. The form of the challenge depends on the player's elemental affinity, which for Isabella is wind. Remembering how he himself chose this relationship for her, the guy believes that Hudson will have a test of water. Weiss notes that he has never seen such an element test before, but he has a guess. And while the guy thinks that this may be connected with his kinship with all the elements, everything begins. The gatekeeper finds Weiss's kinship with all the elements incredible and begins to discuss it. He asks if this is all because of the element of emptiness that contains everything that exists. The gatekeeper allows Weiss to enter and tells him that the test he must pass is the trial of chaos. But he warns the guy that he needs to be careful, as no one has opened it yet. The gatekeeper also says that if chaos engulfs Weiss, there will be no turning back. Finding himself inside the gate, the guy thinks about the words spoken to him. He also recalls that he has been playing Pangea every single day for the last 5 years. So, to say that Weiss played it the longest would not be an exaggeration. The guy thinks that Pangea is a game with insane difficulty that is impossible to complete. Looking back on all the hardships he's faced, Weiss says that's why he loves Pangea. The guy asks rhetorically out loud that the chaos test has opened for the first time. And he says that this means that this time too, he will become its discoverer. And while the guy is swinging his sword, a male figure appears in front of him. At first his face is not visible, but the man deliberately and slowly tilts his head. The moment the hair falls from his face, realization dawns on Weiss. In front of him is none other than Wilhelm, and the guy is trying to understand why his character appeared at the test. Well, the man, not intending to waste any time, is already moving forward, wanting to reach his opponent. Weiss barely manages to dodge the swift, sudden attack and hisses through clenched teeth in effort. The guy mentally forces himself to ignore why Wilhelm became his test and start acting. But the obsessive thought that he will have to fight a former top one stubbornly does not leave Weiss's head. The guy is terrified that he still needs to defeat the man. This does not allow him to relax for a moment. Weiss thinks that, in fact, they didn't expect anyone to pass this test at all. And just when the guy thinks that Pangea is just a crazy game, the following happens. Weiss manages to equip the armor and Mikkel's helmet with Hermes' sandals almost in time. He thinks that if the sword didn't cut through his arm, then Wilhelm's attack is almost equal to his defense. And then the guy allows the thought into his head that Wilhelm only looks that way on the outside. And while the system sends him notifications, Weiss thinks about what all this means for him. But at this time he does not hesitate, activating Flurry with a combination of Sky Dragonborn and Swiftness. This technique is successful, and Weiss thinks that he has nothing to fear. Wilhelm is not only thrown back from the enemy, he doesn't even have time to regroup due to the speed. However, when a man reaches his final point, he quickly comes to his senses. When looking at his opponent, Wilhelm does not hold back his emotions. Meanwhile, Weiss begins to approach him at his impressive speed. Not allowing the guy to get close and strike, Wilhelm abruptly rises to his feet, and he strikes, not allowing his opponent to get even a millimeter closer. And the fact that Weiss deviates from his course allows him to avoid a direct collision. All this time, Wilhelm stares at his opponent without moving, but suddenly speaks up. He asks Weiss about the reason for his return, assuming that he came for his former glory. The guy is momentarily taken aback by the realization that his former character has spoken to him. Wilhelm takes advantage of this and speaks up again, asking if this is possible. Grabbing his opponent, the guy asks him what he's talking about. And then, in his heart, he calls the person standing in front of him a pathetic fake. And he pulls his opponent's hair with force, feeling the anger raging inside him. Just as the copy's head is torn from its body, Weiss releases his fingers. And while the man's body part rolls for a while, the guy goes into the inventory. When he takes out and uses a health potion, the system sends a corresponding notification. Since there is no need to rush, the guy empties the bottle slowly, enjoying his victory. Taking the last sip, Weiss exhales easily and speaks out loud. He expresses satisfaction at having successfully stocked up on potions using his casino winnings. However, it turns out that the guy rejoiced in his victory too early. But Weiss remains unperturbed because it would be foolish to expect any other outcome from this place. By saying that they will end the interview here, Burson assumes that her interlocutor is tired. The girl adds gratitude to her previous words, and her interlocutor pauses. And then, saying, "You're welcome," he asks if he can ask Burson a personal question, not for publication. The girl is surprised by this and asks again, and the man reassures her, saying that the question is simple. Remembering that article about Weiss, Gracia begins to talk about him. And then he asks the journalist to tell him everything she knows about this guy. Grazia says that he wants to know everything the girl saw that day, every little detail. Meanwhile, this same guy stands among the bodies of copies of his former character, trying to catch his breath. Trying to get her ragged breathing back to normal, Weiss wonders how much time has passed. Assuming he's knocked down at least 100 fakes, the guy feels like he's been squeezed dry. But he is glad that the copies are no longer summoned, and, since there is no visible way up, this is most likely the last floor. His potions are running low, and the boy thinks it would be nice to see a message about the completion of the cleanup. Weiss begins to walk forward, but a strange sound is heard under his feet. Looking down, he discovers that the nearest body has disappeared somewhere, like all the others. An otherworldly chuckle comes from somewhere, the amplitude of the tone of which seems to be erased. The creature asks questions, one of which is surprised that chaos did not work. The second one asks Weiss who he is, assuming that he is a human, but he immediately contradicts himself. The guy realizes that these are the spirits of chaos, and assumes that he was able to clear the Tower of Chaos. One of the entities repeats Weiss's words, putting them in a question form. And then she bursts out laughing, and all the other spirits of chaos join in. The entity says that this is ridiculous, and asks Weiss if he really thought he could get through the tower. She says that the test of the Tower of Chaos hasn't even begun yet. The spirit of chaos explains his words, saying that the real test lies beyond this barrier. Noting that Weiss can barely stand on his feet, the entity asks the guy if he is confident in himself. Another woman takes up his tone, saying that this place was not originally intended for passage. The spirit says that behind him are thousands of illusions of chaos that Weiss fought, and they are all waiting for him. The entity suggests that the guy surrender, arguing that he will never clear the tower. But seeing what the guy does next, the spirit of chaos is simply speechless. Seeing him leaving, the entities began to ask Weiss questions one after another. They offer the guy a special offer, a contract if only he gives in. Weiss doesn't fall for these sweet words, no matter how tempting they are. The guy remembers that the reward for completing the Tower of Spirits depends on the chosen trial. In simpler terms, the egg you receive will be equivalent to your element. Weiss admits that since he passes the chaos test, he will also receive a corresponding egg. However, his mind was changed by the words of the spirits who so desperately wanted to make a contract with him. Based on this, Weiss suggests that the reward that awaits him may be even better than the egg. And the spirits of chaos continue to scream, asking the guy to come back and saying that he is making a stupid choice. Weiss finally speaks up, remembering the entity's words about how there is a vast darkness of illusions on the other side. And he agrees that it will be hard, but during all this time he has already learned all their patterns. The spirits of chaos don't understand him, and Weiss says that now he doesn't need potions and everything else. After all, he will simply repeat the movements that he has already repeated thousands of times. The guy asks why he should stop if this is all he needs to win. One of the chaos spirits says that he didn't expect Weiss to accept the challenge for such a ridiculous reason, and he calls the guy an idiot, but adds that he even likes it. Weiss, closing her eyes for a single moment, opens them and finds herself in a familiar place, and he begins to look around carefully to see if he has made a mistake. When the system tells Weiss that the task is completed, the boy asks again in disbelief. And the materialized spirit, telling the guy that he really was able to conquer the tower, congratulates him. At the same time, the entity notes that it seems that Weiss's travelers are also still alive. The guy asks her if the talk about a real test was just a lie. Weiss remarks that the spirits of chaos are good at lying, and his interlocutor confirms these words. Saying that these entities like to lie, the guy's interlocutor says that he should have received a hint. The spirit adds that Weiss should collect his reward for completing the quest and asks him to extend his hand. The system reports that the guy has cleared the Tower of Chaos and that a reward has been issued for completing it. Weiss assumes the reward will be the Chaos Spirit Egg, which leaves him a little disappointed. This is what happens, and the guy calms himself with the thought that this reward is also quite good. However, the moment the object begins to materialize in the hand, something unpredictable happens. Weiss literally feels with his skin that something is wrong. The egg in his hand is almost physically changing. Out of the corner of his eye, the boy senses a notification from the system about his hidden trait, Celestial. And then, out of nowhere, feathers appear in the air, and they cover the object in Weiss's hand. And the notification about receiving the Chaos Spirit Egg is replaced by a notification about receiving the Heavenly Spirit Egg. Weiss, looking in disbelief at the strange object in her hand, wonders what it is. Continuing to look at it, the guy remembers that the Celestials live in the Heavenly Kingdom. He believes that the fact that he received this egg proves that he is one of them. The boy can't believe that the hidden trait could indicate his connection with the Celestials. Weiss asks the spirit if he knows what it is, but he says he doesn't know anymore. However, he adds that even the Spirit Kings are showing interest in this subject. Spirit Kings are some of the most powerful beings in the world and act as intermediaries between players and Pangea. Weiss thinks that he is curious to know more about the egg, but he knows that it is impossible. Meanwhile, the system begins to bombard the guy with notifications of congratulations from the constellations. One of them praises Weiss for winning the battle with himself. The guy's rewards improve. Due to the interest shown by the cursed constellation, the same thing happens. And similar things happen with several other constellations, improving Weiss's rewards. Looking at all these notifications, the guy remembers that some of them had already shown interest in him. Thinking about the constellations of the Temple of 100 Stars, Weiss remembers that they play an important role in the setting of Pangea. It is beneficial for the player to maintain good relations with them, as they can issue special tasks. Weiss remembers that the constellations love the stories that people tell. He has thoughts on this matter. The next moment the system informs him that the class of his awards exceeds the limits. Because of this, Weiss can choose 2 awards out of 20, but this is even more than the guy imagined. After some time, Isabella and Hudson also clear their trial towers. As expected, the girl received the Wind Spirit Egg as a reward, and the man received the Water Spirit Egg. The number of eggs that can be obtained as a reward is determined randomly. Luckily, Isabella received 2, and decided to keep her promise by giving one of them to the High Dryads. The Forest Master's thoughts are far ahead. He thinks about what will happen when the spirit hatches. The man is already looking forward to the time when the Basrock Forest will be restored again. The High Dryads gave Weiss and his company the finest elixir, Mandrake, as a token of gratitude. It is made from a 1,000-year-old medicinal herb that has absorbed the life force of the forest. They gave it to Isabella, who provided her with the Air Spirit Egg so that she could become stronger. After completing the 3rd main quest, Weiss rises in the rankings, becoming first again. This gives him the Guardian Wall as a perk, which protects his body after he leaves the game. Thinking about this, the guy feels relieved because now, if anything happens, he will be warned of the danger. Weiss mentally imagines how this protection will work when entering the world of Pangea. And then he does the same thing, but trying it on from the other side. Weiss remembers that the Fallen Golden Rule fragment has 72 hours remaining. And while he is thinking that the more time remains, the better, Hudson turns to him. His next words are gratitude, because the man did not even hope to receive the egg of the water spirit. Weiss confirms that the hatched spirit should help Hudson solve his level problem. The guy says he wants to drop by somewhere and invites his companions to come with him. The man happily agrees. When he says that after what happened he is ready to follow Weiss, Weiss thanks him. Sometime later, looking around the place they found themselves in, Hudson gets lost. He couldn't even imagine that Weiss might need to come here, and the man begins to desperately try to cope with his emotions. He's not doing well, so Weiss turns to him, asking him to be quieter. Isabella asks the guy where they are going and why Hudson is so covered, and he talks about the Knight's Garden. It turns out that the place is owned by none other than the Marquis Weiser, the father of Hudson's bride. The man asks Weiss why they are here, since he is not ready to propose to Serengeti. The guy says that he is not forcing him to do this, he just wants to ask this girl something. And while her fiancé clarifies what exactly Weiss wants to ask, he involuntarily slows his pace. He is alarmed by the appearance of the area they find themselves in, because nothing like this has ever been here before. Weiss continues to walk slowly, and something else catches his attention. At the moment when our trio finds themselves near the monolith, Isabella quietly raises her voice. The girl assumes that these people are currently holding a memorial service. Skimming through the names and epitaphs, Isabella asks Weiss if he knew any of them. The guy answers negatively, but says that he knows why they all ended up like that. He had already guessed that these 500 names belonged to the knights who followed him on the expedition. Weiss admits that he didn't think about the fact that he didn't know their names, and didn't even try to remember them all. After all, they weren't important characters, even though they fought for him. Weiss thinks that they were all just part of the setting, just part of the game. One of the women calls Wilhelm a bastard and asks him to return her son. After this, she begins to call out to her boy, remembering his soothing words. The woman asks how she can live without him now, and Isabella asks Weiss where he is going. The inconsolable mother continues to ask questions that no one else will answer. And suddenly, at some point, she feels sick, and she gasps and loses her strength. Weiss is there just in time to catch the woman. Isabella comes closer, addressing the guy, and he, in turn, addresses her. Weiss encourages the girl to go to the aid station. The aid station of this place is the Church of the Goddess, and inside it, lamentations are heard every now and then. Hudson notices that there are a lot of sick people in this place, but that's not even what puzzles him. The man says there are too few people here to be able to provide adequate assistance to everyone. Hudson begins to voice his suspicion that the Church of the Goddess has management problems. And the minister, turning to him and Weiss, notes that they were the ones who brought the grief-stricken woman to them. The man remarks that they could have simply passed by, but because of their kind hearts, they did not do so. Hudson tries to say something in response, but is at a loss, but still manages to squeeze out agreement. As the church minister approaches him, the man asks, "What is the matter?" The monk says that in order to keep the aid station open, they are collecting donations. Weiss notes that a church-run aid station should be funded from the city treasury. And, hearing the amount, he asks whether it is normal to demand a city dweller's monthly fee for treatment. The servant calmly tells him that they have no other choice. After all, Father Andrew said that from now on they would accept donations for maintenance. Weiss says he knows Father Andrew, and the man wouldn't do something like that. Priest Andrew is a high-ranking priest of the Church of the Goddess, serving the triple goddesses. He is an NPC who gives out honor quests when you level up the corresponding class. Weiss wonders if this man is secretly collecting donations. The dilapidated buildings he saw on his way to this place involuntarily came to mind. The tramps in this aid station also don't leave his mind, because they are all holding on somehow. Although this city shouldn't be as rich as Arcan, it's not one for poverty either. And while he is mentally wondering what happened, the Marquis's estate has its own atmosphere. In a stuttering voice, the man addresses his lord, noticing that he has already drunk a lot. He politely asks his master to stop, but receives rudeness in response. Instead of listening to his interlocutor, the man tells him to shut up. And immediately after this, the Lord of the Knight's Garden orders the servants to bring more drinks. Weiss, meanwhile, says that he wants to talk to Andrew's father and asks to be taken to him. The minister says that there is already a huge line to see the priest, and then the guy turns to Hudson. The man immediately understands what needs to be done, but the one who is supposed to get the bag asks what it is. Hudson explains that it is a donation, and it is worth 50,000. The man says he will double the amount if the minister arranges a meeting with the priest right now. The minister is torn between morality and greed, trying to control his voice. And yet he gives in, joyfully asking Weiss to follow him this very minute. Sometime later, Father Andrew expresses joy at meeting his interlocutor and introduces himself. He invites Weiss to sit down to talk, and he agrees. The man says he was told about a boy donating a huge amount of money to their aid station. Weiss agrees and suggests that since the donation is 50 gold, he won't see his father with small change. Andrew asks if the boy is disappointed that the old priest is preoccupied with money. When asked if he was ashamed, Weiss said he had just suddenly become curious about one thing. Specifically, he is interested in how it happened that an aid station in such a large city is in such a need of money. Instead of answering, Andrew says that he heard that they brought a woman to them when she lost consciousness. The man begins to tell her story, saying that the old woman's only son died in the war with demons. He says that there are many like her, and in this war people have lost relatives and friends. Countless knights, inspired by William, vowed to drive out the demon king, but they never returned home. And the Knight's Garden lost many talents and spent colossal amounts of money on the war. However, real trouble came when Serengeti, the daughter of the city's lord, returned. This girl not only came back without both legs, but for some reason still hasn't come to her senses. Many priests, including Father Andrew, tried to wake her up, but all in vain. The Lord bought up the rarest elixirs, looked for any means, but nothing helped. Because of this, the already depleted treasury was emptied, and the Lord lost his mind, becoming a victim of fraud. It all got to the point that the man mortgaged his lands and ran up huge debts. After this, the Lord fell into complete despair and finally broke down. So the city lost all subsidies, and now this aid point is the only one in the entire city. Andrew says that this is precisely why they so shamelessly demanded money, even from Weiss. Saying he got the gist, the boy asks why exactly Serengeti is unconscious. His interlocutor says that if everything were that simple, they would have cured her long ago, and it seems like a curse. Thinking about this, Weiss suggests that they could then proceed as they did with Isabella. Andrew is amazed when the boy says that he has to go, and that he has business with the Marquis Weiser. The man asks Weiss to wait, because the Lord is not himself right now and hardly receives guests. Andrew asks to give him a couple of days, after which he will personally arrange a meeting for them. Weiss says he doesn't have time to wait, and asks the man not to worry about the money. Just as the guy manages to say that they've paid off, someone from the hallway starts desperately calling for Andrew. The man says that his lordship ordered the guest who donated money to the point to be brought. Weiss, reminding the priest of his words, says that with money, all doors open instantly. And while Andrew's father is amazed by this, the boy announces his intention to leave. The priest asks him to wait and, whatever the reason, thanks Weiss for his help. He waves it off, but the man says that it's not about money at all. He's grateful for the help to someone in need. Not finding a shadow of a lie in the priest's words, Weiss allows himself to smile. And then he tells Andrew's father that he was glad to meet him again. The last word plunges the man into a stupor because he does not remember the face of this young man. And Weiss leaves without saying another word, and sometime later finds himself in the house of Marquis Weiser. For some time, perfect silence reigns in the room, broken only by the sound of dishes and cutlery. All this time, Marquis Weiser did not take his interested gaze off the young man sitting opposite him. Thoughts are spinning in his head that it was this young man who donated 100,000 gold coins. And then the man speaks up, first of all, apologizing for such a sudden invitation. While the Marquis introduces himself, Weiss mentally notes the changes that have affected him in appearance. The boy recalls that in his youth, this man was a knight known throughout the continent for his skill. His daughter, Serengeti, was able to get a star, though not without the help of Weiss's character, Wilhelm. After this, the girl became one of the strongest on the continent. The House of Marquis Weiser has strengthened its position and power in the Kingdom of Balran. And in gratitude for this, the Lord of the Knight's Garden swore allegiance to William. Weiser was a man who responded to insult with a sword and to kindness with loyalty. Meanwhile, the man assumes that Weiss guesses why he called him. The guy doesn't like the long foreplay, and he, offering to get straight to the point, undertakes to cure Serengeti. These words cause confusion in his interlocutor, causing an involuntary question to escape his lips. And then the man suddenly bursts into some kind of painful, heart-rending laughter, and, admitting his mistake, he says that he considered Weiss to be someone's rich son. The man raises his voice, asking about the guy who has heard all sorts of rumors. He begins to lose his temper, asking how much he should pay this time for the miraculous healing. The Marquis becomes increasingly heated, first naming the sum of 300,000 and then moving on to his lands. He says that he is fed up with such scumbags, he has already lost too much. The man asks what else he must give so that the greedy people can finally be satisfied. Saying that he wasted his time, the Marquis orders the guards to gouge out the swindler's eyes and throw him out. Weiss says that he doesn't need money and asks his interlocutor to listen to him. The guy continues, saying that he is not going to give empty guarantees of healing, but there is a chance. The Marquis says this is something new, and agrees to assume that Weiss will cure his daughter. But he doesn't understand why the guy needs this, and he says that he is here to repay the debt and take back what's his. Weiss says that he is the heir of Wilhelm, the Night King, to whom his interlocutor has sworn allegiance. The boy asks the Marquis to take him to the Serengeti, saying that he has something to ask her. The man's astonishment quickly disappears when he asks Weiss about Wilhelm's legacy. He says the continent is literally teeming with people who call themselves the heirs of the Night King. And at some point the man loses his temper, ordering that not only Weiss be killed, but also the two who came with him. The guard is not going to hesitate, already swinging his arm to carry out his master's order. However, Weiss himself is no slouch. He is already playing out in his head how he will deal with his opponent. The cup, which so conveniently ended up in his hand, serves as both a shield and a weapon at the same time. Knocking the sword out of the guard's hands, the boy turns to the Marquis, asking him to prepare the place. And under the stunned gaze of Marquis Weiser, Weiss continues, saying that he will prove it. The guy confidently declares that he will certainly prove that he is Wilhelm's true heir. Sometime later, Marquis Weiser looks down on the scene he agreed to. Isabella and Hudson are here too, but in a slightly different place, and a man speaks up. He asks what is going on here, and his interlocutor reminds him of the man's unpredictability. Hudson says he really doesn't understand how things came to this. Weiss, casting a careful glance at his opponent, mentally notes his preparation. His opponent is wearing a full set of equipment with the blessing of the High Priest, and he is serious. The latter speaks up, asking Weiss if he is truly the heir to the King of Knights. To his next words, Weiss asks him to keep his promise and not reveal his identity. However, his opponent swears on his knightly honor that this will not happen. And then he asks him to show what the self-proclaimed heir to the King of Knights is capable of. As Weiss dodges the blow, he mentally notes his opponent's rather impressive speed. The same one, not intending to stop for a moment, continues his movement. And while Weiss dodges the next blow, he thinks about his great expedition. He thinks that many high-ranking knights died during it, and this guy's stats are higher than his. Weiss knows he can't underestimate this man, given the difference in their equipment ranks. And while he is performing his mental operations, his opponent manages to surprise him once again. The knight deftly dodges in a feint and moves to deliver a powerful blow. Weiss grits his teeth with effort, because he understands that the situation he has found himself in is delicate. And yet Weiss comes up with a way to get out of it, although not without harm to herself. What he does makes his opponent puzzled and laugh nervously. And the knight, with delight, states out loud the fact that his opponent stopped his sword with his head. But the very next moment he smirks and takes back his words about the imposter. However, in return, the knight calls Weiss simply a real psycho. One of the observers of the battle notes that the guy moves well, but Weiser is not impressed. The man thinks that he has seen many imposters, but they were far from Wilhelm's style. After all, this man's swordsmanship surpassed the human level, and it was incomprehensible even to Weiser himself. The man thinks that until this guy shows a technique like Wilhelm's, he is not his successor. The knight says that it is worth acknowledging that, unlike previous imposters, Weiss has talent. He offers the guy to confess to the lie and become his subordinate, but he reminds him of the difference in their equipment. The knight tells Weiss that he must understand one thing: he is only wearing this because his master ordered him to do so. The sarcastic guy expresses joy about this, noting that his opponent has a lot of great stuff on him. And, without allowing the man to come to his senses, he offers to show him his items. The knight is at a loss from such an impressive onslaught. His mind cannot comprehend such an outcome. And the sword knocked out of the man's hand at that moment just finishes its fall and plunges into the ground. Without wasting any time, Weiss first equips one extreme iron sword. And almost immediately, the system informs him about the equipment of a second, exactly the same one. The man standing next to Marquis Weiser is amazed out loud that there are two swords. Well, the Lord of the Knight's Garden himself also uncontrollably asks when this guy managed to get such a weapon. Meanwhile, Weiss himself is already attacking his opponent with all his might, demonstrating his own skill. The knight can only defend himself, not having the opportunity to spare even a second to attack. Noting that the interval between Weiss's attacks has shortened, he assumes that the boy wants to take him with speed. However, analyzing his opponent's blows, the man realizes that they are too light. Drawing a parallel, he begins to talk about the two-handed sword, starting with the fact that it is slow. But at the same time, this would be enough to slightly wound a knight even through armor. A man thinks that he only needs to protect a few areas, so it's even easier. However, his thought remains unfinished because it is interrupted by an unexpected attack. Weiss changes his grip as quickly as his tactics, preparing to finish it. And while the guy is swinging, his opponent manages to let the thought into his head that Weiss has switched. The boy asks him to watch carefully, saying that now he will show him the true sword of the King of Knights. Weiss himself recalls the moment when the system allowed him to choose 2 awards from 20 offered. The boy discovered among them the true attitude, the demon-slaying sword, and the extreme rod. Looking at this sword, Weiss thought that it was a transcendental version of the basic weapon with imbalanced effects. The guy figured that since he had Michaela's set, it would be nice to double the bonuses, and he took it. As soon as the 2 swords were in his hands, the system reported the recreation of the King of Knights sword technique. He was very surprised by this then, but now he understands what it all meant. Weiss's opponent is still trying to defend himself, unable to squeeze in even during the short pause. Well, our guy is happy about this, because this way he can show off his strengths in all their glory. As a barrage of new attacks falls upon the knight, he tries to control his thoughts. But it is incredibly difficult, because he cannot even understand what this impossible technique is. The man understands perfectly well that the advantage is now on Weiss's side, and he wants to change this by stopping him. Nothing better comes to mind than to break the distance, but even this requires effort. And the knight understands this perfectly well, but does not give up trying to figure out how to carry out his plan. He thinks that as soon as he tries to break the distance, Weiss rushes at him with twin blades, and at the moment when the knight goes for a frontal attack on the guy, he switches to a two-handed sword and upsets his balance. The man wonders if such a fencing technique even exists. After all, this man doesn't just restrict his movements with attacks, it looks as if space is under his control. People become stupefied when they encounter something incomprehensible, something that has surpassed the limits of their understanding. They enter a state in which they can only observe, and this now concerns everyone on this site. This strange style impressed not only Hudson and Isabella, but also the Marquis of Weiser himself. There was no need to even mention the knight who fought Weiss, he was literally taken aback. And this played a role, determining the only outcome for this man. At that moment, Weiss, using the King of Knights Wilhelm's technique, performed a world-cutting strike. Having accomplished his plan, the guy froze, realizing that he had nowhere to rush. And the very next moment, the blade falls from the weakened fingers of his opponent. The man, swallowing nervously, begins to speak, but pauses because of the uncontrollable trembling in his voice. Yet before he falls unconscious, he finishes his thought by saying that he has lost. Weiss lowers her head, relaxing her tense shoulders, forcing every muscle in her body to relax. And then he roars loudly, addressing the organizer of this battle with the words, "Is this enough?" The man hesitates, and then a knight standing next to him addresses him in a stuttering voice, calling him Lord. Oddly enough, Weiser responds in turn, addressing the knight and calling him Lucas. And at the moment when the knight already agrees, the man asks him to treat Weiss with respect. Weiser calls the guy a follower of Wilhelm and the venerable King of Knights. Later, it is said of Serengeti that she has not risen since returning from the Great Expedition. Her father tried everything to awaken his daughter, but everything was useless. Even the priestess did not help. Weiss stands silently by her friend's bed for a while, wondering in her head what would be best to do. And then he activates the hidden trait called Great Sage. Everything turns out exactly as Weiss thought, and the girl is cursed by the Demon King. Weiser asks if there is definitely a way to wake up his daughter, and the guy reminds him of his words. He repeats that he is not sure about this, but he is going to try to do it. And the boy calls upon his class's ability, bestowing upon Serengeti the blessing of the stars. At first, everyone reflexively recoils from the blinding light that pours out from under his hand. But at the same time, it cannot help but impress, and Weiser even screams. While Weiss is doing his actions, the system informs him that all the star power will be absorbed. Her next notification is that his star power is insufficient. But this is for the complete removal of the curse, so it is removed only temporarily. Well, the very next moment a miracle happens, Serengeti slowly comes to its senses. In a weak and hoarse voice, due to the lack of much practice, the girl asks where she is. Treacherous tears begin to well up in her father's throat, but he tries to swallow them back as quickly as possible. And yet, he finds it difficult to control his emotions, and the man is overjoyed that his daughter has woken up. The girl gasps weakly, and the Marquis asks her if she recognizes him. Serengeti asks Hudson's name questioningly, and without realizing it, Weiser agrees, but stops short. The man, stuttering in surprise, asks Serengeti who he is. The real Hudson, who has been standing somewhere behind all this time, begins to speak, but stumbles. But he still pulls himself together and apologizes to the girl for coming to her so late. The man hesitantly calls his bride by name, while obsessive thoughts swarm in his head. Hudson hoped that Serengeti would survive, and that if he joined the city council, the Marquis would recognize him. And even if the girl lost half her body, this man was ready to become her legs. As long as Serengeti was alive, Hudson was ready to take care of her forever. He sincerely believed it. But this belief was the product of arrogance and greed. The possibilities were not endless, and Serengeti was fading with each passing day, her face now haggard. And the hand, which had previously been so strong when holding the sword, became like a dry branch. And if Weiss had been even a single moment late, Hudson would never have seen his bride again. The man meanwhile repeats his words of apology for being so late. Weiser asks him who he is, but Weiss asks the Marquis to stop, explaining the situation. When he says that the curse is not completely broken, both men begin to bombard the guy with questions. Weiss says the Serengeti will hold out until the end of the day at best, but that can be fixed. The guy says that for this, he needs to find another star. He thinks that he needs more star power. The first thing Weiss considers himself obliged to do is return the 5 stars that remained after Wilhelm's death. After all, the hidden effect of his class allows him to read the memory of the previous owner of the stars. Thinking he needs to ask Serengeti about his death, Weiss asks everyone to leave them alone. No one objects, and after a while, a conversation begins between Hudson and Weiser. The Marquis inquires about the secret wedding with his daughter, and his interlocutor, apologizing, agrees. After listening to the rest of Hudson's words, Weiser slowly exhales and speaks again. Hudson is amazed to hear words of gratitude addressed to him for having made such a journey for the Serengeti. And yet the Marquis says that his interlocutor will not see the girl again. Hudson says he knows he doesn't deserve it, but asks to be given a chance. Weiser says it's not a question of whether he likes him or not, but of how much the great expedition cost them. When the treasury was empty, he had to humiliate himself and ask for help from others, and then the Duke of Siena approached him. He lent them a huge sum, but on the condition that they would give him the Serengeti afterwards, and there was no choice. Weiser believed that for the sake of her reputation, Siena would not abandon his daughter, even in her current state. And so it happened that in a month Serengeti would be sent to the Duke's house. Hudson is at a loss when he hears that this is all for the sake of protecting the territory and the girl herself, and that he'd better forget about her. Meanwhile, the silence in the Serengeti room is broken by a girl asking Weiss who he is. He calls himself the successor of the King of Knights William, and says that he has come to announce his death. Pausing to catch his breath, Serengeti says this is a lie because Wilhelm had no successors. Weiss mentally notes that he didn't expect anything else from his confidant, and general phrases don't work. Then he begins to talk about the day the girl first encountered the star. The guy says something that no one but Wilhelm could know. He talks about what Serengeti was afraid of. She was afraid of swallowing the star, of rising and ceasing to be Serengeti, and he could not understand her anxiety then. However, now, Weiss says he understands that the girl wanted to maintain her love for Hudson. Serengeti asks the guy how he knows all this, because only Wilhelm knew about it. He begins. Without stopping, Weiss continues to talk about how he supported her that day. Hearing these words, the girl completely loses the power of speech. Her thoughts become confused. Now they both return in their thoughts to the moment when Weiss, as Wilhelm, turned to her. And the very next moment his character told Serengeti to shut up and act. And then the girl understands everything, clarifying that he is Wilhelm. Weiss, speaking about the fact that circumstances developed in such a way that his appearance changed, confirms these words. Adding that he can tell her anything else if needed, the boy recalls his support of the Serengeti. Of course, it was not he himself who spoke these words, but it was an action that reflected Wilhelm. Serengeti, meanwhile, says that's enough, and Weiss thanks her for believing him. Assuming that the boy has become a sinner, the girl remarks that he will now have to be wary of hunters. Sinners are people who have entered into other people's bodies, but still retained their memory. Asking Serengeti not to worry about it, Weiss asks her to tell him about his last moments. And he says that on that day, he definitely killed the Demon King. Weiss expresses confidence that he then pierced his core with a path of light, and his body began to disintegrate. However, there is something that happened in that last moment that haunts him, because at that moment everything around froze, and then Wilhelm's consciousness switched off. Even now, Weiss feels regret when he says that he simply died later. Turning again to Serengeti, the boy asks her to tell him the truth about his death. The great expedition involved 200,000 elite fighters, a force never seen before. The spirit of all these people was fueled by ambition, and they used all their knowledge to prepare for the expedition. When developing the expedition plan, every variable was taken into account and no room for error was left. Then it seemed that everything was perfect. Everything was supposed to be this way. Lost in terrifying thoughts, Serengeti tilts her head back to search for something. She desperately tries to find in her head the answer to the question that torments her so much, to find strength within herself. She is asked to go further, promising to give a blessing, even in exchange for her own life. She hears words of recognition that this is his limit and another request to move forward. In the ears of the Serengeti, words are heard about not stopping and asking to hurry. The words of all these guys, all their requests, their desire to give the last, all this torments the soul terribly. Serengeti thinks that it's all over, and despite all the sacrifices, they couldn't get to the Demon King. However, in return, the expedition lost too much, and this entire well-thought-out plan went down the drain. Meanwhile, distracting the girl from her depressing thoughts, the crackling of dry earth is heard behind her. With every second it intensifies and scales up, spreading over an ever larger perimeter. The crackling sound is replaced by an otherworldly, wheezing growl from many voices. And Serengeti keeps thinking about how their enemies attacked them, as if they knew their every move in advance. The girl could give only one explanation for this: there was a traitor among them. It was only for this reason that their unit could fall apart from within so spectacularly, and Serengeti wonders if their expedition was doomed to failure from the start. However, the next moment, the disturbing thoughts are drowned out by a voice saying that this is not the end. A sudden bright flash of light rushes towards the undead with lightning speed, and the very next moment they, cut into many pieces, fly apart in all directions. A familiar voice addresses Serengeti, noting that she looks quite exhausted. And Wilhelm, covering the girl with his powerful body, allows her to rest a little. Turning towards his interlocutor, just enough to see her, he says that it will all be over soon. Unable to believe what he saw, as well as his ears, Serengeti is simply speechless. Wilhelm was considered a true god of martial arts in the flesh. In front of this man, the demons looked so pitiful that one could only sympathize with them. So overwhelming was Wilhelm's aura, and what was the cost of even one blow from him? He changed the landscapes for them, and the mood of the Serengeti changed at that moment as if by the snap of a finger. For William cut through the deep despair that it was all over with nothing less than his sword. And at that moment he was so confident that there was no doubt that they would win. And later, supported by her leader, Serengeti said that he had no need to do this. She explained that her body had already recovered sufficiently, but the man asked her not to worry. Wilhelm asked if they were the only survivors, and Serengeti answered in the affirmative. Then the man said that at least she should survive and return home. The girl was surprised by these words, but she said nothing at the time, and Wilhelm continued. He remembered how Serengeti would cry at night, saying she wanted to see her Hudson, and she would flare up. At first embarrassed and almost screaming, the girl returns to her normal voice, denying it. However, she adds that no matter what, she will definitely meet her fiancé. However, her joy did not last long, and a bad feeling about it took hold of her insides. Serengeti didn't even immediately get her bearings. A surprised question escaped her lips. Wilhelm's lips twitched and, twisting them into a smile, the man cursed. After that, throwing Serengeti aside, away from danger, he said that this game is not an easy one. The girl, flying away to the side, could only shout out Wilhelm's name at that moment, and he advised her that when she returned, she should fall in love, get married, and, in general, do whatever she wanted. His last words were an admonition for the girl to simply live. And then Serengeti thought that, although the expedition had failed, the King of Knights had saved her life. And even if she returns alone, no one will dare blame her for it, because this battle was terrible and cruel. The girl thinks that if she returns, she will be able to see the one she misses so much. She will be able to return to her happy ordinary life. The main thing is to survive and get out. And yet, Serengeti is plagued by doubts even when Hudson's image appears so clearly before her eyes. And before she takes her next step, the girl apologizes to her fiancé. And then Serengeti, filled with determination, uses a change of position. Noticing something amiss, Wilhelm mentally utters the most sophisticated curses. And the next moment, a loud and powerful explosion fills the space. Because of the haze it creates, it is impossible to see anything at first. However, later, when the view opens up, Wilhelm absent-mindedly utters the name of his comrade. The picture that appears before his eyes makes his heart jump to his throat and beat rapidly. Well, in reality, the girl says that she was unlucky, even falling into the Demon King's trap. Weiss thinks that he acted on autopilot back then, and in the game it looked quite dramatic. Afterwards, Wilhelm used a powerful concealment spell and hid Serengeti's body. The girl says that the Demon King couldn't smell her, and she watched everything until the very end. Weiss says that he remembers it up to this point, but he is much more interested in something else. Serengeti continues by saying that the Demon King immediately revealed himself, and he did indeed fall. However, at the most decisive moment, Wilhelm suddenly froze as if time itself had stopped. The Demon King spoke, calling his opponent a monster and referring to him as a star. He admired the fact that William had come so far without any divine authority. However, the Demon King added that this was the King of Knights' mistake. After all, without the power of the goddess, even if he mutilates his flesh, he will not be able to destroy his essence. And then the Demon King, with his thunderous voice, expressed his respect to the King of Knights. And as a sign of his respect, he said that he would use Wilhelm's body as his new vessel. And the next moment, something unimaginable began to happen around the two men. With each passing moment, the eddies around this whirlpool swirled more and more. However, at some point, the already compacted cocoon gave way, and the first ray of light seeped through it. The Demon King paused for a few moments, processing what was happening, but then he spoke. Having called this girl's image Pinoy, he also called her a bitch. The Demon King asked her if she really wanted to take the life of the one who followed her to get the star. He was indignant, asking his silent interlocutor how she dared to call herself a goddess. And the next moment, the Demon King began to stutter as he went into denial and let out a broken cry. Turning again to Pina, his voice vibrating with uncontrollable rage, he promised to kill the goddess. And Serengeti says she doesn't remember what happened after that. Weiss mentally speculates that the Demon King attempted to take over Wilhelm's body. Thinking about the intervention of the goddess Pina, the guy wonders what happened then. Meanwhile, on the wall of the Knight's Garden Fortress, the guard asks his friend if they have been put on guard duty too often lately. He spreads rumors about delays in salary payments due to the estate's financial problems. There is no one to take over shifts. The guard begins to agree with these words, but stops mid-sentence. His interlocutor, noticing this, asks why he suddenly became silent. And the man, peering closely into the clouds of approaching dust, notices something. The realization of what he sees leaves him speechless for a moment. But the man still manages to somehow control himself and warn his partner about the monsters. And the very next moment, the guard screams desperately, alerting the area to a wave of approaching monsters. Long ago, a war between light and darkness broke out in Pangaea. In that bloodthirsty battle, one of the goddesses named Rhea died. And the continent on which all this happened was at that moment plunged into deep darkness. After this, the continent split into pieces, and the paths between the lands were blocked by a dark abyss. To connect disparate lands, people invested astronomical sums into creating warp portals. The warp is an unknown object capable of passing through the dark abyss, and the only way to travel. Abandoned and uncontrolled portals sometimes connect to the dark abyss and lead to disaster. Without making a sound, Weiss ponders what Serengeti said. He reasons that the Demon King tried to take over his body, but one of the goddesses intervened. And while Weiss isn't sure of his intentions, he thinks his theory may be correct. He means the reason why he couldn't kill the Demon King, in reality, it looked like this. But since Serengeti saw everything, those inside were not affected by this time stop. Thinking about the user who can destroy the essence of the Demon King, Weiss makes a guess. It could be a real person, and the guy is thinking about when people are called into the game. Weiss believes that you can become a player when your strongest character dies. After this, the guy begins to think about how he usually dealt with his characters. Thinking about all this, Weiss realizes that he now knows what to do next. And the guy begins with thoughts about the traitors who attacked his people, as if they knew all their movements. He recalls Hudson's words about the expedition failing because of the discord between the heroes. Weiss suggests that these could be the very same heroes he no longer even has memories of. And the guy is filled with confidence to track down each of them who stood in his way. After this, he begins to think about the fact that, most likely, the Demon King may be alive. Weiss is going to kill the Demon King, as he may be the reason why people become players. From the corridor, a worried voice is heard approaching the room, calling out to the astrologer. Hudson tells Weiss that things are very bad, and Weiss asks him what happened. He can't answer on the first try, but the man still says that the city is under attack. Without a moment's hesitation, Weiss immediately goes outside to find out for himself what exactly is going on. The picture he sees the next moment leaves the guy speechless for a couple of moments. The city is not just burning, there are hordes of monsters inside it, which the remnants of the troops are trying to resist. But they are noticeably inferior to these vile creatures, both in numbers and cruelty. Isabella begins to talk about the scale of the invasion and suggests that the monsters broke through the warp. Recalling how Visor spoke about the problems with the city treasury, Weiss is amazed at his short-sightedness. He wonders if the man even stole the warp maintenance budget. Meanwhile, new faces appear on the battlefield, swinging their weapons sharply as they move. Weiss can't help but call out to the owner of the Knight's Garden. Hearing a familiar voice, he turns his head towards the guy, calling him Wilhelm's successor. He's surprised that Weiss and his gang are still in town, and the guy asks him what's going on. The Marquis says that a wave of monsters has reduced the entire city to rubble, and that something seems to be wrong with the warps. Hearing that the situation has affected as many as 3 of them, Hudson is amazed by this, and Weiss calls it madness. Weiser admits that he is ashamed that he still asks the guys to help them fight the monsters. The system informs Weiss of a new task, and he mentally scolds the Marquis for giving it to him. The man, meanwhile, begins to beg the boy, saying that with the city's current forces, it is impossible to protect it. Hudson also approaches Weiss, asking him to save the Serengeti domain, and Isabella pulls him back. While the girl says such decisions are not made on emotion, Weiss considers this the worst-case scenario. The guy thinks that while the ordinary monsters are coming, the warriors are holding out, but this will not last long. After all, he knows for sure that in 10 minutes, a hybrid will appear, and they will all be killed. Weiss reflects on the fact that neither he nor anyone else present can handle the hybrid now. And then he thinks about the only way to prevent the emergence of hybrids, which is to destroy the warps. And all this must be done before 10 minutes have passed, then his task will also be completed. But there is a serious caveat, and that is that they do not have enough combat power. Weiss discusses why this is so, citing as one of the reasons the regular troops were busy defending the city. And this means only one thing, that the knightly order, and they must break through the wave of monsters. Weiss considers this a terrible gamble, as the chances of its success are negligible, but there is one loophole. And yet the guy thinks that the time limit is terrible, and without preparation it is completely unbearable. And the guy comes to the conclusion that the most rational thing to do now would be to simply get out of this place, because he just doesn't see the point in risking his life for all this hopelessness. Weiss begins to think that he can't let pity control him, when suddenly he hears a scream. He is so desperate that you involuntarily pay attention to him, because the person is asking for help. Those present, glancing in the direction of the scream and beginning to look into the clouds of smoke, discern this. The monsters are so merciless and bloodthirsty that they even attack ordinary, peaceful residents. The survivors, ignoring those who have already fallen, try to escape. And children who are left without parents and other loved ones do not know what to do due to unbearable grief. And right now the girl is asking, without knowing who, for help, and in between this she calls for her mother. Weiss's thoughts begin to get confused as soon as he hears another childish sob, his fists clenching tighter. Marquis Weiser's gaze changes as soon as he notices a new yet familiar face nearby. Seeing the priest, the man cries out uncontrollably, turning to him. And then, filled with determination, Marquis Weiser calls on all the knights to follow him. He gives them orders to finish off the monsters that are chasing Priest Andrew. Something flies past him, and literally a couple of moments later, the whistle of a sword is heard. The head of one of the monsters flies into the air, separating from the body, literally the next moment. And Hudson, turning to the priest, says that he needs to mount a horse, but the man does not understand him. And even despite the explanations, he says he still can't do it. During these conversations, at first none of the interlocutors notice the person approaching the priest. Only when he speaks up does Hudson scream, trying to protect Andrew, but he has already figured it out himself. Everything happens incredibly quickly. Isabella instantly cuts off the goblin's arm and head. Marquis Weiser is so impressed by this spectacle that he doesn't even find the strength to speak. Priest Andrew is also a man of few words, only calling the girl's sister in a cautious and questioning tone. And while he is trying to come to his senses, several pairs of legs approach them. Weiss is honest about how hard things can be, so she lets those who want to leave. Hudson asks him not to say that, because it is about protecting the Serengeti domain, so he will help. Isabella remarks that things have never been easy for them since they got together. Weiss pulls her back and says that this time he really needs their help. He thinks that no sane person would ever accept this task. The only reason he did this was not because people were dying, and not even a sense of responsibility for the city that fell after joining his expedition. Weiss also denies that this is a desire to protect the family of a subordinate who lost his legs while saving him. And it is certainly not a feeling of guilt towards the people who lost their families because of him. The real reason he took this assignment is because he's a psycho who loves hardcore. Having finished his mental reasoning, the guy calls on everyone to listen to him carefully. And then he says that the first thing they will do is cut their way out of their bodies. Marquis Weiser rushes forward on his steed, setting the tone for his small army. Of course, it doesn't compare to a horde of monsters, but the man doesn't intend to retreat. They ask the Marquis whether they will really continue to push forward, since they could be cut off from their own people behind enemy lines. Weiser remains silent, and then another subordinate approaches him, but even then the man does not respond. However, this does not mean that he does not hear them. He hears and understands that this undertaking is suicidal. But he remembers Weiss's words, who spoke of a breakthrough, obviously having a reliable plan. And the man also remembered his words, clarifying the details and reminding them of their current situation. And then Weiss asked him if there was another way out, and Weiser hesitated, trying to object. The guy said that until they destroy the warps behind the walls, the flow of monsters will never dry up, and he promised to do everything to ensure that they break through, no matter what it costs him. However, this required, no matter what happened, not to give in to weakness. Marquis Weiser gives his knights the order to rush forward without slowing down, no matter what. He tells them not to stop, no matter the circumstances, just as Weiss asks. And although the man himself was not entirely sure of the reliability of this plan, he put everything on the line. Thinking about this, the Marquis finds Weiss with his gaze and mentally addresses him with these words. And he, smiling, notes that Weiser ran without stopping and expresses satisfaction with this. And immediately after that, the guy adds that this is enough. The first part of his plan was to get within their reach, and that happened. The moment the huge tentacle breaks in half, it's not just the enemies who are surprised. Yet their surprise is much greater, and for a few moments the monster falls into confusion. The system, informing Weiss that he is using the Book of Teleportation, states the time of its action. Slowing down, he begins to estimate the distance separating them. Then the process starts, and the system reports a connection to the Bass Rock Forest location. And the master of the forest, who appeared the next moment, calling Vice his friend, says that he will repay him. The other higher dryads pick up the leader's words, calling the guy a friend of the forest. And already launching their nimble arrows at the enemy, they say that they have responded to his call. And the very next moment, the fast projectiles accurately find their targets. Marquis Visor, hearing strange sounds behind him, involuntarily asks what it is. Hudson, with mild disapproval but more than a little astonishment, notes that Weiss had an ace up his sleeve. The guy himself thinks that he would never have thought that something like this would happen. More specifically, he didn't think the skinny high dryad he met in the forest would help him so much. And while the monsters try to regroup, Weiss mentally turns to her forest friends. It allows them to show what true friendship means to them. Weiss notes that the monster has blocked the entrance, and the master of the forest expresses his understanding. The high dryad, pulling the bowstring, asks the guy not to worry about it, and, sending the arrow into flight, he tells Weiss that he will personally pave the way for him. It seems as if the arrow fired by the master of the forest is gaining momentum with each passing second. After all, she approaches the monster occupying the house so quickly that he doesn't have time to do anything. And then comes the very moment when she achieves her goal. And this is not just a blow, it is an explosion that leaves behind unimaginable consequences. Meanwhile, the other monsters also suffer, choking in their own blood. They suffer a variety of deaths, but there is one thing that unites them, and that is the speed with which they die. The Forest Master's attack power is incredible, and after a breakthrough, a thick layer of dust accumulates in the air. And although at first nothing can be seen through it, soon the sound of hooves appears, followed by cavalry. The Knights of Marquis Weiser regain their almost completely lost confidence in an effective attack. One of them, unable to contain his emotions any longer, speaks up. But with each new syllable, his voice gains power, and words of what they could do fly into the air. Following him, other screams fill the space around, and among them, Hudson's voice is heard. Turning to Weiss, Isabella remarks that all that remains is for them to destroy the warp. The boy can't believe that the master of the forest was able to clear the way for them so easily. Meanwhile, Marcus Weiser draws attention to himself, calling for everyone to remain silent. He says that it is too early to rejoice, because the flow of monsters has not yet dried up. The man reminds them that they have 6 minutes before the hybrid appears, so they must destroy the warps. He is interrupted by Weiss's voice, who suggests splitting into 2 squads. Weiser reminds the guy that they don't have time, and he says that he is well aware of this. But he suggests that the High Dryads hold back the horde that has broken into the city because the warp is full of monsters. He says that dividing into 3 squads is fraught with danger because they simply won't have time to destroy all the warps. Weiser says he understands this, but the other man doesn't understand what to do with the remaining warp. He reminds Weiss again that they don't have time to run from one warp to another. And then the guy declares that only he and Priest Andrew will go to the warp, which will be left without a squad. The gaze of all those present immediately turns to Weiss, and Marquis Weiser cannot resist. In his heart, he asks the guy what kind of ridiculous plan this is, because something like this is not even acceptable. Weiss asks them to trust him, assuming that such people are more likely to succeed. The guy expresses confidence that they will destroy the warp 30 seconds before the hybrid appears. Weiser says he doesn't know what Weiss is up to, but he'll trust him because they've gone too far. And with these words, the man takes off, leaving the guy behind and saying that he is counting on him. Hudson asks if he has a plan for this too, and Isabella tells the man not to doubt it. The girl explains her words by saying that this guy constantly does things that they cannot even imagine. Andrew asks Weiss what they should do, and he says it's simple, and the 2 of them will destroy the warp. When asked how they will do it, the guy says that he needs to think a little about how to pull it off. And Weiss begins to talk about the monsters that guard the warp where his companions went. He believes that there should be fewer monsters guarding them than in the city, and the route should be quick. The main difficulty is that as soon as one warp remains, a mutated monster will appear. Weiss knows for sure that he is much more powerful than ordinary monsters, so he is the one who should deal with him. He has a plan, and the guy believes that its implementation is possible with the help of Priest Andrew. But with every mistake, their chances of success will become less and less. Weiss thinks that all that remains is to hope that everything works out, and Andrew is surprised by the Hydragon. The system begins a countdown to the appearance of the Black Flesh hybrid, and with each passing second, the fighters become more and more uneasy, and so it goes on until they have just over a minute left. By the time Isabella reaches warp, there are 34 seconds left before the hybrid appears. Around the same time, Marquis Weiser, like her, carries out his plan. There are still too many monsters before the last remaining portal. However, Weiss's Hydragon continues to destroy them on the orders of its master. The same one, assessing the situation, thinks that the minimum conditions for victory have been met. And this means that there is only one thing left, which is exactly what the system reports. A mutated monster has been detected and is passing through the warp right now. Its appearance is accompanied by a powerful and loud explosion along with a flash of light. and the very next moment the system reports his appearance, and he begins to descend from the warp steps. This monster has been given the name Dark Warrior, and he looks around carefully. What he sees leaves him amazed, because he expected to see something completely different. Weiss, while keeping a close eye on the approach of his enemy, thinks that there is only one left. Meanwhile, there are 28 seconds left until the black flesh hybrid appears. Marky Weiser orders his army to gallop towards the last warp as fast as they can. The man thinks that Wilhelm's heir is dealing with the last warp, but time is short. The Lord of the Night's Garden also addresses Weiss mentally, asking him to finish everything quickly. Well, he himself activates the Celestial Dragonborn set effect. Keeping a close eye on his opponent's movements, the guy moves on to his next step. It activates the next effect, and this time, it's the Sandals of Hermes. Weiss adjusts her grip on her sword and prepares to execute a beautiful turn. However, he fails to do this, which turns out to be stunning for the guy. The mutated monster isn't about to play games, and he throws his opponent with all his might. Somehow, Weiss manages to brace himself and stop in his tracks. But it still doesn't come easy to him, and the guy tries to figure out how to act more rationally. Meanwhile, the Hydreigon comes to the aid of its master, rushing at the enemy with a loud roar. Each of its heads rushes towards the mutant monster, intending to tear it apart. But this idea turns out to be a losing one. This becomes clear at the moment when the ringing of the blade is heard. Hydreigon recoils from the mutant with a wild, short roar, and the system reports that it has been destroyed. And then she sends another notification, according to which Weiss has 21 minutes left. Knowing full well that this is no time to hesitate, the boy rushes at his enemy with his sword drawn. When a weapon passes over it, the system reports the iron sword as equipped. Following the previous notification, another one exactly the same appears. Well, at this moment the mutated monster makes a quick step lunge forward. It is accompanied by a wide and equally rapid swing of the weapon. But Weiss's severed arm suddenly begins to miraculously heal quickly. It was Priest Andrew who came to his aid just in time, noticing something was wrong. The mutated monster is not going to give up on his plan so easily, raising his sword again to strike. However, this time Weiss is more cautious and does not let his opponent get too close to him. Meanwhile, there are 17 seconds left until the black flesh hybrid appears. Realizing that he can't reach Weiss, who is hovering in the sky, the monster abruptly changes its trajectory. The priest is at a loss, fully understanding that he is completely defenseless against such an opponent. But the next moment, something happens that makes the old man breathe a sigh of relief. Yet this is not the end, for behind him Andrew hears the familiar roar of a monster. But Weiss still finds a way to help his companion by performing a clever maneuver. However, looking around, the guy understands that their position is now quite problematic. Weiss sees no point in being petty, because it's not just his life that's at stake. That's why he immediately uses the piercing star skill, and the system reports this. Father Andrew is afraid to even breathe, watching the events of the last seconds with bated breath. Weiss is about to unleash her wrath on her main opponent before the heat wears off. And at the moment when they come together in battle again, there are 11 seconds left before the hybrid appears. Father Andrew finds the strength to stand up, but almost immediately regrets it. He peers desperately into the dust and stone chips, ready to act if necessary. Well, the first drops of blood fall to the ground under the blades still brought together. The mutated monster's gaze, as before, expresses nothing at all, but is still directed at the enemy. Weiss is silent, and it is impossible to see his own face because his head is lowered. But then he picks it up and impatiently expresses joy that it has finally happened. The moment the guy turns to the monster, ordering him to stay like that, he becomes confused. Meanwhile, not allowing his opponent to retreat, Weiss turns to Priest Andrew. He asks him to begin reading the prayer of exaltation. And then the guy literally starts shouting, asking the man to pray for him and exalt him. And they both remember what happened just over 4 minutes ago. The priest asked Weiss if the two of them could handle it and added that he didn't want to doubt it. He replied that if they had more time, it would really work out, but not now. And then the man flared up, asking why all this was happening then, because if they didn't succeed, something terrible would happen. Weiss asked the priest if he wanted to save the residents, and Andrew responded with an unwavering agreement. And the guy, having said that since it was so, asked the man to read a prayer of exaltation for him. Only a few true priests can read this prayer. But if this is done, for a brief moment the target gains a power that is similar to the divine power of the goddess. However, offering the prayer of exaltation to anyone other than the goddess may mean leaving the goddess's shadow. And for Andrew, who was born solely to serve the goddess, this is worse than tearing out his own heart. For characters like him, it's worse than the all-encompassing feeling of emptiness. In other words, by reciting the prayer of exaltation, the priest puts the most important thing at stake. And that's all because the prayer of exaltation is the absolute, the very last technique. And Weiss at that moment asked Andrew to give up what he had dedicated his life to. The man was silent for a long time before asking his interlocutor his next question. He asked how Weiss knew that he had mastered this prayer, since it was unknown to almost anyone. The guy said it didn't matter. All that mattered at that moment was that Andrew was capable of it. The priest stated that Weiss knew the consequences, and he confirmed this, but did not back down. The guy said that his plan took into account the fact that the man would not be able to refuse because he is not like that. Andrew believed that this was practically the same as forcing a sacrifice by taking the lives of the townspeople hostage. Weiss mercifully allowed his interlocutor to hate him, and the latter suddenly thanked him. He said that if he hadn't spoken about it first, he wouldn't have been able to say it out loud himself. Andrew expressed confidence that he would have continued to live like this, choosing between faith and lives. Hearing repeated words of gratitude, Weiss simply could not believe his ears, because he expected something different. Now the guy is thinking about the fact that this character gives out most of the honor side quests, and he expresses his attitude towards him, thinking that he respects Andrew more than anyone else. And the very next moment the system starts bombarding the guy with notifications about the buff's effects. Thinking this over in his mind, Weiss says out loud that with such stats, he can imitate Wilhelm himself. While he's saying all this, his opponent remains immobilized, and the guy continues. He says that if he were his old self, he wouldn't have had to use this technique on him. And Weiss makes the drops, which had been floating extremely slowly in the air until then, start moving. To achieve this, the boy uses the fencing technique of Wilhelm, the King of Swords. This name is already familiar to us. It is called the strike that splits the world. And the very next moment, a strong tremor runs through the body of the mutated monster. This technology turns out to be so large-scale that it is visible to everyone many miles from the third warp. Faced with an unknown source of power, the townspeople try to understand where it comes from. They gasp and start stuttering, trying to express their assumptions about this. Meanwhile, the system reports that the prayer of exaltation has ended. At the same time, the piercing star skill is deactivated, and Weiss turns to Priest Andrew. He tells the man that he saved the entire city, and there was only a second left before the hybrid appeared. Meanwhile, Andrew recalls how he met the King of Knights several years ago. Falling prostrate before William, the priest begged and prayed him not to ignore his request. He asked his interlocutor for only one thing: to save his daughter. The problem was that the priest's beloved daughter, Andasar, was cursed and turned into a monster. But even though she became a monster, Andrew still loved her very much and could not lose her. Yet, demonic energy gradually consumed Andasar, and it became difficult to cope alone. And then Andrew began to secretly seek help, and his main goal was to find someone who could cleanse his daughter. He had to be strong enough for this, and had to keep everything secret, Wilhelm agreed. The man said only one word, but that was enough to bring him to his senses and begin to act. The moment they found themselves inside the room where Andrew was hiding his daughter, Wilhelm immediately saw her. The possessed woman behaved surprisingly calmly, but perhaps it was because she had not yet noticed them. Wilhelm asked to clarify whether this was the same girl, and Andrew, confirming this, asked him to help. All the King of Knights said then was to express his understanding and head straight towards the possessed woman. And now the priest thinks that the King of Knights William saved him and his daughter. While the system announces that the Dark Legion is returning to the Abyss, the man remains stunned into silence. And then he can't stand it anymore and asks Weiss who he is and how he was able to use Wilhelm's techniques. Weiss answers evasively, saying that one could say that he is his successor. Andrew mentally admires the coincidence of circumstances because he was saved first by the teacher, then by the student. Thinking that this is incredible, the man does not even feel the moisture on his lips. However, the very next moment a cough bursts out of him, and this no longer goes unnoticed. Weiss also notices this, and, jumping up, shouts out the name and rank of the priest as he runs. Finding himself very close, the guy asks the man if he is okay. He says that his strength disappeared due to a side effect of the prayer, and it seems that the disease has returned. This is news to Weiss, and he has an idea, although he is not sure it will work. The boy says that he heard that in the past his teacher helped a priest, and he confirms this. Weiss continues by saying that he is also aware that Andrew gave William an indulgence. The guy says that the King of Knights has pledged to take the priest's sins upon himself and use it on him. And while Andrew says that no one could use it, Weiss absolves him of all his sins. An indulgence is a forgiveness that the High Priest of the Order of the Goddess can grant 3 times. Reflecting on this topic, Weiss thinks that his contract with Drum was also a kind of faith. Meanwhile, the priest asks incredulously that his strength is returning to him. While he says it's impossible, Weiss thinks that he wasn't entirely sure about it either. Andrew asks his interlocutor if he may have received an indulgence from another priest. The priest still doesn't calm down, asking the guy if he really received the indulgence illegally. And he, not knowing how to explain everything correctly, desperately tries to come up with it. Isabella notices Weiss and Father Andrew first, informing the others and asking if they are okay. The guy mentally notes with relief that the horsemen appeared just in time. He says that it looks like they have been searched, and his interlocutor wants to continue their conversation. Saying that Andrew is more persistent than he thought, the guy suggests that he consider what happened a blessing. Later, Weiss thanks the King of the Forest for saving them and the Dryads, who says that this is normal for friends. The man asks the boy not to forget that if their friends are in trouble, they will always come to his aid. After the departure of the High Dryads, restoration work began in the city, paid for by Hudson. In order to restore the warp and prevent it from becoming distorted again, they decided to hire royal alchemists. Andrew has indeed regained his powers, but it will take him some time to fully recover. They decided to treat the wounded with potions, since there were no priests left in the city, naturally, at the expense of the same Hudson. In response to his indignation, Weiss suggested that the man consider that this was all for the sake of the Serengeti, since it was her heritage. The guy asked his interlocutor if the girl had fallen asleep again and received a positive answer. Hearing that she seemed to have been consumed by the Demon King's curse again, Weiss asked Hudson to take something. The man was surprised by the high-level elixir filled with blessings and asked a question. However, Weiss ignored him, instead of answering, giving recommendations on how to use the elixir. Hearing that thanks to him, Serengeti's legs will be restored, Hudson realizes that Weiss is also a player. The man started talking about how when he saw the rankings for the fourth task, he recognized Weiss's name. At the same time, Hudson realized that he was the one who owned the most famous characters in Pangea. He expressed confidence that the person in front of him was the legendary player who had recently disappeared, Phantom. Weiss then said that when people call him legendary, he even gets a little embarrassed, and Hudson apologized. The man, realizing what he was doing, asked how he should now address Weiss, and he suggested using the informal you. Hudson expressed concern about the guy's spending on the elixir, but the guy didn't see anything wrong with it. The man suggested that the city's low combat power had a significant impact on the final score. Agreeing with him, Weiss opened the Golden Rule store, thinking that he needed it to survive. The guy knew for sure that he couldn't fall out of the ranking, and he remembered the materials he had used earlier. He remembered that he was only able to get one fang from the white monster because it was very strong. Weiss realized that the remaining time was more important than it seemed because when the character died, the items did not disappear. He told Hudson that he wanted to go on his next mission and asked him to keep an eye on the Serengeti. The man remembered his conversation with Marquis Weiser and told Weiss that they had a problem with that. Hudson continued by saying that Maxim is one of the 8 heroes who helps that kingdom, and that changes a lot. And then Weiss remembered what kind of person this man was who was with him on the expedition. Maxime then ran away, and the guy noted that it looked like their first meeting would take place earlier than he expected. Weiss asked Hudson to stall for time until his return, assuming that Weiser would help. The guy promised to do everything quickly and ordered the man not to give Serengeti to anyone, but he had doubts. Weiss said that the girl said that although Hudson was weak in combat, he could be relied upon. The guy noted that Serengeti trusted him and told the man that he was counting on him. Before doing anything, Hudson was surprised and silent for quite a long time. However, then, without saying anything more unnecessary, he wished Weiss a safe journey. Sometime later, the guy notes that this was not at all necessary, but thanks his interlocutor. He says that these clothes will serve them well, and Weiser wishes the guy luck. Remembering the reward, the guy asks to talk to Hudson about it, and the Marquis agrees. Having finished with the farewells, our couple sets off, beginning their journey. Weiss reluctantly stops at the monolith, unconsciously beginning to search for familiar names with her eyes. Among them, he finds James, Noah, Lucas, Jacob, and Zion. Weiss thinks that all these people are the bravest of heroes and mentally addresses them. The boy politely and respectfully asks them to rest in peace. He thinks that, even if belatedly, he wants to express his deep gratitude to them. The Marquis is asked what reward Weiss was talking about, and he says that he is talking about payments to the families of the deceased. Young people find this hard to believe and are amazed by it because the amount is quite impressive. But Weiser dispels their doubts completely, adding that Weiss said to contact Hudson about this. Isabella asks the guy where he will go now, and he says wherever the stars lead him. The girl is surprised when Weiss says he will take one person with him, asking who it is. The guy simply confirms his words, thinking that he will still be useful to them for future battles. And what they have in common with Isabella is that she is another character Weiss once neglected. And this guy's name is Isaac, the lightning split. From this moment, several days pass. This place is called the Raven Cemetery Dungeon. The moment the raven's hoarse cawing cuts through the air, the system sends Weiss a notification. It's about the guy defeating the boss of this dungeon, whose name is Raven's Corpse. Weiss receives a fragment of the Fallen Golden Rule, enhanced Raven Corpse Core, as a reward. The guy expresses satisfaction that it fell out the first time, and Isabella asks what it is. Weiss replies that these are materials that will allow them to enter Cramdal, the city where Isaac is located. It is a city of demons and monsters, ruled by the White King, the guardian deity of the North. It is home to various demons and mystical creatures that possess intelligence comparable to the king. Thinking that normal people can't get there, Weiss activates the hidden trait, Glutton. As he prepares to take his next action, the boy thinks that the Raven Corpse Core changes everything. Isabella, seeing what her companion is doing, turns to him with confusion and questioning. The system, by reporting the completion of the absorption, notifies about the beginning of the evolution of the trait. After some time, the Glutton trait evolves into Scavenger King. Weiss can now summon ravens, but their number varies depending on the star's power. The guy thinks that he never even dreamed of transforming himself so perfectly. He considers it flawless. Glancing at the cannonball on his chest, he wonders if it's really there for camouflage. Isabella can't take it anymore, asking the guy what's wrong with him, and he says it's Raven's disguise. He adds that in this form he will be able to enter Cromdell without any problems, and at the end of the sentence, he croaks. Isabella is puzzled by this and asks about it, but Weiss denies that he croaked. The girl admires how completely the guy got into character, because he even imitates the cry of a raven. Asking her to remain silent, Weiss suggests that Isabella wear the equipment to obtain the wings. The guy explains that when she gets the dragonborn wings, she will look like a half-dragon. But in fact, this is not important, but the fact that in this armor, Isabella will look like a monster. The system reports that Michaela's set changes appearance depending on gender and level. Isabella asks Weiss how he knows it will work, and he says the stars know everything. And while he thinks about how Wilhelm was once there, the girl expresses her opinion about her companions. Isabella thinks that all these monsters seem like pretty menacing creatures. She guesses they are all level 7 or 8, and considers it a miracle that the journey went so smoothly. Weiss begins to explain to the girl why this is so, saying that the intelligence of these monsters is about the same as that of humans. He expresses confidence that they will not cause trouble, and Isabella asks why. And while Weiss says that these are the rules of this place, the following happens. The newly spawned Tier 9 raid boss, the giant phantom of hatred, says he's hungry. Raising his huge clawed paw over the ship, he continues to express his need. And now there is very little time left before the collision, but the paw still does not reach the deck. Along with the thunderous tone, a flash cuts through the air, accompanied by a strange sound. And the giant phantom utters the last phrase with a questioning, puzzled intonation. His previously very mobile paw freezes literally a few meters from the mast and does not move. Isabella is amazed that the raid boss was turned to stone so quickly, Weiss explains. He says that this is one of the key ways to protect Cromdell. No one dares to cause trouble here. And ultimately, anyone who dares to break this rule will face an unenviable fate. Weiss says that this is precisely why evolved creatures never quarrel. Passengers are apologized for this incident, assuming that an evil spirit has entered Cromdell, but the evolved sewer rat says there's nothing to worry about. She adds that they will soon arrive in Cromdell and asks them to forget about this unpleasant incident. Instead, the mutated creature suggests enjoying a quiet day. Turning to Isabella, Weiss begins to tell her in more detail about the place they are heading to. He asks her not to let her guard down for a second, because if they are discovered, they will be in trouble. Sometime later, they find themselves on a gloomy street and hear a beckoning female voice. Its owner suggests visiting a folk hot spring to cleanse the body and spirit. Her partner adds that the bodies of those who decide to experience this miracle of nature will be cleansed. Isabella expresses disappointment, admitting that she had imagined this city completely differently. Weiss himself is confused, wondering what the hell is going on. After all, just a year ago, when he was here, there was no hot spring, the land here was barren. Weiss continues to wondering what they did to this place. Isabella brings him out of his thoughts, asking permission to ask the guy a question. After he responds, the girl asks Weiss who this Isaac is. The guy remembers that Isaac is a notorious fugitive who is involved in criminal activities. He extorted money from the nobility and priests, robbed his allies, pretending to be one of the mercenaries. This man also killed key figures in the city and then activated the warps. This led to a monster invasion, and Isaac was the mastermind behind the destruction of the mining town. Weiss says that, in a nutshell, there are no more people like Isaac in Pangaea. Expressing her understanding on this matter, Isabella comes to the conclusion that this guy is unusual. Weiss begins to think about how he has watched Pangaea lose players many times, but he himself did nothing. The guy says out loud that Isaac needs to be recruited for a great cause. Isabella again says that she understands. However, she considers him dangerous, so she says that she is ready, if she has no choice, to eliminate Isaac. With another croak, Weiss suggests that Isabella can be relied upon, and Isabella asks the guy if he will tell her what this Isaac looks like. He thinks about it. Suddenly gasping, Weiss says that the guy has a lightning-shaped scar running across his forehead. And, after thinking a little, he adds that Isaac has light hair. Also, Weiss says this guy has sky dragon-born wings like Isabella. He is about to add something else, but stops short when he hears a loud sound from ahead. Isaac addresses his interlocutor politely, but the tone of his voice suggests otherwise. He repeats that their hot spring is the best and starts to get even more excited. Isaac declares to his interlocutor that he will not leave without visiting their hot spring. At some point, the guy notices other people's eyes on him and abruptly turns in their direction. He rudely asks the witnesses of the scene if this is really a performance for them, and is rude to Isabella. At this time, Weiss is already coming up with a strategy that will allow him to approach Isaac. The pretext is Isabella's wings, or rather, the half-dragons, but the girl herself doesn't grasp the essence. It doesn't last long. Isabella picks up Weiss's thought, saying that she hasn't seen her kinsman for a long time. Weiss calls this moment touching, and continues to develop the theme, but Isaac is now rude to him. And then he almost reveals Isabella's identity, but Weiss manages to do so in time. The guy asks Isaac to watch his language, because the eyes of Medusa are constantly watching them. Weiss offers to talk to him for a bit, calling the guy the lightning split hunter. The blonde jumps away from him as if scalded, shouting out a question uncontrollably. Starting to stutter, he asks Weiss how he knows his name and says that he doesn't care about Medusa. Weiss asks his interlocutor not to pretend, saying that they are in the same boat. The guy begins to mentally reason about the reason for revealing Isabella's identity, because Isaac is the same. He got here in the same way as the girl, but only his wings are visible. Everything else on Isaac is the same, but invisible because he used an equipment invisibility potion. For Weiss himself, this doesn't matter because he can clearly see all of Isaac's equipment. And then the guy whispers to the blonde that no matter how carefully he hid the set, he couldn't deceive his eyes. Isaac changes his shoes in a flash, and the trio exchange pleasantries. Weiss approaches the blonde, suggesting they talk in a more secluded place, and he tenses up. The guy thinks, chuckling and looking around, and suddenly stumbles upon a flyer. Reading the title a little absent-mindedly, he says that hot spring sounds perfect. Finding himself where he needs to be, Isaac turns to the old man, saying that he has brought him 2 clients. The guy asks them to give him 2 rooms and suggests that they are not from here and have nowhere to go. The evolved goblin calls Isaac an idiot, reminding him that this is no way to treat customers. The old man asks who's paying, and the blonde offers to write it down for the disgruntled, grumbling cactus. The cactus man starts to complain about what he booked, and they are violating his rights. He turns to Weiss, calling him a great hero and asking him to help. However, he speaks in a language that no one present understands. And while he is indignant and complaining, Isabella begins to guess the true meaning of these words. The moment Weiss enters a hot spring, the system sends him a notification. It is about the effect of the tears from the younger goddess relaxing and stabilizing the body. Weiss notes that this is no ordinary hot spring, and Isaac agrees, giving reasons. Weiss asks since when this has been the case, since he doesn't remember anything like this before. The blonde doesn't know. Hearing that such sources began to appear spontaneously, the guy thinks about it. And Isaac asks him why they were looking for him, assuming that they also knew what he looked like. When Weiss says that the stars guided him, the blonde becomes wary, asking about his class. But he himself pulls himself up, believing that the Raven Corpse cannot be the Stargazer, Weiss retorts. When told that he himself drags people to this place by force, Isaac vehemently defends himself. Weiss says that regardless of whether he believes him or not, he came to him with a proposal. The boy invites Isaac to join him for 1 year, promising to help him in return. The blonde says he kept wondering what kind of nonsense Weiss would tell him, and adds that he wasn't interested. Isaac suggests to his interlocutor that they make sure their paths never cross again. And then Weiss asks the blonde if he is still running from his memories, and he explains that he means the mining town that Isaac once destroyed. Weiss recalls that he used the character back then as a protest against the developers. His toxicity levels were so high that the guy couldn't enter most cities, so he came across a village whose headman was a cliched villain who had taken everything for himself. Weiss decided to lay low in this place and introduced himself as a master hired by the elder, playing the role of a henchman. It was surprising, but unlike typical small-time villains, the village chief was resourceful. But at the same time, this ability was intertwined with enviable audacity and cruelty. Weiss recalls what happened when this ambitious villain was joined by a henchman. At that moment, this villain finally became a real monster. He once turned to Isaac, saying that he was very grateful to him, and the guy asked why. And he replied that it was for this mine, because he could not even imagine that he would become the owner of a mining town. Isaac noted that with this shaft, it would be possible to rise even higher, but he mentally shuddered. He was thinking that it was time to clean out the place and get out, and at that moment, his interlocutor spoke up. Turning to Isaac, he said that there was very little time left, and repeated the words about the greater benefit. Meanwhile, Isaac's gaze fell on the people who were working hard. Seeing that some of them were working on their last breath, the guy couldn't help but ask a question. He asked hesitantly who these endless crowds of people were, but the elder did not understand and asked for clarification. And yet the man replied that they had driven them all out of the surrounding towns, even though it had cost them dearly. He said it had cost him a fortune to keep the royal guards, but it was necessary. Because now, with such a workforce, they will rake in simply astronomical sums. While the boy pauses to catch his breath, the headman approaches him. The child's heart skips a beat when he notices a shadow looming over him. Well, the headman, under his frightened gaze, kneels down in front of the boy and begins to speak. He asks him about his condition, and the child says that he has not been feeling well since yesterday. The man begins to theatrically lament, noting that the boy would be better off resting. He can't believe his ears. The headman says that if the boy hadn't caught the infection, he would have squeezed even more pose out of him. The boy only has time to ask a puzzled question, and at that moment, the man expresses regret. He says he's sorry, but then switches gears, saying the slaves just need to be forced to reproduce. Isaac's insides turn over from these words, and the headman continues to revel in his power. He says that the day will come when they will be able to buy themselves an entire kingdom, and all thanks to Isaac. In his thoughts, there is only one thing, that everything has gotten out of control and it needs to be fixed. Weiss, in reality, continues his story, diluting it with the croaking that the image suggests. The guy says that Isaac summoned monsters to wipe the mining town off the face of the earth. But he adds that even if the blonde had not been there, he would still have fallen at the hands of the villains. Isaac says he doesn't know how Weiss knows this, but he asks him to stop acting like a know-it-all. But the guy doesn't stop, saying that hanging around in this place because of guilt is a mistake. The blonde can't resist, and, turning around abruptly, asks Weiss who he thinks he is. And at that moment, the guy announces his intention to destroy the Demon King. He adds that if Isaac really wants to atone for his guilt, he shouldn't hide here. Weiss offers the blonde a path that can truly help the world, saying that he is gathering allies. Isaac asks why he thinks he's reliable, since they barely know each other. Weiss answers evasively. Isaac says that he doesn't understand at all what his interlocutor is talking about, and asks him a question. Then, in response to this, Weiss offers him a bet, and the blonde even becomes interested. Weiss begins by saying that Kramdul is a city of monsters, and among monsters, superiority is determined by status. He's about to prove to Isaac in the language of monsters that he's not an ordinary raven, and the blonde is at a loss. His interlocutor begins to talk about the Tower of Mysteries, which is located in Kramdul. Weiss expresses her intention to reach this very mystery in order to confirm her status. The mystery is an effect, and while playing you can see how the character begins to glow. This also applies to objects. There are rare secrets with special functions, but even these only supplement some abilities. For monsters, mystery signifies belonging to a certain species. In the demon world, mystery is like a lion's mane. It is for this reason that the higher the mystery rank of a monster, the more significant its status will be. Good secret doesn't boost abilities, but strong monsters get them, so they began to prove their strength. One of the places where high-ranking secrets can be found is the Hall of Secrets in Kramdul. Isaac speaks up, clarifying to Weiss that he wants to prove his qualifications in the Hall of Mysteries. The blonde believes that he will be torn to pieces and die within 30 minutes of the attempt. Yet Isaac mercifully allows Weiss to do so, saying that the Hall of Secrets will just open in 2 days. The blonde promises to become not only Weiss's companion if he succeeds, but even his slave. And 2 days later, Weiss and Isabella are already at the entrance to this very Hall of Secrets. Looking around at those present, the Snake Princess speaks up. She is surprised by the number of people who want to come, but Weiss tells her that most of them are just spectators. The guy asks her if she's sure she doesn't want to join, and Isabella responds with a gentle refusal. Assuring Weiss that everything is fine, the girl says that she already has a secret and offers to show it. Without waiting for her interlocutor's consent, the girl activates her effect. And Weiss is surprised, wondering why she has the Jormungandr scale. The guy openly asks Isabella where she got such a secret, and the girl tells him. Hearing her say she dreamed it, Weiss wonders if he's missed something. The scale of Jormungandr is one of the 32 stars. This secret gives the right to search for the star of Jormungandr. Weiss suggests that the Desert Queen kept Isabella close to her for this very reason. On the other hand, if this is true, then this woman will never leave Isabella alone. And Weiss allows the thought to enter her head that perhaps they will still have to meet with the queen. Noticing the guy's thoughtfulness, Isabella asks him what's wrong, but he says that everything is fine. The mouse says that the gates of the Hall of Secrets will open soon and asks the participants to complete their preparations. She calls for those who are ready to gather at the entrance, and Weiss notes that everything is about to begin. The guy tells Isabella that he will go, and the girl tells him that she will wait for him. Other participants are also already starting to move towards the entrance to the Hall of Secrets. Stopping in front of the rat, the monsters remain to await his next instructions. Involuntarily scanning the crowd in front of him, Weiss notices someone special. The first thing that catches his attention is a creature called a true kin. Following him, the mature Leviathan also arouses interest, just like his fellow monster. The Trinity is concluded by the King of the Minotaurs, and Weiss cannot help but be amazed by this gathering of disaster-class monsters. The guy mentally wonders what kind of day it is today, because something like this doesn't happen often. As if reading his mind, the mouse says that it looks like they are being challenged by formidable opponents this time. He says that the White King is waiting for the emergence of someone worthy of taking his place. And that makes everything clear. Now Weiss understands why such heroic monsters gather here. But he just doesn't understand why they need to choose someone else if they already have 4 of the strongest monsters. And at that moment, a menacing voice is heard from behind the guy, telling him to get out of the way. Its owner asks if Weiss is also going to challenge the Hall of Secrets, and he confirms this. And after these words, perfect silence reigns around them for a while. But it doesn't last long, and the next moment the surrounding space is enveloped in laughter. The monsters' voices vie with each other to advise Raven not to take risks and to simply observe, thinking about his family. One of them decides to tell Weiss what's what, saying that high-ranking, elite monsters are fighting here. He says that he may have been born a little stronger than the other corpses, but he is still just an ordinary raven. The creature says that while he understands Weiss's zeal, he will not be able to transcend the limits of his species. And the moment he tells him to know his place, the gates open. And the very next moment, the system also informs Weiss that the Hall of Secrets has opened. The login will be completed in 5 seconds, and the guy tells the interlocutor that he talks too much. The guy addresses the monster as a worm, asking it to listen to him carefully, and the creature gets lost. And along with the countdown, Weiss tells his interlocutor that he has remembered his face. The moment the timer resets, the guy finds himself in a completely different location. Weiss says that everything is as he thought, namely that there is a separate dimension inside the tower. He recalls that the Hall of Secrets was the only place where Wilhelm failed to receive a top-ranking award. At that time, there was no information about this place, so Weiss was the first to set foot here and did not understand everything. Back then, there was only one attempt, but this time the guy thinks that everything will be different. While thinking that he has all the strategies in his head, Weiss simultaneously examines the skeleton soldier. He thinks that from Wilhelm's experience, he understood that 2 extremely strict conditions must be observed. The first of these is entry at the lowest possible level, because all the monsters in the Hall of Secrets are appropriate for the challenger's level. If the challenger's level increases, the same thing happens with the monster's level. And the higher the level of monsters, the more diverse their behavior becomes, and additional, new variables appear. And yet, despite this, entering at just one low level is not enough. At the same time, you need to exceed the standard characteristics of this level to meet the conditions. The guy starts talking about 200 talents and bonus characteristics for each level. He is sure that without them, it would have been impossible to even reach Kramdel. The second condition is class features. For example, Weiss needed the Raven Corps core. The Raven Corps has skills that are tailored to multi-target combat, and they perform well. Additionally, Raven's skills increase faster than those of high-ranking monsters. Thanks to the huge number of talents, even if you defeat monsters, Weiss's level will not increase. However, there are also advantages. Instead, the guy's skill level will be pumped up. And this means only one thing, that only he will be able to go to the very end. Isaac asks the cactus to hand out flyers instead of throwing them away, but he doesn't understand why he should do that. The guy starts to talk about how on a day like today it's more effective to give away, but then falls silent. The monsters are amazed that someone has already passed, although not even 3 hours have passed. For them, this is madness. One of them shouts, alerting those present that the first floor is on fire. Isaac, jumping up, is also amazed that someone has already managed to get past the first floor. Isabella's question is heard nearby. She clarifies what it means if it lights up. Isaac, turning his gaze to her, calls the girl that very fake half-dragon. He asks her if she knows anything about the Hall of Secrets, but she answers. Isaac says that when someone passes the first floors, the building lights up, and you can understand something from the light. Isabella expresses understanding and asks why everyone is surprised, and her interlocutor explains that to her as well. In the end, it turns out that passing the first floors is not so surprising, but no one has ever passed them so quickly. Isabella assumes it's Weiss, and it looks like he's done something incredible again. Isaac clarifies whether she means that Raven and asks the girl why she is so sure of this. Isabella reminds her interlocutor of his own words about unprecedentedness, believing that this is the point. Isaac doesn't understand her, and then the girl agrees to tell him since they will be working together. Isabella says that if the impossible suddenly becomes possible, it is only by the will of this stargazer. Meanwhile, one of the 4 great warriors, Varhaint, meditates. However, this is not allowed to continue for long. He is informed of a recent event that took place in the Hall of Secrets. Varhaint notes the speed with which this happened and expresses hope that a worthy opponent will emerge. Saying that it is because he does not want to experience that humiliation again, the creature remembers the past. Varhaint remembers how 2 years ago, they the 4 great warriors were defeated. And this happened at the hands of a man named William, the King of Knights. Varhaint suggests that they were not killed, only to be used as bait for the White King. However, they still remember this humiliation, and now the warrior asks him to report the lights on the 2nd floor. Varhaint is going to personally go and get the person who goes up to the 2nd floor, or higher. His mysterious interlocutor says that it looks like the lights have already gone up to the 4th floor. This causes Varhaint to freeze and he falls silent for several long moments. However, the warrior mentally notes that this monster is challenging the same floor as the White King. But what strikes Varhaint most is something else, and that is the speed with which it all happened. Finally, he speaks up and asks his interlocutor to tell everything to the other great warriors. Meanwhile, Weiss makes his next move, and the system sends him a notification. She informs the boy that the level of Crocorp summoning has reached its maximum and has evolved. At the same time, Weiss passes the 4th floor of the dungeon and is offered a reward for this. But the guy refuses because he wants to move on to a more difficult test. The system then informs you that the 5th floor test will be based on racial characteristics. Weiss also receives a hidden test from the Master of the Hall, passing the Hall of Mythical Secrets. While the guy is surprised by this, the system informs him that if he does not accept this challenge, the task will disappear. Meanwhile, Weiss is thinking about the part that begins next, which even Wilhelm has never gone through. The guy assumes that the reward will be a secret of a higher rank, but it is not in his interest to take the risk. And yet he is captivated by the thought that only he discovered this test. It is very tempting. Thinking about how many players could resist such an adventure, Weiss accepts the challenge. With these words, he steps into the open portal and finds himself in a strange place. The system starts sending various notifications about accepting a call, about monsters that have appeared, and others. At some point, Weiss realizes that the summoned monster gains his own hidden traits. And at the same time, the guy mentally notes that he has no idea what kind of monster this is. The system reports that the awakened skeleton soldier has used the druid's light spirit arrow. Fully aware of how this could all end, Weiss is at a loss for a few moments. Well, the next moment he will have to willy-nilly group himself together so as not to regret it. When he makes a jump, the guy finds himself on what he considers to be one of the most stable surfaces right now. However, his safety does not last long as the awakened skeleton soldier continues. But while he's using Giant's Grasp, Weiss doesn't hesitate either, breaking away from the spot. He shoots upward like a nimble arrow to avoid being captured by the giant bony hand, and he succeeds in this because it collapses on the spot where he stood, literally the next moment. While flying, Weiss thinks about the system's words about obtaining racial characteristics. The guy mentally states that they mean the ability to use the skills of the races, and based on this, Weiss believes that the complexity of this task, even for a hidden one, is excessive. And at the moment when he draws his sword, all the constellations show interest in the hidden task. Without betraying his excitement, Weiss admits that he didn't expect to be under such surveillance. After all, there are a whole 100 constellations, and this prompts the guy to speculate about the reason for such interest. He suggests that they might be curious about the hidden mission, or they might be enjoying Weiss's suffering. The guy uses the piercing star, the power of which lasts for 76 seconds. Weiss says he'd like to enjoy the new assignment longer, but it looks like he'll have to finish it quickly. After all, if he drags out the fight, it will cause a wave of disapproval among the constellations. As Weiss closes the distance with his opponent, the constellations watch him intently. However, they are not the only ones doing this. The monsters remaining outside are also closely watching the process. And although they cannot see what is happening inside, the light on the top floor says a lot. They wonder who it is and say they thought most of them had already left the test. Some people think that this monster must be the most powerful and terrible creature. Another is confident that he is cruel enough to surpass all other species. The others echo them, adding that this is probably a terrifying monster. The familiar trinity is also here, and although they remain silent, loud thoughts are swarming in everyone's head. Isaac wonders in disbelief if this is really the same raven. However, his thoughts are interrupted as the crowd begins to push when they are told to move aside. At first, it is unclear what is going on, but soon someone informs everyone else that these are the 4 great warriors. The Great Earth Dragon remarks that it has been a long time since they all gathered together. The Snake King says that this is not true, because only 2 years and 87 days have passed. Medusa, unlike her brothers in arms, remains silent. The dragon asks Varhane what he thinks is inside, and he says he doesn't know. But he is sure that in the tower, there is someone who challenges the final floor, which the White King has not reached. The warrior says that he does not think that a being stronger than the White King or William, the King of Knights, exists. However, he does not rule out the existence of someone who can rival these two. He begins to speculate about what would happen if another, equally unusual, appeared in the world. Then Cramdell's rules will become meaningless, and with that, they will have to accept such a creature. And this is regardless of whether they want it or not, regardless of whether they are an ally or an enemy. At the moment when streams emerge from the portal, no one dares to take their eyes off it. And the creature that crawled out from there asks if they were waiting for him, the one who will become the new great warrior. Isaac doesn't hold back a dismissive sound, but Isabella remains silent. And while the creature continues to brag, the dragon says that this is not the guy. The queen confirms this. Medusa agrees with them, nodding silently, and the monster says that he will gladly become the new pillar. Varhane finds what is happening strange and wonders if there is still an unknown species of monster left. And while the arrogant monster continues to rant, another one emerges from the portal. He talks about the secret of the mist dragon, but Weiss interrupts him, calling him an earthworm. The monster reacts to this with lightning speed, instantly shutting up and asking again in disbelief. And Weiss, in an ominous tone ordering him to get out of his sight, warns him that he will count to 3. However, when the monster remembers him and talks about it, the guy ends his countdown. And while he is amazed at how quickly it has ended, Weiss destroys the mystery of the misty dragon. The creature is so amazed that it asks out loud what it is. The rest of those present also feel the power of this guy, and he himself reminds his interlocutor of the words that he remembered. The system sends Weiss several notifications, and during this time, his power goes wild. Its trail is so strong that some people feel echoes even from afar. The White King notes that he smells something interesting. He speaks of an unknown scent of high status. He says in a drawn-out lazy tone that he is curious about it. and the system informs Weiss that he has completely cleared the Tower of Mysteries. This way, he manages to unlock the legendary Challenger achievement, and his fame increases. Weiss notes that the awards have changed and thinks that now it is impossible to figure out what these awards are. Reading the description of the secret he received, the guy finds it insane because it can destroy others. And while he doesn't see her, but clearly feels her, he decides to wait, instead going outside. The creature still cannot believe that its secret was destroyed, screaming furiously about it. He screams and stutters, choking on his anger, saying that this simply cannot be. The monster continues to rage, saying that he can't believe that Raven revoked his status. And he rushes at Weiss, screaming that he will kill him, but this turns out to be his last move. The guy, glancing at his former opponent, looks at him silently for a while. And then he allows the thought to enter his head that he seems to have a brain. The next moment, the silence that followed the crack of the stone is cut by Varhan's voice. He says that unrest in Cramdol is unacceptable under any circumstances. After all, this is the law established by the White King, and anyone who disobeys him is their enemy. Immediately after this, Varhan turns to Weiss, asking him whether he is an enemy or an ally. The guy, maintaining a direct gaze with dignity, says that everything depends on their actions. Varhan thinks it's quite bold, but Weiss's status can't be ignored. The warrior says out loud that he does not intend to make him an enemy, and asks the boy to follow them. Weiss condescendingly agrees, saying that he would gladly accept their offer. However, he makes a condition that his companions will go with him. Isabella doesn't even hide her emotions, and Isaac is seriously puzzled by the unexpected words. The moment they find themselves in the hall, the blonde does not hold back. He asks how he got involved in this, and Weiss clarifies about the word he gave him. And only then does Isaac remember the words he himself uttered in the heat of the moment in the hot spring. Isabella asks Weiss if he has to meet the White King in person, and is told that he does. The guy says he has no reason not to do this, and besides, he has personal business with him. Meanwhile, Varhan, turning to them, gives a voice, saying that they are there. The monster introduces this place, with reverent pauses between words, as the chambers of the White King. The four great warriors walk forward and, kneeling, greet their master. Our trio still remains standing in the passage, as if expecting some kind of trick. For several long moments the mysterious silhouette remains silent, after which it finally speaks. The king asks if this is the Raven, who reached the very top of the Tower of Secrets. He calls Weiss fragile, but curious, and Weiss addresses him directly, asking about his identity. The guy says he finds this approach quite rude for a first meeting. And even Isabella, who knows Weiss better than anyone else present, feels awkward. The rest are completely stunned by such familiar communication with the White King. The latter speaks up again, as if having noted something for himself, and repeats Weiss's words. And then, changing his tone to ominous, he asks why he should care. Weiss mentally notes that this is definitely the final boss, and is glad that he has hidden traits. Monsters in Pangea can level up just like players, gaining experience by killing others. A level 11 monster is equivalent to a level 10 1-star player. A level 12 monster is equal in strength to a level 10 2-star player. Weiss begins to discuss what level and stars the White King is equal to, and while this is happening, he releases such pressure that even the four great ones feel unwell. There's nothing to even talk about Isabella and Isaac. These two are seriously shy. The monster sitting in front of them not only doesn't change his position, he doesn't even lift a finger to do so. But even nature reacts to its impressive power, provoking an artificial light storm. The system begins sending Weiss numerous notifications about the activation of a wide variety of skills. The guy remembers that this monster is level 15, and he became the absolute ruler of this world. That is why he must be on his guard, because in his current state, he would be torn apart by one breath from the king. Weiss pauses before speaking her next words, and then he asks the White King if he shouldn't show his guests some basic politeness. Isaac is mentally amazed that even in the face of such an aura, this guy does not back down. Varhan thinks that he knew Weiss wasn't simple, but he didn't think that he wouldn't even flinch in front of something like that. The monster wonders if this guy is really as strong as the White King. Finally, the last one speaks up, but the first sound he makes is a grin. And then the White King suddenly bursts into loud and uncontrollable laughter. After this, he calls Weiss a funny guy and says that now he understands why they were interested in him. The guy mentally screams with joy, unable to believe that his idea worked. He recalls that the White King he knew never paid attention to anything that did not interest him. He was a terrible possessive person and always sought to compete with the strong. He was a beast, and this beast lived only by instincts, although he understood that he could have destroyed Cramdol then. William then remarked that this was not his house, and the White King said that he had no manners at all. And then the monster grinned, reaching for his fang to rip it out. Calling William an eccentric, he gave it to him as a reward for not killing his warriors. And right now the White King calls Weiss eccentric and asks him what his name is. The guy involuntarily notes that such treatment can be considered the highest praise. This is good. And then he calls himself Randolph, and the White King thoughtfully repeats his name after him. He thinks that he senses the mystery of this guy, although he does not feel its form. The White King recalls seeing through Medusa's eyes the destruction of the Earth Dragon's secret. The monster mentally notes that his own mystery trembles before the power of this raven. He reflects on the strength figures and admits that he can't suppress the desire to fight him. Noticing that the White King is losing control, Weiss is quick to remind him of the potential consequences of the battle. The monster agrees that he cannot destroy his own lands, and, expressing regret, he asks Weiss about his conquest of the Tower of Mysteries. When the boy waves his hand, the White King asks him to tell him about the test on the hidden floor. Weiss says he won't do it for free, only in exchange for what he's looking for. The White King calls his interlocutor's request trivial, allowing him to search for whatever he needs. Hearing that he considers him one of the great warriors, Weiss denies it, mentally reinforcing the words. The White King assumes that his interlocutor has misunderstood him. The status of a great warrior is not given to a subordinate, it is equal to the status of the White King himself. Weiss begins to reflect on this topic, starting with the fact that each of the four is level 12. He comes to the conclusion that this is only the White King's point of view, and that in fact, the great warriors are his subordinates. And yet, Weiss agrees to the offer, mentally noting that he cannot refuse it. The White King immediately calls the guy eccentric raven and says welcome to him. And then he adds, speaking for the birth of a new support for Cramdell. Despite all these words of the White King, everyone else remains silent. Sometime later, the Snake Queen asks Weiss why he summoned her. The guy responds to his interlocutor respectfully, saying that he is looking for something and asks for her assistance. The girl replies that she doesn't have time for such trifles, but Weiss reminds her of the White King's words. The Snake Queen even becomes curious about what he is looking for, since he is hiding behind the name of the White King. As Weiss begins to voice his answer, he slowly closes the distance between them. And then, getting too close, he says that he is looking for nothing other than her in these lands. Weiss tells his interlocutor that he likes her, and she is at a loss. Isabella and Isaac, who are watching this scene, react accordingly. A sudden stupor gives way to other emotions, and the girl begins to speak hesitantly. She asks Weiss not to tell her that he joined the Great Warriors only because of her. The guy cuts off the Snake Queen's fiery tirade by asking what kind of nonsense she's talking about. And then he explains that he heard that she values art highly, and this surprises the girl. Weiss says he heard that the Serpent Queen's shrine is filled with works of art, and he remembers what happened shortly before he left the Knight's Garden. Father Andrew asked Weiss about giving him an indulgence. He confirmed this, and then the priest asked about the reason for this. The guy answered veiledly. The man said that as much as he would like to do so, the rules do not allow him to hand it over so easily. Weiss was convinced of his own thoughts, finally realizing that this was only a reward for the quest. Then he said that he was not asking for an indulgence for nothing, and that he had a proposal. Weiss offered to return the priest's beloved daughter in exchange for a letter of commendation. The guy remembered that, at Andrew's request, when he played as Wilhelm, he cleared Andasar. However, once she had converted, she was no longer able to fully return to a human body. What was worse was that her body was stolen, taking his beloved daughter away from her father once again. Later, when Wilhelm arrived at Cramdell, he learned that the Snake Queen was involved. Weiss told the priest that he knew where Andasar's body was now, and he promised to return it, but only in exchange for an indulgence, as was said earlier. However, he needed 2 letters, one his as a reward, and the second for Andasar. Now Weiss says that he really wants to see the Queen's works, and asks to be invited to the sanctuary. The girl starts to speak with restraint, but then breaks down, saying that she would be happy to do it. Sometime later, they find themselves near her castle, which is located in the vicinity of Cramdell. As soon as the company reaches the gate, the Queen of Snakes comes to life again. She warmly invites Weiss inside, saying that a monster who appreciates art is always a welcome guest. Isaac notes that in one day, he had an experience he never wanted to have. Isabella advises him to get used to it, and the guy is surprised by her calmness, while the girl responds proudly. She notes that she has served Stargazer the longest, and asks Isaac to remember that she is the second oldest. Hearing words about some Hudson, who is the third, the blonde asks who he is anyway. She doesn't answer, and then he thinks that he thought the Queen of Snakes was a madman who turned the city into ruins. Since Isaac doesn't feel any particular hostility from this girl, he's ready to dismiss everything as rumors. When they go inside, the Snake Queen says that this is her sanctuary. What appears before the company sends shivers down the spines of those unprepared. Surreal sculptures, so lifelike, are replaced by almost full-fledged people. But this is only a facade, and upon closer inspection, you realize that you were wrong. The Snake Queen asks Weiss for his opinion, and says that she is very proud of these works. Unable to bear it any longer, the girl turns around, asking her interlocutor to share his impressions with her. Isabella and Isaac experience similar feelings and, accordingly, share common thoughts. The guy can't control his emotions, so he asks out loud what it is. He calls this hobby disgusting, and the Snake Queen doesn't even let him finish. She asks Isaac about his intention to insult her art, and he says that it is not so. He desperately asks for forgiveness, saying that he never even thought of anything like that. The queen is not deterred by words about strife, and the girl reminds that she is equal in status to the White King. The warrior continues speaking, but Weiss interrupts her, saying that ordinary people cannot understand beauty. He says he felt an overwhelming emotional response to her art. Weiss says it is quite natural that such an ignoramus does not understand this. Hearing the request to present all these works to him personally, the girl cannot believe her happiness. She asks the guy to wait, saying that she will show him everything right now. And only when the Snake Queen has moved a sufficient distance away does Isaac allow himself to relax. The girl imagines this sculpture as skin made from the people who invaded Cramdell. Weiss expresses his admiration, while the girl talks about what she wants to show him next. However, the guy asks her to wait, asking what it is. The Snake Queen says it's not finished yet, but Weiss still asks to take a look. Realizing that this opportunity is rare, the girl agrees immediately. The Serpent Queen says that this is the body of an ancient lich, which she acquired by accident. And as she continues to tell her story, Weiss realizes that he has finally found Andasar. The girl says that she cannot finish the work yet, because the material does not stabilize. In response to Weiss's question, she replies that only a completely purified body can be converted into art. Saying that for some reason this does not bring her out of her state of madness, the girl decides to demonstrate it. As soon as she tries to work on it even a little, the energy gets out of control. The Snake Queen says that this is precisely why this body is not yet within her power. Weiss asks if he can take the body, then if she doesn't intend to use it. The girl agrees to this if the guy can cope with this corpse. Weiss expresses gratitude to the Snake Queen for parting with him so easily. He thinks about the reason why the Serpent Queen was unable to stabilize Andasar's body. The guy thinks that most likely it is because this girl exists between two forms. Weiss suggests that the problem may be the oppression trait, which arose due to the Lich's atrocities. In this case, any person falls into madness, and various penalties are imposed on the character. In other words, the madness effect can only be removed by lowering her oppression stat. Thinking about how this is done, Weiss whispers absolution for Andasar's sins. After all, the oppression indicator can only be lowered with the help of a letter of absolution. The Snake Queen mentally admires Weiss because he managed to exceed her expectations. The girl suggests that he may be not just an art connoisseur, but also a master himself. Following the path of corpse art, the Snake Queen was always alone. The reason for this was that it was very deep and only a few could understand it. Ordinary connoisseurs did not share either the girl's torment or the joy of her creation. The girl is silent for a long time before speaking up and calling for the corpse crow. And then she asks him, barely containing her emotions, where he has been all this time. A month has passed since the monster invasion of Earth, and because of this, an online organization has emerged. Renowned Dimension warriors themselves came there to answer messages and questions, and provide detailed guides on how to deal with future threats and monsters. As a result, things have gotten to the point where countries around the world now recommend this community. In the face of fear, information from there became the only hope and an absolute guide to action. And the owner of this community, who practically created the religion, is called the Master. This resulted in the formation of the largest faction among players. Then, using this system, he held negotiations with the heads of the world's leading corporations and politicians. This resourceful man expanded the organization with the support of high-ranking officials. Among players, this man is known as one of the 8 heroes and the god of war. Lightning Emperor Darkstar asks about Gracia, clarifying that he did not come to the meeting again. His colleague, the 9-tailed fox Black Demon, remarks that they didn't come here out of boredom. Corpse Queen Banshee asks those who have spoken out to ignore this, as this is not the first time. Lucifer, however, says that Randolph, the man who turned the main rating upside down, is much more important. Maxime is also one of the 8 heroes, and he asks if they will continue to turn a blind eye to this. The Master says that sooner or later he will have to be dealt with, but not now. After all, first of all, they need to prepare for the invasion that will begin very soon. It will be full-scale and great, and will begin the moment the rift opens. And at that moment, all people will understand that neither the police nor the army can protect them. But at the same time, they are well aware that only they, the players, can save them. And then they will have to obey not corporations and governments, but them, the players. Meanwhile, the Snake Queen asks Weiss to tell her what kind of magic he used. The guy mentally assumes that, unlike people, monsters do not know about the state of madness. He says asking about techniques is taboo among art masters, but he will think about it. And while the Snake Queen expresses hope that he will agree, Weiss says that he will take the job. He wonders in his mind where the head went, because he wants to return Andasar to his father intact. And then Weiss asks the Snake Queen about it openly, but she says that she herself does not know. He asks what she means, and the girl replies that when she found the body, the head was already gone. She searched for the same energy to find it, but despite her efforts, she was unable to do so. Weiss is surprised by this, and in response the girl says that usually in Cramdell there is no one capable of suppressing them, except for the Guardians of the Stars, with whom the White King has a non-aggression pact. Weiss clarifies whether these are the guys who usually never leave their territory. The Snake Queen says she doesn't know the specific details, but it seems there's a hot spring involved. However, due to the arcana, they seem to be unable to even get close to the star and are simply wasting time. Be that as it may, the city's dungeons are occupied by these very same guardians of the stars, which the king does not like. But at the same time, he endures, and this means only one thing, that this agreement is no joke. Weiss asks, but isn't it a simple task? And the Snake Queen doesn't understand, clarifying. The guy explains that he can solve this problem by simply clearing all the dungeons. The Snake Queen thinks about this seriously and begins to slowly voice her thoughts. And Weiss asks her to tell the White King that he will remove the uninvited guests in Cramdale himself. He begins to implement his plan the very next day, heading into the first dungeon. Even standing on Drama's head, Isaac can't believe it's really him. But he is just as concerned about whether Weiss will be able to get rid of this arcana. The guy wonders if this corpse crow is really capable of such a thing. The giant standing in front of them asks Drama if he can answer for his words. He adds that if it is a lie, then one must be immediately prepared to pay the corresponding price. A few hours ago at the hot spring, Dram said that this was ridiculous. He meant the ability to transform into a monster so perfectly, the snake was impressed by its owner. Drum asked Weiss how he knew he was here, and he said he heard about the gathering of the Star Guardians. However, for the guy now, the reason why they had gathered in this place was much more important. Dram began by saying that there were 32 stars that were parts of the goddess's body. However, this star is believed to belong to Pina, the goddess of the sky. And with the appearance of the star, which was not there before, the Guardians take turns guarding this place. Weiss thinks about this and also mentally notes that Pina was the youngest of the triplets. He recalls that the current continent is the surviving territories raised into the sky by Pina. The guy remembers that initially the earth was corroded by the abyss, and underneath it was a world of demons. He asks Drama that if the goddess Pina became a star, then she is also dead. And the snake replies that the guardians of the stars have gathered precisely to confirm this, but it is not easy. The difficulty is caused by the unique rank arcana located in this place, and Weiss volunteers to help them. Dram begins to laugh at the fact that he is going to destroy Arcana because she is the truth itself. The creature's booming laughter fills the area, but under the gaze of its owner, it gradually weakens. And then the snake understands everything, but still asks Weiss about the seriousness of his intentions. And now, answering an agreement, Dram thinks that it is also difficult for him to believe it, but this guy is not a windbag. The giant asks, saying that even if that were the case, why help them? And Weiss says that it is mutually beneficial. The Guardian expresses understanding on this matter, but there is something that bothers him. And he asks the great warriors why they also came to this place, because he told them not to come closer. But, despite the fact that everyone else is gathered here, the Guardian is interested in the White King's answer. The same one answers for everyone, saying that they want to observe what uninvited guests cannot even dream of. Having finished listening to the provocation, the Guardian calls the White King a crazy hyena. The tension that hangs between them at that moment is almost physically palpable, and Weiss thinks that everything is as he expected, namely, that the mess began from the very first minute. This irritates him, and the guy thinks that he needs to finish everything as quickly as possible and send everyone home. After all, if we leave everything as it is now, they will squabble all night. Therefore, getting straight to the point, Weiss still mentally notes that it is definitely Arcana in front of him. He thinks that if it is she who is blocking the way, then no matter how high her rank, it is not a problem. However, when the system starts sending the guy strange notifications, he wonders what it is. One of the notifications about the main quest, and this is what worries Weiss. But he understands that there is nowhere to retreat, and all that remains is to move forward. The White King notices that Weiss is moving in the right direction before everyone else, and the Guardian turns around at the sound of the arcana cracking at the seams immediately after him. When it finally breaks down, the system sends a notification to its user. She informs Weiss that he has destroyed the first wall, an arcana of unique rank. Thinking that the obstacle has been removed, the guy suddenly notices something that reminds him very much of the star. Wondering if it's really her, he thinks what's left to find out about the main quest. However, Weiss is forced to interrupt her train of thought as a silhouette appears ahead. The guy looks at it, trying to remember who it might belong to. At the same time, the system sends a notification that the rate of disintegration of Pangea is increasing. As Weiss notes that the creature's gaze is directed at him, the system sends out another notification. It concerns the main quest and states that you need to destroy the Rift King. The moment the system signals the start of the mission, Isabella shouts out to Weiss. The Snake Queen also does not stand aside, asking the guy if he is okay. Weiss himself thinks that he was sure that he had finished off this monster during his trip to the demon world. As the boy watches Ahram, the first king of hell, approach, he is amazed. The guardian of the gates of the demonic world himself notes that the arcana of the star, which held them back, has disappeared. And he turns to the dead souls, telling them to prepare for a journey to another dimension. Akram says that once he takes Pina's heart and restores his strength, he will open the rift. The first king of hell speaks with rapture about the end of times having come. Meanwhile, people on Earth are forced to look up to the sky by a huge shadow, and they are perplexed. Starting to become noticeably nervous, they try to understand what is happening and what it is all about. And the master is informed that the decay rate has reached 10% and an assumption is made. The man, starting to get nervous, asks for an order, but his interlocutor says that there is no rush. The master says that no one but the Demon King will appear in the first crack. Their preparations are sufficient. The man says that they will wait calmly until this city drowns in tears of blood. He wants the townspeople to come to them themselves with a plea for salvation, and then he is going to act. The master begins to talk about how the world will soon belong to them, but he is distracted by a sudden notification. The system informs him that the raid on the Demon King has begun and shows the progress. The master can't believe why this is happening because the crack hasn't even opened yet. And while he is trying to understand what is happening, the battle is already in full swing. At this moment, the Demon King is attacked by the Star Guardian, knocking the wind out of him and causing him to stagger back. Akram, pausing to catch his breath, wonders how he could have fallen so easily. Amid the wheezing of his dying minions, the Demon King continues to deny what is happening to him. In Pangaea, there are 3 beings who are considered the strongest: he, the White King, and Wilhelm. However, this only applies to the races of Pangaea, and there is another monster that is not inferior to this trinity. And this is the strongest among the Star Guardians, the evil-slaying giant, and now he is angry at the Demon King. Weiss can't believe that Arcana was actually holding Ahram back, but he's glad for the Guardians, especially one of them, because thanks to them, there was less trouble. Weiss recalls that the evil-slaying giant was responsible for the last Wilhelm star. He thinks that now that he is on their side, he can be relied upon, but he is interrupted. The White King considers what happened a pity because the Star Guardian dealt with it too quickly. He assumes that he will never get to see Weiss's skill here. Realizing that he is being provoked, the guy reminds him that he only promised to help with the destruction of Arcana. Thinking that, despite his appearance, his interlocutor is cunning, he assumes that he did not fall for the bluff. He can't continue his mental reflections. The Demon King lets out a heart-rending laugh. Trying to get up, he calls his opponent damned. The Demon King begins to shout as he talks about how he was following a great plan and it was thwarted. He can't finish the sentence completely. The words are drowned out by a new, sharp sound. The Star Guardian's words trail off as he calls the Demon King a truly annoying bug. And then he orders him, in the same manner, to fall into eternal sleep. Oddly enough, the Demon King is still in his element and he lets out a resigned gasp. And at the same moment, his own voice undergoes changes, echoing in the ears of strangers. Akram recalls how the Lord himself addressed him, expressing his will for him to fulfill. He commanded that the Demon King descend to Earth in another dimension in his place. The Demon Lord added that this would be the first step towards implementing their plan. After this, he named the one whom Ahram was supposed to destroy on foreign soil. And now the man thinks that luck has turned away from him, and he has failed the invasion. However, the Demon King is not going to leave the world so easily. He has an idea. And he, without any intention of delaying, begins to implement it the very next moment. Suspicion creeps into the Star Guardian's mind, and he speaks warily. When a black hole opens above the heads of those present, Ahram's voice sounds again. He says it will be no less valuable to finish off those here who interfere with the plan. The Serpent Queen notes out loud the monstrous concentration of mana around her. Isaac starts screaming, trying to resist and saying that he is being sucked into this funnel. Well, some of them are less lucky, but, already dead, they can't say anything in response. The White King, noting that this is dangerous, wonders if he is about to blow himself up. Seeing how difficult it is for Weiss, he, breaking the space, advises him to retreat. The boy asks about the other Star Guardians, but the White King suggests abandoning them. Weiss mentally notes that everything seems serious, since the White King himself, with his intuition, says so. But he can't abandon the new star in drama, who can't even grab onto anything. The White King asks Weiss why he is hesitating, reminding the boy that there is no time for this. He desperately urges himself to think, convinced that there must be a way out of this situation. And the very next moment Weiss is convinced that this is indeed the case. Memories of the hundreds of rewards that the constellations themselves provided after the 5th quest rush into my thoughts. After all, among them was a treasure that specialized in sealing energy. Thinking that perhaps everything will work out for him, Weiss chooses this very reward. The White King asks him what he has in mind, and the boy reminds him that he wanted to see his skill. Turning his determined gaze to his interlocutor, he says that he will stop this explosion. And the White King, unable to believe his ears, asks again. Weiss immediately rushes away, asking his interlocutor to simply watch, and the guy rushes straight towards the abyss that sucks everything around him in. Seeing this, Dram turns to his master with a shout, asking where he is going, because it is dangerous there. However, Weiss pays no attention to anyone, being captivated by only one goal. By pointing his hand directly into the center of the funnel, the guy activates the necessary artifact. The system reports this the very next moment, and those present try to digest what is happening. Even the Star Guardian is left with a lasting impression. And he, pausing, rhetorically notes that he absorbs this powerful energy. The first Demon King speaks up, confusedly starting to talk about his mana. And everything happens so quickly that he doesn't even notice the hoop that is already so close. The next moment, when the artifact is already squeezing his head, the man asks what it is. And Weiss, concentrating only on his object, says words that make him shrink. Feeling the deformations beginning to occur within his body, the first Demon King becomes puzzled. Awareness comes to him gradually, but with each passing second, he feels more and more uneasy. At this time, Weiss rushes forward and, grabbing the baby, states that he is caught. The system reports that the main quest, destroying the Rift King, has been successfully completed. Those around note out loud that the sky is returning to normal, but their words are still full of disbelief. They can't believe so quickly that it's all over, and the monsters don't appear anymore. The master thinks with annoyance that there was only one step left to the world that would belong to them. He had gathered dozens of warriors in preparation for this day, but it all ended without him even swinging his sword. The moment the ranking table appears before his eyes, Victor thinks that he cannot forgive this. After everything is over, there is perfect silence for a while. And then the Star Guardian still notes with surprise that Weiss blocked the explosion. The White King is thinking too, but about the fact that the guy has reflected something that even he himself could not cope with. He no longer sees any point in doubting it, and notes that it is no longer just curiosity. And while the White King is lost in his thoughts, Weiss's comrades are worried about his condition. He also checks the reward he received, which is the sealed holy grail of the goddess. As Weiss considers asking Father Andrew to open it, a mosquito chirps. A mini version of the first Demon King asks him what he did to him, using foul language. While saying that he will kill him, the man at the same time orders Weiss to return him to his normal appearance. The guy mentally notes how easy it was to seal Akram, although not without helpers. Weiss suggests that it is a sacred relic of a celestial equal, a great sage. But the boy remembers that there is a more pressing matter and asks Akram about Andasar's head. He starts off thoughtfully, but then spits and says that he is not going to answer this question. Then Weiss resorts to an effective technique, commanding the hoop on Akram's head to tighten further. And then the first Demon King says that the girl's head is with him, but the guy must stop. Ahram admits that he kept Andasar's head in case he could turn her into an undead. And Weiss mentally notes that this is quite possible, because the Demon King is the king of the dead. Approaching his companions, the boy asks Isaac to take Andasar's head. Weiss is about to give him another task, but his attention is drawn to the Star Guardian. Noting that the guy managed to deal with the barrier, the giant says that he is in his debt. When the Guardian thanks him, Weiss mentally admits that he never thought he would live to see this. Although the guy understands that if he found out that he was Wilhelm, he would kill him right now, like an idiot. Weiss says out loud that it's nothing, but if the Guardian is truly grateful to him, he wants to take the star. He grins and notes that, unlike that one idiot who lost his star, he is quite useful, and Weiss, perfectly understanding who exactly he means, mentally calls him a bastard. The Star Guardian says that someday he will repay him this debt, but first the star needs to be returned. Weiss also regrets it to himself, thinking that he himself would not mind taking her, but one cannot make such an enemy. And while he is thinking, the Star Guardian is already next to the star. At some point, her light becomes very bright, and this turns out to be a trigger. The radiance emanating from the star twists into a thin thread and quickly rushes off somewhere. Literally a moment later, it turns out that the target she has chosen for herself is one of the Trinity, and only Weiss understands what is happening because the star chose him. The guy understands this because the very next moment a memory flashes before his eyes. It's about what happened during the fight with the Demon Lord when Weiss pierced him. However, as soon as the fragments he already knew flashed before his eyes, others appeared. Weiss remembers how after this, he fell somewhere for a long time, feeling something unpleasant on his back. And when it seemed to him that everything was over, he heard a pleasant female voice. The goddess said that she could not even imagine that he would grow so much even without divine power. She said that if his physical body was captured, the destruction could cause everything to collapse. And this concerned not only this world, but also all the changes associated with it. And so the goddess, calling him a being from beyond the dimension, began to pray to Weiss. She said that all she could do now was buy back a fleeting moment in exchange for her life. After saying the words about what she was praying for, the goddess paused. And then she expressed a wish that Weiss could return to this world again. After this, there are more memories and words of the Demon King, which the guy already knows. The goddess's last words were a discussion of the reasons for which people return to this world. She thought about someone doing this for their own desires, or for the sake of bonds. There are also those who return to Pangaea for their own purposes, each one has their own. But she expressed hope that Weiss will remain someone who loves this world with all his heart. With the Demon Lord's final cry, the boy comes to his senses under the worried gazes of his comrades. Unable to believe what just happened, Weiss assumes that it was Pina's memories. And the next moment the voice of the Star Guardian reaches his ears, saying that he is chosen. The giant says that the Star of Pina did this, which means that the goddess chose him. The Star Guardian starts talking about goddesses and family, and the White King calls it complete nonsense. Addressing the giant in an ominous tone, he warns him not to try to deceive them. The Star Guardian doesn't like this tone and asks his opponent to repeat his words. The giant says that the moment Star acknowledged Weiss, he became one of them, and someone like the White King has no power to revoke a right granted by one of the triple goddesses. The White King says that it doesn't matter, and what matters now is that he has sincerely decided what he wants. Isaac asks if it's time for them to get out of this place. Isabella notes the complicated situation. Weiss hears a familiar female voice addressed to them, speaking about the 5 great warriors. The Snake Queen asks him what he is doing there, since he should be with them, and calls him to her. On the other side, a familiar voice is heard, but it belongs to Dram. Calling him master, the snake quickly corrects himself, inviting Weiss to join him and saying that he is safer around him. The giant asks the White King if he really doesn't care if his house collapses, and he resorts to threats. Weiss says they put on a whole show and asks why they decide everything for him. The White King points out that he has already agreed to become one of the great warriors, but the boy retorts. The Star Guardian says that being a guardian is destiny, but Weiss has something to say to him too. The guy starts talking about what needs to be done if they want to get him for themselves. After a short pause, the guy advises them to prove whose side is more beneficial to him. Somewhere in the building, the White King's voice can be heard, sarcastically saying that he finds it funny. He says he can't believe Weiss is haggling over the main pillar spot. The guy pauses for a long time before answering, and then he says that if this arrangement does not suit him, he will go, but the White King denies it. He says that's not what he meant, and asks Weiss if he's happy with the Star Guardian's offer. Saying that it was bearable, the guy recalls that they decided to grant him the title. Weiss liked this, because it would be much easier for him to get information about the stars. The White King considers this a pitiful reward, and says that he is not like these misers. He says that if Weiss joins him, he will give him the city, wherever it is. However, there are some exceptions, one of which is, for example, Cramdell. But Weiss is impressed by this proposal, and he begins to think about it in his mind. The guy thinks that even though the Black King lost to the White King, he still rules the South. He remembers that, apart from these two, there is no force that can hold back the onslaught of those monsters. And in any city except 2, Weiss will be able to use the power of these very monsters. The guy considers these conditions exceptional, but decides to look at it from a different perspective. Weiss thinks that the White King considers him so dangerous that he will never give him to anyone else. Weiss thinks that the negotiations are over at this point, because if they continue to drag things out, trust will be lost. And then he speaks up, telling the White King that he accepts his offer. Starting to laugh contentedly, he says that Weiss made the right choice. Now he is the main pillar. But with the Star Guardians, everything will be different now. The giant says that he will regret this decision. The Serpent Queen finally handed Andasar's body over to Weiss, and they quickly made preparations for his return. The guy says that he feels uncomfortable that the White King himself came out to see him off, but he just waves his hand. Saying it's a mere trifle, the White King expresses his hope that Weiss will return here as soon as possible. He confirms this, and the system sends Weiss a notification that he has received the White King's recognition. When the guy says goodbye to everyone, the system creates a new travel point for him at that location. Well, after this, there is a movement to the specified point, which is the Knight's Garden. Isaac is finally convinced that Weiss is human, and he says that this does not change anything. Isabella asks the guy where he put that person, and he clarifies who exactly the girl is asking about. Weiss says he put it away for a while, because it was getting too loud, and then the guy adds that he decided to carry it with him as long as he still needs it. Weiss notes that while they were talking, they managed to get where they needed to go. And he notes out loud, more for Isaac, that in front of them is a place called the Knight's Garden. At first they walk in silence, but then Isabella speaks up. The girl feels that the atmosphere in this city has become even worse than it was before. But she doesn't understand why this is so, because Hudson worked hard to rebuild the city. Isaac suddenly freezes in his tracks, unexpectedly finding the reason for such a gloomy situation. But he is not the only one who sees this, and an oppressive silence falls between the companions again. Weiss's gaze is involuntarily drawn to the hanged man, who seems familiar, and indeed, he remembers it, and this makes his eyes open even wider. After all, this man was none other than the very same knight with whom they had once fought. And now, for some unknown reason and for an unknown length of time, he is rotting in this place. Another memory flashes in Weiss's head against his will, and his gaze unmistakably finds the woman who figured in it. Weiss couldn't help but remember the moment when she and Isabella left this city, and now the once majestic monolith lies in ruins amidst destruction. Isabella turns to Weiss and can't keep her voice steady as she asks what it is. The boy turns to the priest, trying to keep his voice calm and asking what happened. He expresses joy, but it doesn't last long. Andrew says that it's impossible to stay here. The man starts talking about what will happen if people notice Weiss, but he interrupts him. The boy asks the priest again about what happened in this city. Andrew says he was attacked by Kaiser mercenaries led by Maxime, one of the 8 heroes. The man says that the Marquis has accumulated a lot of debt, especially from the Duke of Siena, and Maximus has appeared. He said he would take the property if they couldn't pay, but Hudson promised to pay the debt. However, Maxim only grinned at the time, which raised questions. The Marquis asked him what all this meant, since they had promised to return his money, but he grinned sarcastically. Maxim said that the Duke lent the money to Weiser, not to the merchant, and these are completely different things. This outraged Hudson, and the Marquis realized that from the very beginning, these people's target was his lands. And then the man flared up, ordering Maxim to get his dirty ass out of there. He said it was a monument to the heroes who gave their lives to protect their families, friends, and others. Therefore, it cannot be touched so disrespectfully and by just anyone. Maxime repeated the words after the Marquis, savoring each syllable, and asked if there were really that many of them. He said that, as far as he knew, there were no other heroes besides the 8 of them. Andrew says he was in the hospital at the time, and by the time he heard about it, the fight was already over. Although all the knights and residents rushed into battle, they were powerless against Maximus and his mercenaries. After this, they say, an even greater massacre was avoided only thanks to Hudson. He asked Maxime to stop, promising to pay every last coin if it was about money. And he did not mean the money that the Marquis owed the Duke, but the bribe to Maxime. Kaiser's captain remained silent, listening attentively to Hudson's offer that he would get any amount. And then he said, why should he wait for it to happen if he could take it all here and now? Maxime mocked the man, reveling in his superiority and saying that he would hardly be able to stand it. When Hudson uttered the first sound, he asked him if he was now ready to give him the money he had promised. Maxime began to ask the man a question, but he said that he seemed to have been misunderstood. Hudson said he was a merchant and paid for the deal, but he would rather die than give up his money for nothing. And he continued to stall for time, remembering Weiss's words that the Serengeti could not be given to the Duke of Siena. And with unprecedented determination, Hudson declared that for 30 days, no one would dare touch anyone. Now Andrew's father turns to Weiss with a request to tell him something. He is torn by curiosity about whether these people are truly heroes who have dedicated themselves to humanity. At first, Weiss doesn't even know what to say, because what he just heard makes him angry. In this situation, the guy resorts to the only right decision now. He activates the hidden trait, Heart of the Iron-Blooded Lord, which allows him to retain his wrath. One of the men admits to his interlocutor that he is bored to death. The second one says that at this rate, they will be stuck here for a whole month because of their captain. But nothing can be done. Orders are orders, and who knows, maybe they'll get some of the reward later. The man is about to add something else, but stops short, noticing the stranger. Looking at him more closely, he tells him to stop and asks who he is. His partner assumes that this crazy guy is not from the city because no local would stick his nose so close. They call Weiss a puppy, and saying that he was asked a question, they ask again what he is doing here. The guy speaks up only to ask in response where Maxim is now. The man supposes that he is tired of living, since he dares to call their captain so frivolously. Weiss does not waste time or hesitate, taking advantage of the moment of surprise. Amid the choking sounds of his partner, the man tries to pull himself together. As he begins to speak, he stops short, but still asks Weiss if he understands who they are. He also warns that he will ask him one last time about where Maxim is now. Sometime later, news of Weiss's invasion becomes known, and the running begins. One of the mercenaries informs the others that they have been attacked, killing the guards. Another one gives the order for everyone to go upstairs immediately, as the intruder is on the first floor. When Weiss is discovered, they start shouting, daring each other to kill him. In response to this, he himself remains silent and calm, only drawing his sword. At that moment, the person who shouted first falls silent forever, and Weiss, overcoming his body, is already rushing to his next victim. He fights mercilessly, remembering the atrocities committed by mercenaries in this city. And not only weapons are used, but also fists. The guy uses what is most convenient. The mercenaries, however, continue to arrive, no longer hesitating to pounce on the enemy in their entire mighty throng. However, with each new wave, their number becomes several times smaller. And finally, the moment comes when the last sound is heard in the hall. Weiss, stepping over mountains of mercenary corpses, calmly sets off in search of Maxim. And although he doesn't utter a sound, he doesn't try to hide his presence in any way. The second-floor staircase greets him with emptiness, and he encounters no opponent along the way. And even walking through the corridors, the guy still remains untouched. And yet this does not mean that he is alone. Several opponents are waiting for him at once, biding their time. And here it comes, because Weiss is taking on her potential killer. And he already swings, intending to deliver one sure blow, but does not have time. Weiss is faster than lightning, drawing her own sword and counter-attacking. But while the guy is busy with the first, the second one appears, intending to take advantage of the moment. Weiss uses everything he can, and someone else's axe falls into his hands. And then the guy mercilessly finishes his attack with one beautiful blow. The third mercenary, seeing what happened to his predecessors, squeals, noticeably losing motivation. Not knowing what to do, the man turns to Weiss in a trembling voice, asking him to spare him. However, taking advantage of the pause that has arisen, the mercenary shouts, calling for help from his captain. His last words before he gave up his spirit were a request to be saved. Maxim appears next, as do his henchmen, wanting to attack from behind. However, despite the element of surprise, Weiss manages to avoid his blow. The next moment, Maxim performs a twisting maneuver, putting into it not only strength, but also dexterity. But Weiss proves to be more resourceful and dexterous, grabbing the enemy by the clothes. The guy wants to ask his opponent a lot of questions, but his priorities are set. And Weiss throws Maxim to the floor with all his strength, knocking the air out of his lungs. Because of this, the man is forced to choke, unable to take a normal breath. Weiss mercilessly and lightning fast brings the sword closer to his opponent. Blinded by his rage, the boy never allows the man to breathe. He presses the blade down hard, pushing it into the surface to finish it off for sure. And his opponent suddenly gasps theatrically and notes out loud that he almost died. And while Weiss is surprised by this, Maxim activates hidden trait, Demon Worshipper, Demon Heart. The guy doesn't have time to digest everything yet, when suddenly an unknown force pushes him somewhere. Something that burst out of Maxim holds Weiss tightly and throws him aside at great speed. However, it doesn't just throw the guy, sending him into a free fall, but presses him down with itself, intensifying the impact. And Maxim, remembering how desperately Hudson was stalling for time, is convinced that he had a plan. The man smugly proclaims that it was Weiss's plan all along. Maxim repeats the words about Hudson's backup plan, and then his opponent speaks up. Weiss asks what the reason is, and his interlocutor does not understand what he is talking about. The guy says that if Maxim wanted money, he could have just quietly left, and it's the same with the territory. Weiss is interested in the reason why the mercenary slaughtered and desecrated the inhabitants of these lands. He says that there is none, because he does not need a reason to kill the weak. Although there is still an explanation, he didn't like the fact that the weaklings put themselves on the same level with them. Weiss advises Maxim not to throw around the word hero so easily, because he himself is a coward who fled in the face of danger. The man feels confused because outsiders could not know about this. However, a guess comes to his mind, and Maxim asks Weiss if he is really a phantom. The man, saying that he felt that Randolph was himself, is convinced of his suspicions. The system notifies you about the use of the level assessment skill and immediately begins its analysis. Maxim says that it seemed to him that Weiss would hide somewhere and drag out time, gaining strength. However, the guy found it himself, having become too proud due to the intoxication of his former glory. While delivering his blow, Maxim says that Weiss has become such a weakling. Rushing forward, the man is about to name the price of his opponent's pride, and the moment he voices that she is equal to his life, a blow occurs. At first, the man tries to understand what just happened. Well, the next moment Weiss asks him if he has finished speaking. Unable to believe his eyes or ears, Maxim remains dumbly silent while his opponent speaks up again. Weiss says he should have quietly taken the money and left, or at least left people alone. Because now, due to the stupidity of their captain, the mercenaries of the Kaiser group will be wiped off the face of the earth. Calling these words loud, Maxim asks Weiss if he is sure of this, and then talks about Weiser. The guy finds out that the Marquis and the others are in the dungeon, and in response to the provocation, he responds stoically. Weiss denies the possibility of these people dying, saying it will not happen. The reason he gives is that he sent his reliable people there. Weiss then activates Star Pierce, gaining energy support for over a minute. Feeling such a sudden change in environment, Maxim is a little taken aback. And Weiss speaks up again, telling the man what will happen to him this time. He says that this time Maxim will not be able to escape, just like last time. At the very beginning, Maxim was a very ordinary person, not outstanding, but not flawed either, average. He was simply born, worked some more, and worked even more and harder. The man thought about what would happen if he suddenly died one day and disappeared from the face of the earth. He thought that this was only in real life, but in the game everything remained stable. And then one day, at one wonderful moment, Maxim became a Pangea player. Then he was taken aback, not knowing how to behave and wondering what it all meant. After all, an ordinary person like him would never be able to fight in a life-or-death battle. He couldn't complete any of the quests and was hiding in an alien world, unable to log out of the system. And at that very moment, those strange creatures appeared, causing fear in Maxim. Later he realized that they were demons, a race that exists in the world of Pangea. Then the system offered him to change his class to Demon Worshipper. This class was not available to everyone. And that day, Maxim seized this opportunity and became special. He remembers the day when a man came to him, first asking about his identity. It was Wilhelm, and he said he wanted to recruit Maxim for the upcoming Great March to the Demon World. The man noted that for that amount of money he could hire about 20 mercenaries, but he didn't need any more. Maxim began to hesitate, and then Wilhelm said out loud that this entire fee was only for him alone. He believed that filling the number with mediocre people was just a waste of supplies. And then Maxim was glad that he was recognized by the strongest person on the server. But there was also something that puzzled him. The man was tense at the thought of what would happen after defeating the Demon King. He wondered if he could remain a player, or if he would have to return to the past again. Maxim didn't want this, and now, in response to Weiss's words about escape, he repeats them after him. He says he has no intention of running away from the weakened bastard he's become. And the man rushes at his opponent with all his might, wanting to prove his superiority. There are milliseconds left before the collision, and neither of them is going to retreat. And the very next moment, you can hear the sound of glass breaking into hundreds of pieces. This hits Weiss, who is unprepared for this, and he is forced to change his strategy. The guy jumps back, wanting to increase the distance between himself and the enemy in order to recover. Maxim tells his opponent to know his place, and then tendrils emerge from his body and lazily move towards Weiss. But this is a deceptive move, since in the very next moment, their speed increases many times over. While this is happening, the guy feverishly runs through the possible options in his head, and the first thing he does after that is equip the extreme iron sword. Not allowing a single shoot to get close to him, the guy begins to chop them down left and right. Immediately after this, during the pause, Weiss equips the Hermes sandals and the Michaela armor. Completing his look, the helmet allows him to activate a new type of effect, Skyborn Dragon. But Weiss doesn't stop there, he also activates Swiftness. Maxim is taken aback by such pressure, but he can't do anything about it, his opponent is too fast. But despite this, the Kaiser's captain is not going to retreat, intending to strike his opponent. This can't be done, since Weiss, thanks to Swiftness, is now more agile. This doesn't stop Maxim, he rushes at his opponent again, still trying to reach him. And in vain, nothing works out for him again, which cannot be said about Weiss himself. And yet Maxim, calling the guy an idiot, says that such blows will not work on him. Weiss reacts to the next movement with lightning speed, directing her gaze towards the anomaly. Maxim uses some new technique, and now the guy can only try to defend himself from it. Captain Kaiser's tentacles undergo changes, becoming more agile, and at the same time, they increase much more rapidly in number and size. Seeing all this even from the outside, Isaac begins to stutter when he asks what it is. Isabella can't say anything back to him because she's much more worried about the Stargazer right now. If they were to get inside now, they would be horrified by the sight that appeared before them. However, the one who runs out of steam first is Maxim. He calls Weiss a crazy bastard. The mercenary can't believe that this guy managed to fight off all his attacks. Beginning to analyze Maxim's attacks out loud, Weiss asks if he really thought it would work on him. The mercenary tells him to shut up and says that he dodged his attacks like a fly. Weiss says he wasn't sure he could finish because he didn't expect such a low level of skill. And then he clarifies with his opponent that he has never fought an opponent of equal skill. Weiss is confident that with such blows, it will not be possible to touch either Gracia or the master with even a finger. And then Maxim loses his temper, ordering his opponent to stop pretending to be someone he knows not who. Just when he says that he will not lose to either them or Weiss, the latter interrupts him. He himself speaks up, provocatively declaring that Maxim is weak. And the very next moment, something interesting follows these quick and cutting blows. Thanks to his skillful attacks, Weiss manages to shrink Maxim down to a tiny size. At first he doesn't even understand what just happened, even though he tries very hard. Meanwhile, Weiss notes in an ominous tone that he managed to find the demonic heart. Maxim is feverishly thinking about how he urgently needs to restore his demonic body. However, it is too late for this, and Weiss asks his opponent a question. He asks Maxim if this is all he got by selling his body to the demon. Just then, Weiss's skill ends, and the mercenary asks him to wait. He says he gives up and apologizes about the long march, adding that it was all because of the fear of losing his power. When Weiss hears the man's next words, his ex's words involuntarily come to mind. And yet he says that Maxim crossed the line beyond which there is no forgiveness. He killed too many. The man doesn't give up, saying that all these so-called people are not even players, but non-player characters. To these words, Weiss says that they are all the same. They all experienced similar feelings. Remembering the people who were killed, the guy says that they felt the same pain as they did, and they mourned the fallen just as real people do. Weiss says that he and Maxim, as players drawn into this world, know this firsthand. And speaking of the fact that they are no longer just NPCs, the guy says that it is time to pay for their sins. Maxim tries to wriggle out of it, praying, because if the demonic heart is destroyed, his abilities will disappear. And, remembering his past life, the man screams, saying that he does not want to become a bug again. However, Weiss is merciless and serious, because such things cannot be joked about. Maxim's demonic eye opens wide with a final broken scream. Well, Weiss, by killing him, gets the Demon Hunter achievement and a shard of the broken golden scale. Due to the Eternal Randolph Arcana, hidden trait, Iron-Blooded Lord's Heart evolves into Eternal.